helping starting to set up. I published it today, so this is the Canvas page. We're going to start off doing entrepreneurship versus small business. Then we get into planning. Then we get into feasibility studies. That's going to be your first big assignment for me. And then week 4, we'll get into research. That's what I have up there so far. So if that's something you're interested in and you want to contact me, by all means do. And if not, well, there it is up there for you. The Canvas page is up there if you want to check it out. And that's going to be my spiel for now. I'm going to take the stop share off, and we'll go around the round table to the rest of us. I guess when we're done introducing ourselves, again, you guys can throw some questions at us, and whatever it is you want to ask, we'll field them. So I guess we'll go with Shirley next, since
Oh, okay.
you're next in my Brady Bunch square.
All right. My name is Shirley Montaigne. I've been teaching at CCB since 1994. I primarily teach accounting courses. Right now, I'm teaching intermediate accounting. No, I'm teaching taxation, sorry. And next semester, I'll teach financial accounting, which is the introduction course to accounting and requirement for business courses. I've been working as a finance person, cost accounting, budget in healthcare for 31 years, and I retired about 5 years ago from that. But as one friend said, I didn't retire, I just changed jobs. And currently, I'm working part time for a small, working for a small local accounting firm in White River. We do part time, we do taxes, accounting, consultation, bookkeeping, etc. So, with that teaching, I'm also trustee of our library for 10 years. I'm currently president and treasurer. It's sometimes hard to find people to step up to different positions. So I've gotten to know the nonprofit side pretty well. But I thoroughly enjoy Community College Vermont. It's changed a lot, but it's always been extremely supportive of instructors and of students. So,
All right. And Rick, I guess you're up next.
Great, George. I'm Rick Aaron, and my background is in the business world. I've had basically three careers in my life. First career was in corporate business, where I was in management and executive positions in Fortune 100 and Fortune 500 companies. And then I went from that into being an entrepreneur, and I started three businesses of my own. Um, One business that I started was a data processing company where we process the data from telecommunications switches, from satellite switches, from cable companies, and produce the bills and sent them out for our clients. Another company that I started during that same period was a property management company. And we built an 18,000 square foot building in the Denver Tech Center in Denver, Colorado. And in that building, on the first floor, I housed my three companies. On the second floor, it was a multi-tenant office building, and we managed that company. And the third business I started and ran at the same time was a publishing company, and we published business books and self-help books in those genres. From there, I decided to retire, came to Vermont, and started working for CCV because I like Shirley, I can't retire. There's no way. So in 2012, I started at CCV, and I've, I've taught 7 different business courses, mostly in the management area. I've taught 2 computer science classes in macroeconomics. This semester, I'm teaching Intro to Business and Business Analysis and Decision Making, which is the capstone class for the business degree. Next semester, I'm teaching Intro to Business, and we're talking about using. We're talking about a new modality of teaching also that I might be able to teach. I've taught classes on ground. I've taught classes synchronously using Zoom. I've online synchronously. I've taught online classes. I've taught telepresence classes. So I've taught on almost every modality that CCB offers, and we're trying to develop a new one now. So
CCV. And now I'm sort of moving into applied math concepts. I'm scheduled for a course in Middlebury. If you're in the Middlebury area, please sign up. And then I have a course scheduled for Rutland next semester. And I see in that course, Applied Math Concepts, we have like 9 essential objectives, and why we have 15 classes to accomplish those objectives. So, of course, I tend to put a little bit more than the essential objectives in. But my background, again, it's not in business. I have deep blue-collar root. I worked on the flat factory floor for a number of years, and I kind of tarried there too long. And and the union, it was a union shop, and the union literature kept saying manufacturing is going to drop to 3 or 4% of the workforce, just like farming. So I believed them. I paid attention to that, and I went to school and got a teaching license.
Oh, hold on.
And actually, I started that second academic career
Hello?
at CCV in Brattleboro so many years ago. And I wrote a proposal. I found the company. The company would pay for courses. So I wrote up a proposal, and they paid for 2 courses at Community College of Vermont in Brattleboro. But my brother kept telling me, he said, you're never going to escape. You're never going to escape that blue-collar world. You're stuck there for the rest of your life. Well, I fooled him. Okay, I started at community college, and I got into Norwich University graduate program, and now here I am an instructor at CCV. So that's my background, and I understand the hardships of going to school and raising a family and trying to earn money to keep body and soul together. And I'm committed to helping any student who wants to take that path. I am committed to helping them take that path. So that's what I have to say.
All right, that was terrific. Thank you very much. So now we had a little chance to go around. You know who we are a little bit. That was that was excellent, Andrew. I agree with you. I see that a lot from the students. You have a very similar background, I think, from a lot of our students here, and you know, that's a very noble path to go along. So, any of you guys want to ask questions? This is your shot. Ask any of us anything. You can ask live by speaking, or you can put it in the chat, and I will read it out. Go ahead, Rebecca. Your shot. Go for it.
I have a question. I have a family-owned business here in Burlington, but the thing is, doesn't matter if I put signs. I've been open since June, and I've been going with my head cut off because um, it used to be Turning Point, but now it's my place called Thompson's Lounge. It's a restaurant, entertainment lounge, and a place to have fun because there's really nothing in Burlington. So I want to know from what can I do to what classes, because I'm new to CCV. I want to know which class. I don't know my advisor, but I want to know how to get more people, more customers, because I'm foot traffic right there next to Phoenix Books in Burlington. I want to know, how do I get more foot traffic to come to my business? I work in a business professional.
That sounds like yours, George.
I was going to say that's either a marketing or an entrepreneur, small business question. So maybe I'll jump in and take it. What kind of business do you have again? It's
a restaurant, entertainment lounge. So it's like there's TVs in there for sports room, NFL, baseball, soccer, name all the sports.
So it's a sports bar.
No, it's not a bar. It's one side. It's 4,000 square feet. One place is a restaurant. The second part is the entertainment. And then the third room is like the sports room, the cooking area, different events like music, dancing, and different events, 80s night, 90s night, 70s night, a snack bar, and BYOB, that means bring your own beer or liquor. So that's what the establishment is.
Well, that sounds like you got a lot of space there and a lot of opportunity for foot traffic
Yeah,
coming by.
the hard thing is I've been through the city of public works so much. They tell you one thing, tell you another. They tell you that you have to have a push bar on the door instead of the regular um, thing. But the thing is, that's not my responsibility because that used to be Turning Point. But now, since it's my business, I guess because the place that it used to be did some stuff to the building, so now I gotta figure out what can I do as soon as I put the push bar on the door, how to get more customers to come through, so I can make money because my rent monthly is $5,000 a month.
Well, if you want to get more foot traffic to come through, that's easy. You're going to put your promotional message right there on the street. You don't have to worry about a medium. You don't have to worry about radio advertising, things like that. Signage is obviously going to be important. It looks like there's a large sports element to what you do with the big screen TVs and stuff like that. So when
There's
you get a big
TV, food, it's basically eat and have fun.
so when you get a big sporting event, right? That's something that you really want to promote right there on the street level. Also,
Yes, I
too,
do have signs up, but the thing is, a lot of people been ignoring it because I've been having problems. I tried to put my business out on social media, and the thing is, with that, I don't believe it anymore because there's this one person going around saying stuff about our business when they've never been to our establishment, and so that's it. People see our signs, I guess, because it's new. People are not seeing it even with the advertisement. So what?
that's the thing you do with social media. Social media is very difficult with restaurants because you always get the restaurateurs themselves will give their competition bad reviews and things like that.
Yeah, and they never been
Nothing
to
works.
it.
Nothing works better than that with word of mouth. Let me ask you: when you go to a restaurant, what gets you to go to a restaurant? An advertisement you saw for one, a social networking review, or a friend or family member who says, "Hey, I just went to this restaurant. You got to check it out. It's really good." Doesn't the word of mouth go farther than any of those other media, right? So you need to generate word of mouth. You need to start to get a core group of regulars in there that can go out and talk about you and talk you up a little bit. And that can be done at the street level very easily with signage, outdoor promotion, anything that's going to catch people's attention and get them to look and
I
see,
do
oh,
that all the time, but there's a thing going around saying, even with my signs and stuff, there's just been problems because of the social media crap. This person's going around slandering. He does it to
well,
every business.
that's what they do on social media. You know, I would say try to retract from that medium a little bit and look for other
Okay.
media to go through. You may want to sign up for my entrepreneurship class. We do a lot of small business management. I'm not doing marketing at CCB.
Are you doing online? Because
Yeah.
I have children, so I have to do
Yeah,
online
no,
classes.
my classes are all remote. They're all either online or synchronous. I'm not doing marketing for CCB this semester, but I am doing two sections of marketing for Vermont Tech. So I don't know if that's something you might be interested in.
Yeah, because mine I don't start until January.
I'll look into it. Maybe we'll get you through the Vermont Tech side. I'd like to say, oh, I'm teaching marketing for CCV this semester, but I'm not. I did marketing over the summer. Robert was in my class, so yeah, there he is. That was a good class. That was a good group. So
Thank you
again,
for the advice.
well, maybe again, it's the same class I teach at Vermont Tech, so maybe you even want to talk to Robert and get his impressions, what he thought of the class. I come up with a lot of good promotional ideas for small businesses and things like that, and I think you get a lot out of it in terms of helping you promote your business. And again, I would need to know more detail and talk to you a little more detail about it, which I'd love to do. My email is on the website. Just contact me, and I'll help you out as best I can.
Okay.
All right, thank you. Anybody else? Oh, Shirley, you got your hand up? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, sometimes if you can reach out to local newspapers like 7 Days, see if they'll do an interview for you. So you can explain your new business and your new ownership. The other one is get on listservs, like the Front Porch Forum, I think is pretty popular up in there to sort of introduce yourself as a new business. And perhaps also talk to some of the other retailers and business folks along the road where you're neighboring. I know for many of the nonprofits, when we try to do anything, it is really hard to get attendance, but the most sort of friendly outreach you can get, perhaps even do a introduction at the library or one of the other events, just to be able to say, this is us, this is what we're doing, and then maybe some special promotions, um, grand opening, such like that.
Yeah, that was an excellent suggestion. I'm glad that you piped in and said that, Shirley, because I'm kicking myself for not thinking of public relations myself. That was an excellent idea. You call a local newspaper and get them to basically do an article on you or an interview of you or a report on you. Now, I'll give you fair warning. They're going to want you to take out some ads with them too. All right, it's kind of a mutual one hand washes the other kind of thing. But those articles, those public relations deals that they do, that gets a real turnout, because that's not in with the advertisements. That's actually written as an article about your business or about you as a business person. And those do a lot to stimulate business, especially on the local level. So thank you for mentioning that, Shirley. I'm kicking myself for not thinking of that one myself. All right. Anybody else who wants to pipe in? Anybody? Mr. Questions? Robert? No, we're all good? Okay. Well, we'll call this one a quick one tonight then, I guess. You guys don't have too many questions. I guess the students are pretty well up on what they want to do. Rebecca, if you're interested in that marketing class, it runs through Vermont Tech, but it is a remote class. In fact, I do two. I do two sections. One is synchronous and one is online. So I'm doing both flavors of remote marketing for Vermont Tech. And it's the exact same class I teach at CCV. So
And it carries over, right, George, for
yeah.
credit?
You
So
have no problem. It's the exact same class.
how do I get all that information since I'm new?
I'll tell you what you do, because I don't want to take up any more time in this meeting with it. Just email me, and then
Okay.
I will email you back the contact information for all the people at Vermont Tech you need to talk about.
Okay, thanks.
All right, and then
Well,
you can
good luck.
contact them that way. Yeah, it's a
Thank
good
you.
class. I have fun with that class. Robert took it. Ask him. Robert, what'd you think of the marketing class?
It was a fantastic class. I felt like it helped. I know it was really inspiring to work in like ideation, especially. I know like a few of you guys were talking about promotional materials, promotional operations, just making sure that it helps inspire you and create ways to like make that you can use in for your business. You'll be able to test your strengths at marketing ideation, and I think that it would definitely be beneficial.
Yeah, I think so. And again, if I know that that's something of interest to you and you're in the class, I can even sort of tailor special assignments and things for you that you could actually apply to your business while getting credit for the class. So it works out well, and we have a good time up there at Vermont Tech. That's a nice group. So the CCV group is nice too. I like teaching the same class at both schools. But the nice thing about Vermont Tech is I'm doing two remotes. So if you like synchronous, I got one synchronous section going. If you can't make the time when we do the synchronous class, you need more flexibility, I also have an online section going. Technically, the online section is run out of Williston, and the other one is run out of Randolph, the synchronous one. But it's all remote. That's just, it is where it is. It's all throughout the state. So email me so I don't forget, and I will email you back all the contact information for the Vermont Tech folks and who you need to contact over there to sign up for it. And I hope I see you in it. It's a good class. It's a good class. Okay. Anybody else? No, we're gonna call it quick. I guess you guys are all set on your schedules and questions on business classes this semester. You're all good? All right. How about you, Robert? Am I gonna see you in my entrepreneurship class, or are you done with me?
I know you're gonna hate me for saying this, but I actually am switching my major to liberal studies.
Oh, I don't hate you for it. I don't hate you for it, but I don't teach liberal studies, so I'm not gonna see you in any more classes.
Well,
Go ahead, Andrew.
I'll see, because I do need some elective credits. So
keep me in mind for electives. What do you got, Andrew?
If you need math credits now, don't forget where to go: CCV, Winooski, or anywhere in the state.
I have myself signed up for college algebra for my summer semester. So.
Oh, great!
Do you really?
Yeah.
Okay, good.
Where are you going to take it?
CCV.
Oh, okay, good.
Do you teach that one, Andrew?
Not the summer one.
No, not the summer one. All right, good. That's a good class. Again, as I say, a lot of the students could use just a little brushing up on math, a little foundational reinforcement to get through some of the spreadsheet and some of the business stuff that we do. Although that marketing class wasn't very quantitative, But the entrepreneurship class will be a lot more number crunching in that one.
Okay then. Nice to see you all.
We're good. All right,
Yeah.
we're gonna bag
All right.
out then. We'll call it a quick one tonight. Thank you very much, Rebecca.
Okay.
Contact me and I'll get you all the Vermont Tech stuff you need. It sounds like you could use a marketing class, and I would love to teach you, and I would love to help you along with that. And
Thank
Robert,
you.
if you could hang out a couple minutes so I could talk to you about that, and then the rest of you, thank you for your time tonight. I'm sorry we didn't have a little more a vibrant meeting here, but I think what we had went very well. And I will put the video up on the website tomorrow when it becomes available. And anybody who wants to can watch it. Also, a week from Wednesday, remember, tell your friends, tell your family. We got Doug Hoffman, CFO from the Keystone Group, and he's got all kinds of good accounting and controlling and CFOing stories to tell you that I'm sure be a nice way to close out the semester. So for everybody tonight, thanks for your time. Thanks for coming by. And hopefully I'll see you a week from Wednesday when we have Doug here. Thanks.
Hi all.
Okay.
Bye bye.
Bye.
Enjoy.
Hang out with me. I'm going to stop the video. All right. We're good. Oh, Mr. Questions is back.
I've
All
been
right.
here for a while.
Oh, have you? How you doing? You were popping in and out.
If anything, I watched the whole thing, and considering the class that I'm in, I'm really for sure thinking about to switching my major.
To what?
So far I'm in like a IT desk specialist, but
Oh, okay.
I'm slightly thinking about going into like a business style, even though I do slightly run that at the same time right now.
Well, give it a shot. Give it a shot. If you do business, you're going to have Rick and you're going to have myself. That's why we came here tonight. So to kind of answer any questions you might have about the classes that we take. If you start with business, you'll start with Intro to Business, with which both Rick and myself teach. So, Robert, did you take that one with me?
Yeah, it was a fantastic class.
Yeah, that was a good class. I like teaching that one. That's a fun class. I like teaching the economics section of that class.
Mm-hmm.
Either way, it seems like a better class than what tech support my teacher actually gives me for my computer's crashing.
What's that? Oh, you're right.
All this season or year, my computer has been crashing,
Oh,
and that class has given me no credit, no anything for fixing my computer up.
they should. That should be the class project, to fix your own computer up.
That's true.
Well, see what you think about it. Do you have anything specific you want to ask me about the classes I teach? I'm a marketing, intro to business, small business management, entrepreneurship guy.
No questions.
All right.
Enjoy the rest of your day.
Well, thank you. And I hope I see you in some business classes. Switch over. Join us. It's fun over here in business world.
Okay, that might be a lot better, I thought, than the IT guaranteed. So now back to the class. Where is restore previous session? Really? That's restore previous session. There we go. Now I need to look in my concepts PC. Then go to modules. Ball. Okay. Hey. No. Okay. Okay. Arthur 10. Input device. Okay. There we go. Update info. And where's chat on there? Edit. Okay. Now it had it pop up. Good. I was slightly worried about that. Okay, security. No. BRB. No. Keep my balance.
Christopher?
Well, that's pretty much what we're going to do. We're going to dive into our content finally for everybody who's excited, waiting anxiously to learn more about networking, which I know everybody is, because that's all everybody wants to learn
Who
about.
couldn't be?
It's
Networking.
true.
I mean, what more could you ask for?
Although it is kind of the foundation to everything I've ever done since I learned it. So I'd say it's important for that reason.
Agreed.
Yeah, we're going to jump right into some content, start giving you guys some information. It's going to be a lot of, I mentioned in the intro, a lot of kind of topic or word definitions. So a lot of just technical content for the next little while. We're going to throw in some demos, hopefully keep it a little bit exciting, show you a little bit about what we're talking about, and get through it as best we can.
Module 1 is basically kind of an overview type module, so people may see it as a little drier, but I think with some of the slides that Christopher's created, we've got some really good animations going. So I think we're going to see some good high-value edutainment here, where you not only get some education, you're going to get some entertainment.
We certainly hope so.
Okay, so let's dive in. Okay, so understanding local area networking. First of all, we have objectives. And when we teach this course, we want to be talking about or keeping in mind that there is a test associated with this course. Christopher, how does that test work?
Well, that's an interesting question. The test, from a technical standpoint, they're multiple choice. What you're seeing here on the screen is we break our test down into objective domains. We want to kind of create a map of what the test is going to cover. And then we then use that map to create courses similar to this one of our instructor-led training that map to those domains so we make sure we're covering what you would need to know for that course or that exam when you would actually take it. These exams, I've taken, I think, 3 of the 4 kind of intro IT MTAs. I took them when I came on at Microsoft just so I had the information and was familiar with the tests. They're quick. They're not too bad. They're about 35 questions. I think you're given an hour, a little over an hour to get them done. So that's the long and short of the test. It's a lot of multiple choice, and hopefully we're going to get the information to pass them.
Okay, sounds great. Let's go ahead and dive in then. So our objectives for the first lesson here, the first module, are we're going to be talking about examining local area networks, devices, and data transfers. We're also going to talk about identifying network topologies and standards. So network components and terminology. Let's see what we have here. We have data. Basically, this is a unit of information that's going to flow across a network. We have nodes. These are end devices that are on the network. Client. You basically have a client and a server. The hard and fast of it is a client requests services, a server fulfills services.
That's pretty much it.
Peer can perform either
There we
a client
go.
or a server. And you'll find in a lot of systems that a lot of these devices act as peers. Network adapter. To gain access to the network and gain access to other devices, you need a network adapter of some kind to allow you to access the media. Hub. This is a device that multiple devices hook into that basically spreads the data around to other devices so everybody has access to it.
And that's one of the first things we'll be covering in the slides coming up.
Switch. Switch is similar to a hub. It has a little bit different functionality. There's also router, and these are basically network utilities or network devices used to connect multiple devices together. Media, this is what devices talk on. Media could be cable, wireless, there's different types of media. Transport protocol. Transport protocol is what's used. So basically, any system that enables communication has rules. Let's think of the English language. It has rules. Christopher, you and I may have grown up in different parts of the country, but we're still able to communicate with each other because the English language has a basic set of rules. For networking, those are referred to as protocols or standards. And by using these protocols or standards, different devices are able to connect together and intercommunicate.
And in some cases, different systems entirely, different vendors. Microsoft has an email server. 100 other companies out there have email servers, online email services. They can all still talk to each other.
Exactly. And then finally, bandwidth. This is what you can actually use to transfer data across a network. What's available to you? Local area network. So basically the basic definition of what a local area network is. A local area network is a group of computers confined to a small geographic area, such as a single building. So this is the basic building block of what a network is.
In some cases in my past, that would mean my dining room. There have been times where, when I started learning, I don't know how many people in IT do this. I've heard some stories from some other people. You want to get used to networking, you want to get used to building networks, you want to get used to servers and the services they provide, which we're going to talk about later. So I've had times in my life where a dining room is full of 6, 7, 8 computers just stacked up in a corner somewhere, nice and out of the way and quiet, not bugging anyone else in the house, of course, taking up any space at all. And that's essentially a LAN. It's a small geographic area, small room, computers connected to it.
Okay, another kind of small example like that, it's game night. It's game night, you, 4 or 5 of your friends have all brought your computers over, have all brought their monitors over, and so if they all interconnect and use a hub, is that considered a network?
That is a LAN, exactly.
Oh, perfect, great, okay. So basically a group of devices that share a common medium, such as cable or wireless.
And that one's, we'll get into some finer points. That one's a little tricky because technically a LAN can, in this particular instance, given that definition, a LAN can have both and still be considered a local area network. I can have a wireless device plugged in via a wire to a hub or a switch, which we're going to learn about, and that provides wireless access to computers that also have access to wired computers via that other device. So yeah, same idea.
So typically when we refer to local area network, we're referring to a smaller geography, so devices that are closer together as opposed to, I'll just throw out a term, a wide area network where things are more geographically dispersed, maybe buildings, countries.
Yep. I'd say here, even in the building we're in right now, it's four floors. I'm not even sure we'd consider the building a local area network. It might be per floor a local area network. A lot of that would come down to how IT has it set up and how they've divided everything, but I don't have privy or access to that private information. So.
Well, and local area networks also deal with like sub-networking and things of that nature, which are some exciting topics that we'll be dealing with here later.
Yeah,
so there's a hook right there. If you're thinking of, hey, I don't know if I should watch all of this, we're going to talk about sub-networking later. So if that doesn't hook you, I don't know what will. So let's go ahead and talk about the basic of a network. So networks are used to exchange data, and reasons for networks include sharing information, communicating, organizing data. So this is all kind of generic. Sharing information. What kind of information could we share, Christopher?
Anything. Pictures, music, movies. I mean, on a LAN that we have license for, of course, we don't have any gray area here. Information, documents. I mean, at work, where we're in a work environment, we share information all the time. We have shares where documents are stored. We have, not to get too far out of the idea of a LAN, but we have other services that provide sharing to other information elsewhere on the network as well.
Well, and you and I shared information when we were creating this presentation. So as we were creating this presentation, basically what we did is we had a central area on the network that we would connect to. Christopher would work on the slides, I would work on the slides. So we would use this area to share information and organize information.
And for the sake of a little cross promotion, one of the nice things about some Microsoft software, we were able to share that information and not have to copy it locally because, well, Office lets us do co-authoring. So nice little plug for another product group.
Yeah, and it was relatively seamless what we were doing. So as Christopher would work on the deck, I would receive a note that, hey, Christopher's working on the deck. I would save, it would bring his changes down. I could edit, save, it would push my changes up. Worked really nice.
Yep.
And then communication, basically email. So we use these tools on a day-to-day basis. Email, we stream video, we use tools, SkyDrive, Dropbox, tools of that nature, and we don't even think networking. And that's really the beauty of networking, is it should be seamless. It should just be something that we use. And a good network is seamless in that nature, where you just use it and there's not a problem.
That's true. That's true. And hopefully, people watching this video haven't had too many experiences to the contrary, although it's possible.
Every once in a while, I've heard they go down.
And it turns out, although as soon as you say that in my head, I hear the thousands of times that I heard people say, the network's down, the network's down, the network's down. The network probably isn't down most of the time, but there are things that can cause some issues from time to time.
We might even talk about that later. Again, another hook. If that's not going to hook you, again, I don't know what will.
Maybe we'll cause some. Maybe we'll break some stuff while we're here today.
We can break stuff.
Yeah, we can.
I might have a hammer.
That would be an interesting way to break a network.
Network documentation. So network documentation basically helps describe, define, and explain physical and logical methods for connecting devices. Documentation phase. So as you're creating a network, there's different phases to it: a planning phase, a pilot phase. Actually, documentation phase is one of those, and that's where you basically sketch out what you think the network's going to look like. And then if you're thinking about tools, Microsoft Visio is an example of a tool that will do this. There are some tools that will even load up and go self-discover devices on your network, kind of pull it down into a Visio-style diagram, and then you can kind of note and arrange stuff as you'd like. Hub. Okay, as we were going through our terminology, we mentioned hub, and Christopher mentioned that we'd be talking about this later. So Christopher, why don't you talk about hubs?
Well, hubs, to be pretty simple, really the simplest connecting device a network can have. We're assuming that we're not doing peer-to-peer connections. Most people don't do that. Hubs were one of the first devices used to connect computers together. They're very simple. It's a box you plug into. We're going to talk about cabling and network cards. You plug your computer into this box. It listens for activity going on in the network. It hears something from a port where you're plugged in one computer. It then takes that information and sends it out to all the rest of the ports in the box. It's assuming that this computer's trying to talk to somebody. I'm going to take that information, send it out to everybody, and see who's listening.
Okay, so let's go ahead and take a look at the animation here. It kind of demonstrates the functionality of a hub. So basically, we have our devices here, and we have our hub, and those lightning bolts represent data traveling, or that could travel across the network. And basically what we have is we have this little dot here representing a packet. So this is a server or a device requesting information or sending information to another device. So notice what we have here. That unit of information goes to the hub. Now the hub doesn't pick what device it sends it to. It just broadcasts that information to all the other devices on the network.
And if any of those devices don't need that information, they just ignore it. They still get it. They still hear it. They just pay no attention to it.
Okay, so if I'm in a room talking to a group of people, but I'm talking specifically to Christopher, I'll use his name. I'll say, hey, Christopher. The other people in the room, although I'm loud, will hear my voice. They'll know that I'm talking directly to Christopher.
Pretty much. It's a good analogy.
Okay, so we have a hub. Now, a switch, on the other hand, is kind of a fancy hub. It's a smarter version of a hub, where a hub takes in information and then broadcasts that everywhere. A switch, on the other hand, is more selective about how it sends out information. How is it selective, Christopher?
So another thing we'll talk about a little later is what's called a MAC address. It's an address assigned to the physical network port on a network card in a computer, on any computer. Every computer that has a network card, that network port has an address assigned to it. And we'll get into, there are actually multiple types of addresses assigned. What a switch does is it keeps track of which addresses from which devices are connected to it. So it's not that the ports on the switch have that address themselves, it's just that they know who's at the end of it. So when computer A sends me a piece of information, the switch is going to look at that information, kind of open it up a little bit, look at the header, the top of the file, and say, this is destined for a computer that has this MAC address, is what it's called. And we'll learn about that more. I know exactly which port that MAC address is connected to, so I'm just going to send it down that port.
So basically what we have is instead of that information being broadcast everywhere, it's broadcast to specific ports. So now our network's not flooded with basically all this noise or all this data being transferred everywhere. The information is basically sent along very specific paths. So let's take a look at the PowerPoint here. And Christopher, again, has another amazing animation that will demonstrate how this works. So notice again, we have the start system here that initiates a packet being sent. It sends the packet to the switch. This is where Christopher mentioned, hey, the switch evaluates where is the destination and says, hey, the destination is this system. And at the same time, another system initiated a packet, sent that to the switch, and the switch said, hey, that goes to this one here. So it really allows, so a hub basically takes anything and broadcasts it out. A switch, on the other hand, is very deliberate about receiving a packet and then sending that packet on a very specific path.
And one of the things that brings us in terms of bandwidth, we talked about bandwidth on the first slide. You see when you purchase these devices, they're rated for a certain amount of bandwidth. You'll see hubs with 10 megabits per second, 100 megabits per second. You'll see switches with 10 or 100 or even 1,000 megabits per second if they're a gigabit switch. One of the very important differences that even I didn't learn right away when I started learning is that with a hub, because of the broadcast nature of the technology, that bandwidth advertised on the device is shared. So that hub can support 100 megabits per second across all its ports at any given time. So if I'm sending a large file to a server or to another computer in my house, and someone else decides to send a large file to another computer, my bandwidth is essentially cut in half, so that they can have some to use as well. Switches, because they have addressable ports and can keep track of where traffic is supposed to go, that is not the case. Switches, that traffic is available to every port at any given time. Now, if you have two computers, say, sending a large file to the same computer, you're still going to run into bandwidth issues because now you've got the same two ports bringing in traffic, but only one sending it out. But the switch as a product is technically able to support all that bandwidth per port.
Okay, so next, we've talked about the hub, we've talked about the switch. Now let's talk about a router. So if we look at the slide, basically you see that the configurations look very similar. The hub, the switch, the router. There's what we refer to as a star topology here. So all these devices star into the router. The router enables computers to communicate to a different network. We haven't quite talked about that yet. The easiest thing to think about is, and the way most people think about routers is, a router enables me to communicate with the internet.
Yep.
So I have my home network, my work network. It has one LAN, one type of network on it. I use my router, and it enables me to connect to another network, at this point being the internet.
It's the best example that we can come up with pretty much any time.
Okay, so if we look at the graphic here, we see that the internet, that big huge cloud, and Christopher's using some very basic graphics here. So when you see a cloud like this, they're typically referring to the internet. When you see a device in the middle like this, that's typically referring to a hub, a switch, a router. The kind of block on the left, typically a server. The one on the right with the monitor and the block, the computer, is a computer, and then the basic one on the bottom is a laptop. So we talked about documenting your network. This is the type of icons that you'll use to document your network.
Especially, yeah.
So we've talked about hubs, we've talked about switches, we've talked about routers. Now let's talk about how we get devices connected to a hub, a device, a router. So basically, how do we get connected to the network?
Sounds about right.
Okay? So we have a network adapter. I'm sure pretty much if anyone has looked at their computer, laptop, desktop, whatever, they've probably seen this type of port. For those of you that are a little bit older and are familiar with hard LAN telephones, I'm dating myself here. I just talked about a hard LAN telephone, a hardwired telephone. This looks like a hardwired telephone jack.
I just think it's funny that we're talking about it in that context. For the older folk out there, you'll remember back when we had telephones.
I know. Remember when we had wires?
When we had to plug a phone into the wall
Exactly.
with a cable.
And you had to dial the phone. So basically what we have here is this is an RJ45 jack oriented piece of hardware. RJ45 jack is just a little bit wider than a telephone. So that is the connection area for the computer, for the wire. And then what you see on the other side here is the RJ45 jack that you use to connect to the computer. This is for what we would refer to as a wired network,
Absolutely.
as opposed to wireless. Most people at this point are probably more familiar with wireless than they are with wired. But if you're going into networking and want to understand, these are still terms that you need to know and need to understand.
Well, if you're looking to go into networking from a business standpoint, if you're looking to maybe start an IT career, advance an IT career, these are terms you're going to want to know because a lot of corporate networks aren't wireless. They provide wireless. Here at Microsoft, we have wireless networks so I can connect the laptop to any time. But if I sit down in my office at my desktop or even with my laptop, I have a wire that I can plug into. And if you're responsible for managing, setting up, designing a network, wire is going to be a large part of what you're doing.
Well, and even though your network has wireless in it, most likely when we talk about servers are going to be wired.
Yeah, absolutely.
So there's going to be part of your network infrastructure that does have wires associated with it.
Yeah. I can actually tell. I was looking at the pictures and I'm remembering funny stories. Back when I was learning how to do all of this, how to build a network. I was 14, 15 years old. I had gotten a copy of NT4 perfectly legitimately from a reputable source, and I just want to learn, and I tend to learn by doing. So I put NT4 workstation on a computer in my bedroom. I put NT4 server on a computer downstairs. This is my parents' house. I went to some store. I can't remember what store it was or if it even exists anymore. And I bought a kit, and this kit came with a little 10100 hub and two 10100 network cards. And I had to install the network cards in both these computers, and I had to put the hub on the stairs, on the fourth or fifth step of my parents' house, and then run cables up and down the stairs to my bedroom and to the family room, which my parents loved. They were thrilled. The part of the reason I tell that story is because I still have those devices in my house. I still have the hub and at least one of the network cards, and one of these I'll actually frame it because it was my first networking experience ever. Going to the store, buying this stuff, and just setting it up at my parents' house and figuring out how it works.
And for those of us that are kind of geeky and bent like that, that's what we remember. Like some people are like, oh, my first kiss, my first car. Hey, and not that your first kiss and your first car aren't awesome, but your first network card and the first time you get devices to intercommunicate, nothing better.
It's a big
Just
deal.
saying.
What are these IP addresses all about? We'll have plenty of stories for that when we get to it.
Okay, so we've talked about wired networks and how wired networks intercommunicate. We've also kind of hinted about wireless, so the ability to connect a device without wires, and that's what people are most familiar with, whether it be a phone, a tablet, a laptop. You go into Starbucks, you go into wherever, you prop open your laptop and you start working and immediately have internet connectivity because of wireless.
Yep.
So the basic wireless device is a wireless access point. And a wireless access point is what's used on a network to allow wireless devices to connect to the hardwired network. We've talked about wired networks, and that's going to be the backbone of any network, is going to be wired. And then you will have areas that allow wireless to connect to your wired network. Wireless access points are basically what do that.
Yep.
And they allow smartphones, PDAs, tablets, laptops, PCs nowadays.
Even desktop, desktop will come with wireless adapters, so you can take home, unbox it, set it up. You don't have to worry about it. It's just one less wire to junk up your office, bedroom, living room, wherever you put your computer.
Well, and some of us enjoy having the hub in the living room and a wire running to every bedroom.
By some of us, it's like three of us, but we do. We love it.
It's neat, and tripping over it in the middle of the night just reinforces that joy of, I have a network at home, I rock.
Oh my goodness.
But, for those of us with families and stuff, with spouses who are like, yeah, you're not going to run wires all over the house. Thank God there's wireless. There's wireless. We can put wireless in. I can go to my bedroom, the kids' bedroom, whatever, and still have access to the network. It's demo time. We kind of drew straws and we decided that Christopher was going to be demo Dolly this time. So we're going to head over to Christopher's computer. And what do you have for us, Christopher?
All right, well, I think we're going to look at the devices we've talked about from a computer standpoint. We're going to start with device manager. Actually, I'm going to start somewhere else. So on a modern PC, we're looking at Windows 8 PC right here. I've cleaned up the desktop. I've just put some shortcuts here that we're going to be using, but I don't want to start there. If you're a home user, if you're an office user who, again, is getting into networking, getting into IT, what you're going to be able to get to quickly and easily is right here. This little icon. This little icon takes you to the Network and Sharing Center. And I'm going to jump right into adapter settings. These are network cards. Now, two of these, the ones on the right, we're not going to pay any attention to. Those are not what we're talking about from a LAN standpoint. This right here is a soft representation of the network card in my computer and the properties associated to it. So we have protocols in here, we have different connection items. We're going to talk about all this later. But for now, we're going to close this, and I'm going to show you a little bit different view of essentially the same information. So back to our desktop, and I'm going to actually open Control Panel. And once we're in Control Panel, a couple different ways we can get to this information. One of the joys of Microsoft, they like to give us 5 ways to do everything, which is terrific. You get to pick the one that works best for you. We're going to open Device Manager, and we're going to look at network devices from a device manager standpoint, right here under network adapters. And again, we see the same adapter as we saw before. This one, when you come into properties, is a little bit different. These are actual hardware properties and hardware settings that we're looking at and can change. There are many, many settings on a network adapter, on a network card that can be changed. We're not going to get into these details. You don't need these details for the sake of this exam. So you can take a look at this. You can play with these if you want to. If you have a network where it's not crucial that you're connected to it, because changing some of these may at least intermittently disconnect you from that network. And our last bit is an actual IP address. I'm going to look at this from, unfortunately, the way this computer's set up, I can't go into those property sheets to look at an IP address. I can do this. And I can do IP config, which is a tool we're going to learn more about later in much detail. And this gives me an IP address. 10.0.0.39 in this case is the IP address on this computer. Above that, you'll see an IPv6 address. We're going to talk about IPv6. We're actually going to talk about everything you're seeing: IP addresses, the IP protocol, the internet protocol, the different versions. All this will be discussed in more detail later on in this content. I'm going to close that. We're going to hand this back off to Thomas.
Okay, great. Thanks for the demo, Christopher.
No problem.
We, and when I say we, I'm talking about myself and the audience, appreciate your hard work.
Well, thanks.
You're welcome. Okay, so next up, serial data transfer. So how is information basically transferred, or a method of transferring data across the wire? One way is serial data transfer. And what this refers to is the transfer of information one bit at a time, very similar to like a single lane highway. So as cars get on the single lane highway one at a time and go to their different destinations. On a network cable, the data travels in one specific direction in a single stream. So serial data transfer, there's also data transfer rates. So how fast can data be transferred across these different media? They define maximum bits per second, BPS, that can be transmitted over a network, typically rated in bits using a lowercase b, for example, 10 or 100 megabits per second. The lowercase b differentiates this from the uppercase b. Uppercase b, bytes, typically hard drive and RAM. Bits, network communication, lowercase b.
So to kind of bring a real world example to that, because this is something that people actually interact with, I'm not sure they realize it most of the time. When you go to your cable provider, your DSL provider, whoever's providing internet, say at your house or your office, and you run speed tests, my internet's running slow, I need to go look at why it's running so slow. They're going to do data transfers to test that throughput. Those data transfers are going to be represented most of the time in bytes. So when I go to my provider and I run a speed test, it's going to show me a little needle. That needle is going to show me bytes, megabytes per second. To get megabits per second, to get the actual speed of that internet connection as advertised by that provider, because a byte is 8 bits, you have to divide or multiply that case, that byte number, by 8 to get your megabits per second. So if my speed test shows 2 megabytes per second download, and I say, well, I bought a 16 meg line from my provider, so why is it only 2? If you multiply that 2 megabytes per second that the screen is showing me by bits, by 8, I get 16 megabits per second, and my internet connection is running the way it should.
Nice. See, you learn something every day.
You do.
Okay, our types of transfers, there's broadcast and unicast. Broadcast is basically information being sent to all devices. Unicast is information being sent to a specific device. So broadcast, the way to think of broadcast, an example, radio. So somebody talking over radio, that gets sent to multiple devices. Unicast, walkie-talkie. So when you're on a walkie-talkie, those are only going in between those two devices. IP addresses. So we talked about devices on the network. We talked about broadcast. We talked about unicast. How does a device know, or how do devices know a specific device that is being sent information? They use an IP address. An IP address is similar to, here in the States, we use social security numbers to uniquely identify each person. Networks use IP addresses. Christopher talked about MAC addresses, media access control addresses. Those are the hardware addresses that are physically associated to the computer. IP addresses are addresses associated by the TCP/IP protocol associated to the MAC address. Again, this lets devices know who two devices are talking to. So when they say, hey, I'm talking to 192.128.1.1, they know, hey, 128 or 192.128.1.1 is this specific device, and it allows device intercommunication. Most devices connected to a network have an IP address, and devices that we might not even think about. Again, we go back to that list of wireless devices, a phone, a tablet, a PC, a laptop. These could all be a router, a switch. These could all be devices that have an IP address.
Potentially, yeah.
Again, they uniquely identify devices on the network. They give an example here, 192.168.1.1. And every IP address is broken down actually into two components, a network component and a host component. The network ID basically shows what network the system is on, and then the host ID says, hey, this specific device.
And by what network device is on, what do you mean by that?
So you've talked about bandwidth, and we talked about local area networks. A local area network is, and one we've said, it's a geographic area. So it's a geographic area that shares the same network ID. The same network ID, all devices on a network share the same network ID. And in our example here, the 192.168.1.1, the network ID is 192.168.1. So all devices that share this first three numbers are all on the same network. The .1 uniquely identifies a device. Now we talked about a hub, a switch, and a router. All devices on 192.168.1 are all able to communicate using a hub or a switch. To communicate with a device on a different network, using this example 192.168.2, we would need a router device. This allows us to basically create areas where we have bandwidth. So we're going to have these devices using this set of bandwidth in this network. Then we're going to have another network over here of a different group of devices that again share bandwidth. Then we can use a router to interconnect these two different networks. So if we look at a local area network, as Christopher just mentioned, you'll see here, again, using our documentation kind of standards, some different items here. You see some servers, you see some routers and switches, you see the internet. The brick wall is typically what's used for a firewall.
Yep, and I put that in here with a note to myself that a firewall, especially in this representation, is essentially a router with additional functionality. Firewalls are going to allow you to interconnect two networks, but with a large amount, depending on the firewall you're using, of security ability that a typical router may or may not have.
So it sounds like your firewall is basically your gatekeeper that allows your devices from your network to communicate to the internet, but the internet, all of the internet, not to be able to communicate directly to your devices
Yeah, we
inside.
don't want that necessarily.
And that's how we create like denial of service attacks and things like that, is firewalls not being properly set up and allowing what you could refer to as malicious communication to come in from the internet into your internal network.
Or sometimes externally. I don't know if we'll get into those details today, but sometimes firewalls can be used for containment. If something has managed to get to my network, has a virus, malware, some sort of other potential security issue that could happen inside a network, that firewall needs to be contained. If I have other sites that I don't want it to get out to, and there's a lot of, we get into security, we'll be here for weeks and weeks and weeks.
Very good, very good. And then notice, let's actually go back to the graphic really quick. Notice we also have a wireless access point here. So we have our wired network, we have our firewall, we have internet connectivity, we have devices connecting to hubs, we have servers. We also have a wireless access point and wireless devices connecting to the network.
Yeah, this is pretty representative of really any network. This could be at your house, although maybe on a smaller scale. This could be your office on any scale. This could be here at Microsoft on a massive and global scale. But at the end of the day, these are the pieces that make it up. Devices, servers, switches, firewalls, wireless access points. It gets much more complicated when you get into the details, but this is the general idea.
So at this point, people have a pretty decent understanding. Now it's just about scale.
Yeah.
So all these components, and these components, we've simplified stuff, and things in a basically production environment might be a lot more complex. But these basic hub, router, switches, client, server, peer, wireless access point, these are all things that you'll find in your neighborhood, basically.
And in some cases in my living room, or in someone's living room.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Virtual LAN. So a VLAN is a group of hosts with a common set of requirements that communicate as if they were connected together in a normal fashion on one switch, regardless of their physical location. Okay, so let's take a look at what that means. We've talked about the fact that a switch has the ability to know the device at the end of the port. So hey, this is device 1, this is device 2. So a virtual LAN allows us to group those devices together. So hey, devices on ports 1, 5, and 10 are on a single network, or virtual LAN.
And what that allows me to do is it lets me take a switch, which is not necessarily the smartest of network devices. It's not built for subdivision, and it lets me subdivide. It lets me say ports 1, 5, and 10 are isolated. I want those two computers to talk to themselves. I don't want them to talk to anything else or anything else to talk to them. So in this case, we've got computers connected to 3 servers, 3 workstations, and a wireless access point, connected to 6 of the 10 ports on this hypothetical switch, and we've divided it according to the table on the left. This is called tagging. You're going to go into that switch. You're going to pull up the configuration for those ports. You're going to VLAN tag those ports with an ID. In this case, the IDs I've listed on the left, 1 and 2, basically divided this into 2 different networks. So ports 1 and 2, if we go from the upper left to the lower right, the way we normally read, the first 2 computers, the first server, and the third server are all in the same VLAN. And and the wireless access point. So those two PCs are wireless devices, and two of the three servers are talking to each other, connected to each other, fully functional as a network. However, port 3, which is our third PC, and port 7, which is our second server, are isolated. They're still connected to each other. They can still talk to each other. They cannot necessarily talk to the other devices on that switch.
And so an example of this might be your accounting department. Maybe you don't want your accounting department, the information there. Maybe they're working on super secret projects, or you just don't want accounting information on the rest of the network. You can separate the accounting area out. And so none of the servers, even though they're all on the same physical network, logically, they can't talk to each other.
Correct. And I could use a router to do that. I mean, I could use a router to physically separate those networks, but they're expensive. Part of the reason VLANs kind of came to be, it's a slightly less, well, in some cases, a considerably less expensive way to do this isolation.
So basically, we're using software implementation instead of hardware implementation for this virtual network.
Yep, in this case.
Okay, network topologies. Network topologies basically is how the network is physically laid out. There are different types of network topologies: bus, ring, star, mesh, and tree. If we look at our graphic here, the bus, ring, and star, mesh, and tree refer to a physical layout. So bus, basically inline. This is old-style coax Ethernet. Basically, what you would have is a single coax cable that would run from one area to another. As you hook devices in, you had a little T connector. You would start the cable, you'd hook it into one area of the T, so you have basically this T connector. The cable comes in one area, this connects to the device, this cable runs out this area, and then this device is now in line with the rest. The end device, you would have to basically put an end cap on to finish it up. And if any of the devices got disconnected or the signal didn't go quite right, your whole network went down. The best way to think about that, Christmas tree lights. Who hasn't fought over Christmas tree lights? The one bulb goes dead, all your bulbs go dead, and now you're sitting there, you know, drinking your sorrows away. Not that I advocate drinking, but drinking your sorrows away because you got to sit there with, what, a bazillion bulbs and then try and pick one out, put the new one in. And so basically that's an example of that topology.
Yep.
All that Christmas light drinking thing, all for that example.
Exactly. Not much you're going to see, luckily, for the sake of Thomas's not advocating drinking, luckily not a topology you see much anymore.
Ring is basically things connected in a ring fashion. And typically when we refer to ring, that's more a logical topology than a physical topology.
Yeah, the funny thing, we have a slide here in a minute that talks more about rings and mentions that the ring topology, even though it is a circle, actually is a number of devices connected to a central device. So it's one of the fun things I've been teaching over the years when I'm in different classes talking about networking, is that we show these graphics that are very simple representations of a bus, a ring, and a star. And then I say, well, technically a ring is going to look like a star.
But it works logically as a ring.
As a ring, yes.
Okay? Which brings us to star, and we've seen evidence of this before. If you think of that middle piece, that purple piece, that's the hub.
Or the switch, yeah.
Or the switch, and then all the green is the cable, the purple is all the devices, and basically all that interconnection. Mesh is 10-digit double-wide free-for-all.
Yeah.
Mesh is basically everything connected to everything else.
Mesh is what you would have to do if you wanted a star without a central device. So I want to connect my computer to the three other computers on my network. I don't have one box that I can plug one cable into that the cable nodes are plugged into as well. I have to physically, and I've never actually seen, I don't know if this is good or bad, I've never seen a mesh implementation at this level, at a network level.
I haven't either. Mesh, they tout that it's for fault tolerance, but nowadays, and I think that was kind of in the day when hubs and switches tended to fault a lot more. And I think now with hardware being the way it is, switches, hubs, routers being as decent as they are, we've kind of gone away from mesh.
Well, you will still see mesh in some instances. The biggest thing I can think of right off the top of my head where you'll see a mesh topology is in Fibre Channel. If you're doing centralized shared storage, what's called a SAN, which we won't cover in this class, the connectivity to SANs in the back end in a server room, they tend to create a mesh topology. You're going to have multiple switches connected to a SAN. Those switches are going to connect to multiple servers, and in most cases, those servers will connect to both switches. Switches will both connect to the server or the SAN in the back end. It is a fault tolerance. It's exactly what it's worth to make sure that there's always a path between the storage and the server. So that's the best example I've seen mesh topologies in the world still today. You usually won't see it at the host level.
Well, and they tend to use mesh at also a router level, so all your routers tend to be more interconnected than not.
Yep.
One thing that they'll refer to that's not on the slide is hybrids, and that's pretty typical. So you'll have an area of mesh, an area of ring, an area of star, and all these kind of collapse together.
Yeah, potentially.
And then finally tree. I think Christopher was thinking about hiking when he wrote the slide, so I'm going to throw tree to Christopher.
Sure, throw tree to me.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think of a good analogy for tree. I mean, it's not very common. We just kind of throw it on here because it's information people have. It just kind of exists. It's almost like bus. I should move bus down to the bottom of this list only because it's not around anymore.
Yeah.
So that's something you'll need to know.
Yeah, fair enough. So we've talked about network topologies. Let's dive into star topology a little bit more. Again, we've seen examples of this numerous times. It's the most common topology. Basically, this is your switch, hub, router, device, and then all your network devices are connected to it, per the example here. The next one, mesh. Again, we've talked about this. Not real world. For computers, it's more like you said for SAN storage or routers, but basically you see here that all systems are interconnected to every other system.
A little expensive, that one.
Well, things that people don't think about is you need a network card and network port for each of these cables. So for everything that's incoming, you're going to need network cards, you're going to need cabling. So as Christopher said, this can be kind of expensive. So ring topology, as we mentioned earlier, although it logically functions as a ring, it physically works as a star. Token Ring uses this. Fiber Distributed Data Interface (FDDI) uses this. But like I said, typically the physical layout is a star layout.
Device is plugged into a central connecting point.
Typically Token Ring uses a star topology, and actually
That's
next slide.
very fitting,
Next slide. So Token Ring, the idea for Token Ring is you have the talking stick. If you don't have the talking stick, you don't get to talk. And in this case, the talking stick is a token that's passed around in an orderly fashion. And when a device receives the token, the you can talk token, if it needs to talk, then it puts information on the network. If it doesn't need to talk, it says, hey, I don't need to talk, and basically passes the token to the next designated device.
And then the data passes the same way. So if I get the talking stick and I'm allowed to talk and I need to talk to computer 4 and I'm computer 1, I'm going to send data. That data is going to, very similar to what we talked about earlier with the hub, it's going to visit each device and those devices are going to say, you're not for me. This is my data, pass on to the next one. Not the most efficient.
And then finally, Ethernet. Ethernet is a physical topology. It's from the Institute of Electrical and Electronics Engineers, IEEE, and it's standard 802.3. So we talked about standards, the English language, protocols. This is the protocol or the standard that allows devices to physically connect to a network. It mentions that Ethernet is the de facto standard. There's multiple types of standards here. There's ones that have been voted in that a whole bunch of groups agree on and say, hey, we're going to make this the standard. There's also the de facto standard. So this is the standard that we've used forever, so we're just going to agree that this is what we're going to use. Some examples of some Ethernet include 802.3U, or fast Ethernet that runs at 100 megabits per second, or 802.3AB, or gigabit Ethernet.
It's 1,000 megabits per second.
So we have Ethernet, which is a representation of the physical media and how information is put on that physical media. Well, information is put on the physical media in frames. Basically, the way to think of a frame, you can think of it like a postcard. A postcard has areas that you write in. It has an area that you write information to, dear Aunt Joan, I'm having a great time, glad you're not here, okay, no, I really miss you. So it has the body of data. It also has the address information and the from information. So that's a really simple way to think of a frame. A frame's gonna have very similar type of information.
And the slide covers some of that. We've got this broken down into pieces. I didn't define all of the pieces of a frame. These are actually representative of the areas of a frame, but I didn't label them all because it's not, that level of detail is not required. But in this case, our preamble is going to be that to and from, where's it going, where's it coming from, the data, which is the bulk of obviously what we're sending, and then at the end, CRC is a checking to make sure that the frame is complete when it gets received.
So basically, a CRC allows when Aunt Joan receives her card, she can look at the CRC and ensure that nobody wrote other information on that card.
Well, in this case, it's the same idea. Yeah, just make sure the card's complete. In this case, you're looking at the postcard and see it's got all four corners and all the stuff written on it. There's no eraser marks, there's nothing torn off. You know what CRC is. Now we're actually gonna mess with this definition pretty considerably later on as we go through the layers of the OSI model, which we're gonna talk about. And frames are just one piece of between. If I'm sending a computer and I want to send a file to you, between me telling the computer to send that file to you and getting to you, that file undergoes a number of changes. And frames are just one of the stages of change. But we'll talk about that more in detail later.
As mentioned, the frame is layer 2 of the OSI model. Teaser, there's 7 layers of the OSI model, which, as you said, we'll talk about later. Centralized computing. There's a couple different types of computing. One is centralized. This is computing done at a centralized computing. So basically what this allows is a central device has all the computing power. It's not uncommon for the systems that are interconnected to it to be referred to as dummy terminals. This is more a mainframe environment. And in the mainframe environment, these dummy terminals boot up, and any processing done is done by the mainframe system. The dummy terminals typically have a keyboard and a monitor, and that's about it, at least in a mainframe environment. Like I said, they're referred to as dummy terminals, and these devices solely are keyboard and monitor.
Well, I think myself, in my head, my first thought is the people watching this video, go ask your parents what a green screen is, and they might be able to tell you.
Oh, yeah, exactly.
Yeah. That's the first thing in my head when I talk about terminals, I talk about green screens back in the day. So it hurts me that I'm now the person saying, kids, go ask your parents.
Go ask your parents about it. Oh, the old Weiss terminals.
Yep, exactly.
All the Weiss still has terminals. I'm not trying to say Weiss is no longer valid.
Well, and there's a saying, and it holds true in IT very, very well, which is what was old is new again. So 25, 30 years ago, there were these dumb terminals, these green screens connected to mainframes. Nowadays, we have terminals, still Weiss terminals, or there are various different vendors that create these, what are called thin clients. It's a box that doesn't really have an operating system on it that connects you to a server that gives you a full, in this case, Windows operating system. We're not getting into those details. Remote desktop services is the overarching, which you can speak to at some point in the next couple of modules, is the overarching technology, but we're not going to cover that in this course much.
Okay, fair enough. So after centralized computing, we have client-server model. In a client-server model, as I mentioned earlier, a client requests services, a server fulfills services. Systems could be Windows Server 2008, Windows Server 2012. A client could be Windows 7. A server could also be Windows 7.
Could be technically.
Yes, yeah, and we'll actually talk about that next in peer-to-peer networking. In peer-to-peer networking, we've talked about a client, a device that requests services, a server, a device that fulfills services. In a peer-to-peer network, a device can function as either or. It can request services from another device, or it can fulfill services from another device. File sharing is an example of a peer-to-peer system. And in some small offices, they may find that a peer-to-peer network works okay for them. They don't need a centralized server to run their system.
Certain expenses related to decentralization. So if you've got 5 to 10 computers, it's a decision point, I guess you could say.
Exactly. Yep. After peer-to-peer networking, distributed computing. Distributed computing is basically a hybrid type of environment. It includes both client-server and peer-to-peer networks. Every device has its own processing power. So now we're getting away from, say, dummy terminals, and we're getting more into, as you mentioned, thin clients. So each device has the ability to process its own information, but it may still request information from other devices.
Yep. And in this case, distributed computing, when we say both client-server and peer-to-peer, we're Microsoft. Microsoft is very much a client-server environment. We have servers, we have clients, but it doesn't stop me as a user from creating a folder, putting content in it, and sharing it out to the network for other users to access. I'm now making kind of a peer-to-peer connection on this very large client-server network.
Hey, look, remote desktop services and remote sessions.
Shocked that slide made it. Shocking.
I think I put this back in here. As we mentioned, as Christopher mentioned earlier, everything old is new again. Centralized computing's made a comeback of sorts. Remote desktop services and remote sessions to computers are based off the centralized computing model. So basically what we have here is in remote desktop services is the ability from one system to do what we refer to as presentation virtualization. So now, over the network, I'm just getting a screen. So all the processing power is done at a central location, and all I'm receiving are screen updates. Thomas, you may say, I don't understand the benefit of this. Well, in a large network, thousands of clients, maybe you're running an older version of your client OS, and you now want to update what client OS your systems are running on.
9.1, when it's available.
Exactly. So now, what we might want to look at is instead of that hardware cost of updating all those clients to enable them to run the new OS, as a method, you may want to use remote desktop services. So now, my older client can run a newer operating system, but the operating system isn't run locally. Another example of why I can do this all day.
Well, I was gonna say the reverse might actually be true. We've decided to put all of our we've decided to send all of our old computers out to factory. It's 10 years old. We're running Windows XP. We don't want to run Windows XP anymore, which nobody should be running Windows XP anymore. But there are applications I have that have been written for XP that only run on XP. Well, we're gonna get every computer out of the building, and we're gonna replace them with brand new shiny hardware and Windows 8.1. I can't run applications on Windows 8.1. Someone on the network, some administrator can set up remote desktop services to allow me to remote in and run that application in an older environment in XP and Windows 7 elsewhere.
And at that point, all your data is held at a central location.
Oh, potentially.
Yeah. So as employer, what you could do is you could have your centralized server running remote desktop services. You could have people that remote desktop service in, use remote desktop connection, connect in. Now you have a bit of security added, because if they lose their data, or not their data, but their laptop, their physical device, all their information is still stored in that central location.
Absolutely.
To get them up and running, all you need to do is get them a new device, they connect to the remote desktop, and boom, they're up and running again. Servers. So servers, again, the easy definition, they provide services. Well, what type of services do they provide?
What don't they provide? In this case, we've just put a couple on here that are the most obvious examples. File services. 90% of people out there, regardless of IT career or just user in an office or at home, are familiar with file sharing, with getting a file off another computer, getting a file in some case off a central computer. That's the easiest example. Print services, in most offices, especially here, I don't have 100 printers connected to my computer on my desk, but I might want to print in color, I might want to print in black and white, I might want to print different sizes, I might want plotters so I can print posters. I'm not going to plug all those devices into my computer, and there are 100,000 people who also might want to use those printers. I can plug all of those printers into a centralized server and provide those printers through services to the entire network. The rest of these database, messaging, email, web, it's similar to some of our other lists we've had. These go on for days and days and days.
So we have a list here of client and server operating systems. This list is by no means inclusive of everything. We've just listed some Microsoft ones here.
It's weird. Weird that there's only show Microsoft.
How did that happen?
It's crazy.
Yeah, crazy. And as we said, remember there's client, there's server, there's peer, and some of these devices can or some of these operating systems can basically function as both. Peer-to-peer or P2P has recently taken on additional meaning, because we're kind of used to, hey, devices in our office have interconnected. The secretary wants to share something with the manager. Using peer-to-peer, they share that file. Now there are specific file sharing networks, Napster, Nutilit, G2.
Public file sharing networks.
Public, correct. Other technologies also that we may not even think about take advantage of P2P file sharing. Skype, voice over IP, or cloud computing.
We're not going to go near cloud computing. We could.
We could.
Spend another week. I'm going to spend a month on cloud computing.
There would be good stuff to be had. That's a great conversation.
Yeah, it is. In fact, we're going to have more of those here in NBA. So if once you learn networking, you decide to go from the beginning end to the finishing end in terms of knowledge and architecture, we're going to have lots and lots of cloud content eventually.
Well, and I believe that you can download these, so you can listen to them on your device as you ride the bus, or while somebody else is watching a TV show in your house that you don't care about,
Absolutely.
or whatever. So I mean, you can consume these.
I watch NBA sessions at the gym. I don't know if I'm supposed to say that. I'm kind of a Uber geek. But get on a treadmill and I'll just listen to an NBA course on Server 2012, what's new coming up anytime.
It's just a good way to keep up on the different technologies. Technology, there's two things. It's a treadmill, it never stops, and it's a fire hose. Information comes at you at such a high rate of speed that, yeah, so think fire hose, think treadmill, but also, there's a lot of information to be had, as I mentioned earlier. Think hub, because we're going to give it to you in a really gentle, nice manner, and just make sure that you get the good stuff.
Hopefully you think it's gentle and nice. We'll see how that, we get emailed on all this. You can let us know.
Okay. So now we're kind of at a summary about what we've talked about. So we've talked about understanding local area networks, LAN elements, design, perimeter networks, IP addressing, and LAN types. We talked about understanding network topologies and access methods. Topologies, star, ring, mesh. We've addressed Ethernet architecture, client-server, peer-to-peer networking models. We've actually covered quite a bit of content.
And if you're feeling overwhelmed, you should. And this is just the tiniest tip of the iceberg.
But the great thing is they can hit pause, walk away, go get a refreshment, go outside. They may already be outside.
I'm actually thinking, we should work on that. I'm thinking at some point that we're about to be refreshing as well, I think.
We're about. So let's look at some additional resources and next steps.
And you're actually going to see this slide as we go through each of these modules. We like to give you next steps. We don't want to give you this information and then just leave you sitting there like, well, now what do I do? Well, step one, obviously next step, go get a job. Do you want to? Hey, I learned some networking essentials. Let's go get a job.
Hey, not saying your current job is bad.
Exactly.
We're not labeling. No labels here.
But if you want to do something new and fun, this is a good start. So from a Microsoft standpoint, we offer some books. In this case, we have a specific study guide to this exam, that 98366 NTA Network Fundamentals. It's a Microsoft academic course. You can buy that book just about anywhere. Instructor-led courses, this one's a little more complicated. I put 4 of them on here. Because once you've done the networking MBA course, you may want more depth, you may want more breadth, you may want more information, you may want some hands-on, you may want to go into a room and play with cabling and play with network cards and connect some computers together. We offer courses, instructor-led, in-class courses for this course, for the other courses that are prerequisites, operating system fundamentals, and server fundamentals. And then the last one on there is the actual exam. If you feel like after this course you want to go give that a shot, if you want to take an instructor-led course and then go give that a shot, exam 98-366 is our networking fundamentals Microsoft Technology Associate exam. I think that's pretty much all we have for this module. So,
I think that's it.
Yeah.
I mean, we've covered some really good stuff here. We've covered some really good basics. I would say personally, I think people are ready for more.
I think so. So we're going to let them get a drink and we're going to come back and give them some more.
Okay, we'll see you really soon.
Welcome back. We're here for some more networking fundamentals. Hopefully you've enjoyed what you've seen so far. It's not too much, too little, just right. Again, referencing Thomas's comments earlier about a hug of knowledge as we present more and more of this to you over the next couple modules. We're going to dive right into our module 2. We're going to start talking about the OSI model today, and I'm going to hand it right off.
Okay, so module 2, defining networks with the OSI module. Again, let's talk about skill concepts for purposes of testing. The skills and concepts here are understanding OSI basics, defining the communication subnetwork, and defining the upper OSI layers, and defining the communication subnetwork. Standards. So we talked earlier about the English language, and because the English language has rules, that gives Christopher and I the ability, even if since we've grown up in different parts of the country, to still be able to communicate effectively. And maybe English speakers from other areas, we can still communicate effectively with those people. Standards allow devices, well, different manufacturers for hardware and software to be able to create hardware and software that intercommunicate. There are a set of rules that ensure this communication. Some examples of organizations that coordinate standards include the International Organization for Standards, the ISO. Now you may think, hey, International Organization for Standardization, ISO, well, that doesn't match up. Well, actually, since it's international, different countries have different names for this, so they just standardize on the ISO format. And this is basically a federation of standards from multiple nations, as I said. The American National Standards Institute, or ANSI, responsible for coordinating and publishing computer and information technology standards in the US. And then finally, the IEEE, International Electrical and Electronics Engineers, professional organization for the electrical and electronics field. People probably have heard of IEEE 802.3 or IEEE 802.
There's 802, really. There's a whole suite of standards within the 802 standards we use all the time.
Correct.
Wireless is one part right now.
Wireless, wired, Ethernet, all from these IEEE standards. So these standards are things that we use every day and don't even think about it. And that's part of the, that's the good part is, the idea of the network is to be able to seamlessly access resources without you having to think about it. I can pick up my device, I can access my Facebook account, internet, web browse, my files in SkyDrive, Dropbox, whatever. And again, it's seamless. I, as a user, don't need to know anything, but as people wanting to become more familiar with networking will learn that these are the standards committees that help make that happen.
Yep, they're the ones make it simple for everybody to talk to everybody.
Okay. So now let's talk about the OSI, Open Systems Interconnect. This is what makes network communication possible.
Essentially, yeah.
Is this model. The model is divided into 7 layers, and each layer provides services above and below it. So let's take a look at these layers. We're going to talk more about them later, so we're just going to give real brief overviews of them here. Layer 7, application layer, enables users and applications to access network services. People do get confused that they think that this is, as a user, a program that I use to access network services. It's not. It's the protocol the program I'm using uses to access network services. So just to clarify, layer 6, presentation layer, translates data into a common format. So we talked about ANSI. Another one is EBCDIC, and these are basically keyboard formats. Maybe different computers are using different formats. The presentation layer can translate that for you. The session layer, layer 5, establishes a communication session between devices. We've all been on the phone with somebody who, they pick up the phone, you have your conversation, you've initiated a conversation with them, you've established connection, and then at the end of the conversation, they don't say goodbye. They don't end the session seamlessly. Yeah, there's no clean, they're just hanging on, there's dead air, you don't know what's going on. So they don't have a very good session layer. Protocol is the problem there. Layer 4, transport layer, manages message fragmentation and reassembly. Layer 3, network layer, this manages data routing and creating subnetworks. We talked a little bit about subnetworks when we talked about LANs. Layer 2, data link layer, provides error-free transfer of data frames. And then finally, layer 1, physical layer, physical network media and signal strengths. Now, this model may seem kind of daunting, but again, this is the model that enables network communication. And people are always like, how am I going to remember this model? So, Christopher, you had one that you used. Which one did you use?
So they're mnemonics. You can build mnemonics for this 7-layer system to remember what these are in order, hopefully to remember. The one I had, there are a couple. The one that I've always known is all people seem to need data processing. Top down, all application, people, presentation, seam, session, to transport, need network, data link, processing, physical. All people seem to need data processing.
Okay, can I give you mine now?
Absolutely.
Okay, so my one that I've always been fond of, starting layer 7, application layer, a priest saw 10 nuns doing push-ups. Politically correct? Probably not, but you're going to remember it, aren't you? There you go. You are welcome.
And just for fun, we also have one from the bottom up. If you want to start layer 1, please do not throw sausage pizza away. Just in case you want
Maybe it's about lunchtime, you're thinking about food, please do not throw sausage pizza away. It works.
So the funny thing is, I've been in IT a long time. I know the 7 layers. I've known them the whole time. But I'm building this slide the other day, and I'm replacing, a graphic and turning it into an actual table so we can do more with it. And I actually use the mnemonic to write it out. So even though I know layers, I'm like, application, all, process. I wanted to make sure that I had them all in the right order. So
Right.
I refer to mnemonics I've been using for 15 years to.
Oh, they're really helpful.
Yeah.
I'm a huge fan of them. And those nuns doing push-ups, they're a fan too. So the OSI model layers, basically what we have here is, as we mentioned, it allows devices to intercommunicate. So what you see here is one device on the left-hand side under the title needs to intercommunicate with the other device. Maybe it's requesting a web service, a file and print service, maybe it's printing, whatever, there's communication. So the one starts, it goes through the different layers, and on the right-hand side of the table, it shows you what the data unit is called. Data, and then we get to segment, packet, frame, and then once we get to the physical layer, it becomes bits. It goes across the wire, that's our physical media, goes up the next one, and then basically it just gets deconstructed or reconstructed. So as the message goes down, it kind of gets deconstructed into the appropriate layer. As it hits the other side, it gets reconstructed.
Well, and the terms I use, I didn't want to go into too much detail as I was building these slides because we want to give people the right amount of information for this exam and have the information they're going to need to do the job, but not necessarily so much information like, after 3 slides I'm going to watch this and we're going home. The protocol data units on the right, you're not going to hear that term very often, but what happens as the data moves from top to bottom, you start with a piece of data at the application layer that is actually added to as you go from top to bottom. So it's either added to or in some cases broken apart. I start with a given amount of data, the next layer adds headers to that. The next layer breaks it into smaller consumable pieces to actually put on the wire and may add more information to those smaller pieces. So we're not going to dive into the actual technical details of what happens to each layer, but that's what this is describing, is that information is being, the data itself, your actual chunk of data is being modified, manipulated, broken apart, tagged, and built in a way that when it gets to the physical layer, those bits can be sent across and then successfully assembled up the stack on the other side.
So now let's go ahead and start taking a look at the different layers. Layer 1, physical layer, defines a physical and electrical media for data transfer. Whether this is wired or wireless, they need standards of some kind. You need to know how to build the media. For wireless, what signal strength do I use? What signal channel do I use? For wired, what type of wires and cabling do I use? What type of jacks do I use? Physical layer components include cables, jacks, patch panels, punch blocks, hubs, and mouse. Physical layer concepts, and we talked about some of this already, topologies. So what the network physically looks like. Analog versus digital encoding. When we think of analog, think of the analog clock. So it can be any time versus a digital. Digital clock is discrete. So it's either 10:05 and then it becomes 10:06. Maybe your digital clock doesn't have seconds on it, so let's take seconds away. So your clock is 10:05, and then it flips over and becomes 10:06. The gradation displayed to you is just it's one, and then it's the next. For analog, so you have the analog, you have the hands on the clock. It can be any value within that system. So think of it that way: hands on a clock or digital media. Bit synchronization, baseband versus broadband, multiplexing and serial data transfer. We'll get into these topics more later. And the unit of measurements at this level is bits. So Ethernet standards. We talked about the Ethernet. Ethernet standards is basically the standard for communication over networks. This has a frame type, so how data is packaged and sent over the wire. It has a physical media that can be described. As Christopher mentioned earlier, 802 is the Ethernet standard. 12.3, .11 are the different standards of Ethernet that describe frame type, physical characteristics, electrical characteristics. All those are described in those standards. Define physical and data link layers, so the first two layers. 100 base T is an example of an Ethernet standard. And to kind of break that down, the 100 stands for 100 megabit. The base is for baseband versus broadband, and T is for twisted pair cabling.
Which we'll look at later as well.
Yes. Baseband refers to the fact that the networks use digital signaling over a single frequency. Broadband systems use analog signaling over a range of frequencies, enabling multiple channels over the same physical medium. So again, if we think of digital and analog, not to hammer this, but I think this is kind of an important concept to understand. For digital, if you look at it here, digital is discrete. So with digital, the data is so zeros and ones. It's here or it's here. So it's very discrete. For analog, it can be anywhere within this range. So anywhere within this range up here or down here can be analog. With an analog channel, devices can speak anywhere within this channel. For digital, you have these two areas. It can be here or it can be here. So again, something to think about, hands of a clock versus digital clocks. Layer 2, data link layer. So the data link layer establishes, maintains, and decides how transfer is accomplished over the physical layer. So basically now what we're talking about are frame types. How is that content encapsulated and put over the wire? Christopher earlier mentioned MAC addresses, media access control addresses. They're defined at the data link layer. These are hexadecimal addresses assigned to a physical network card or to uniquely identify these cards.
In this case, MAC addresses ensure, in theory, although I don't think I've ever seen an example of this in the real world, they ensure uniqueness worldwide for network devices.
Correct. They actually, okay, so this is a little bit older. They had a problem where they gave, so for hexadecimal addresses, they assigned different manufacturers different addressing schemes or different addressing assignments. For a while they had, and I don't even remember the names of the companies, they gave them the same assignments. So now they were putting out network cards that had the same max. I was at a training center, and again, this was a while ago when people had problems with network cards and you had to be really careful with static electricity, where, so in a training center, you're moving hardware, you're ripping open the cache, you're removing network cards. So moving network cards, you use static would blow the address. So now you might have multiple systems that have the same MAC address, and the error that you would get is you'd bring one system online, it would be able to use the network. When you brought the other system online, it would blow the first system off the network. And then as you use each system on the network, it would blow the other system off the network. So, it was really interesting to troubleshoot.
I imagine.
I would say it was good times, but it was not good times. It was the opposite of good times, actually. So network interface cards and bridges are examples of devices at this layer, and the unit of measurement at this layer is frames. So media access control, which we've talked a bit about already, ensures unique addresses for the different devices. We've talked about what happens if devices don't have unique addresses, and manufacturers are typically assigned ranges of addresses. There are 6 octets in length, written hexadecimal.
And we're actually going to see an example here on the next slide.
So,
it's animated, so not just a
Okay.
We'll get to an example in just a moment.
and props to Christopher. This is some of his graphic magic here. So know that all this graphic amazement is coming from Christopher.
Unless you hate it, in which case it was someone else.
A vendor did it,
Yes.
I guess. Layer 2 switches are hardware-based and use the MAC addresses of each host computer network when deciding where to direct data frames. We've talked a little bit about switches already. So ports on the switch are mapped to different MAC addresses on the system. So if we look here, we'll see that, hey, these two ports are assigned to these two MAC addresses. So when a packet comes in for a specific device, it will only send to that specific device.
Yeah, and in this case, 2 things to note here. At the very top says layer 2 switches. That is a valid term, although 99% of the time when you hear the word switch, it's a layer 2 switch. We probably won't get too complicated in this session or in this course and talk about layer 3 switches, which do exist. We'll much to go into, considering it's actually overlapping with routers and switches. We're not going to go there. So usually when you hear the term switch, it's a layer 2 switch. And these addresses, they're not assigned, per se, to, say, the ports on this device, whereas a router is going to have IP addresses on the device. These, it just keeps track of. The switch knows what's plugged into it. It creates a little table, so it knows port 1 is that first MAC address. Port 6 is that second MAC address. It just knows that itself.
And so people aren't confused. People now will see devices that are switches and routers. So a lot of things that you'll see in the marketplace now, consumer-based devices, have multiple functionalities to them.
That's true, and a lot of it, it's a couple different things. One, it's the combining of functionality. A traditional router would have a network card for a network and a network card for another network, and that's what we're plugged into, and it would do the routing between the two. What you see now at home, especially if you're seeing a router, you go to the store and you buy a router for your internet, that is a router, and it does route traffic.
Okay,
between
that's
ports to
over
the
there.
It's also a switch because they provided you 4 ports to plug computers in your home or in your small office into. So it does both. It's not one device, essentially, there's 2 devices in that box. It's a switch and a router at the same time.
So VLANs, we've discussed VLANs a little bit already. Layer 2 switching can also allow for virtual networking or virtual LANs to be implemented. Again, this enables you to segment different areas of the switch, so entire bandwidth isn't thrown over either the switch, or you can allow communication of different segmented areas using the same switch.
Another fun little animation for this one.
Okay, so basically, like we just said, you can assume, okay, these 4 ports are one network, these 3 ports are another. Maybe you have accounting on one network, you have management on another. You do not want those to intercommunicate. You can use a virtual LAN to do so. Okay, so layer 3, network layer. This controls the operation of routing and switching to different networks. So it's using the network layer that subnetworks are created. This translates logical addresses or names to physical addresses. So as a user, I go to www.microsoft.com. The network layer is the one that translates that from that address or from that name to an address.
So when this happens, since we've already gone over the first 2 layers, we can talk about this now in a broader context. I'll go to www.microsoft.com. I do that. There's a process in the background that goes on that sends an IP back to my computer. It says that name has this address. And here we see Internet Protocol is a network layer protocol. There are services that will translate the name to the number. Like we just talked about in layer 2 with MAC addresses, there are also services that translate that IP into a MAC address. Or throughout my network, ways to figure out that MAC address isn't on my network and I need to route it out somewhere else to find it. So this name translation or number translation happens at multiple layers. It's another one of those things I was talking about where the packets are being modified as they go up and down. Each of those layers has protocols and applications within it that are doing things to make sure those packets get where they need to go.
Devices that work at this layer are routers and IP switches. Network layer components include IP addresses and subnets, and the unit of measurement at this level is packets. So we talked about layer 2 switches. Layer 3 switches are basically switches that work at the network layer. So now instead of using the MAC address, we use the IP address. They have the same functionality, they just work at addressing at a different layer. Layer 4, the transport layer. So we've talked about the physical layer, the data link layer, the network layer. Now we're going to talk about the transport layer.
I'm sitting here listening, making sure you get them all right. We're going through.
Christopher's
He's throwing
testing
these out
me.
of my mind. We'll see how it goes.
This layer ensures messages are delivered error-free and in sequence with no losses or duplication. Protocols at this level perform segmentation, ensure correct reassembly, and perform message acknowledgement and message traffic control. So if I have a 10-page document, and with this 10-page document, let's go back to our postcard analogy. I have a 10-page document, and I can only fit 10 words on a postcard, and postcards are how I need to transmit information to Christopher. So as this goes down the stack at a certain level, the transport layer, this 10-page document starts to get cut up into different smaller bite-sized pieces. These get put on postcards. When they hit the network level, it says, oh, and another thing that the transport level does is, so now I've cut all these up, I put them on postcards, well, I number them. I say, hey, this is number 1, this is number 2, this is number 3. So when Christopher gets this information, he can reassemble in appropriate order.
And make sure I'm not missing any.
Exactly. So, do my postcards, network layer, I address them, I get to the data link, that's me walking to the post office box, opening the mailbox, and then the physical is me throwing it in, and then the mail carrier handing those off to Christopher. Christopher gets them all, and receives them, gets them out of the mail. Now, what he needs to do is, so it went down my stack, and now back up Christopher's stack, he needs to reassemble and reattach all this stuff, and because I've numbered them, he can look at them and say, oh, I didn't get 15, you need to resend me 15. The unit of measurement used here is segments, or messages, and this layer contains both connection-oriented or connection-less connections. So if we look here, connection-oriented communication, this requires both devices involved in the communication to establish an end-to-end communication. And I see Christopher smiling over here. I think he has something pretty exciting
These
for
are
us.
2 of my favorite slides to have built. It's
Okay,
actually kind of fun for me.
so let's see what we have here. So at this point, okay, so the PC is basically, hey, I'm a PC, I'm gonna need services. The server, hi, I'm a server, makes an acknowledgement. I want to send you something important. Okay, I will watch for it. So we have this back and forth communication that's a connection-oriented communication.
We're aware that something's going to happen. We're making sure it happens correctly and properly and in order and in time.
And again, as we mentioned, packets not received can be reset. So now let's look at connectionless. So connectionless, end-to-end connection is not necessary before data is sent. So connection-oriented, maybe I'm looking at a file transfer. Maybe I'm looking at a web page. Connectionless would be streaming a video. I don't necessarily need every frame, but I do need certain information. So that information is kind of sent. We go back to our radio analogy where somebody's just talking. They don't know if the message is getting received or not. They're just sending the information out. That's kind of a connectionless communication. Every packet is sent, still has a destination in the header, but we don't necessarily know if it's going to be received. So here's the server. I have communication for you. Listen to me. And here the client's kind of sleeping because there's no response.
They're just listening. Server send it out. Hopefully someone's listening.
Yep. So connection-based protocols. The transport layer contains both connection-oriented and connection-less. We have TCP, Transmission Control Protocol, that provides a connection-based system, and UDP, which provides a connection-less, unreliable transport system. TCP and UDP, so TCP transport's used for logging in, file and print sharing, replication. So basically, when you need acknowledgement, you use TCP IP. UDP is used for one-to-many communications, broadcast, multicast, IP datagrams, audio streaming, things of that nature that don't need to be acknowledged.
Yep. Hopefully someone's listening and if things get dropped in transit. This is actually a protocol used in situations where packets can't be resent. One of the best examples I have of that is voice over IP. If I have a phone that's working on an IP network and I'm having a conversation with somebody anywhere else, if the packet that I'm creating by talking into my device is getting assembled and run through the layers and sent across the wire, if that packet doesn't make it, I can't rehab that millisecond of the conversation. It's just gone. So
Otherwise, you get chop, jitter,
yep, which you'll hear gaps, and that's because there are packets that may not make it for any one of 1,000 reasons, and if they don't, there's nothing you can do about it.
Well, and there are certain things that, say a conversation. If, as Christopher and I are having a conversation, I have to acknowledge every word he says, that's really going to delay the conversation. Versus we go to a more connectionless system where he can speak long sentences, and then I can respond in long sentences. That's more of a connectionless system where he's hoping I'm getting most of his words, and I hang on 85% of them. And he probably hangs on 75% of mine. I'm not sure, but so
We'll go with that. It's how much of it I remember.
so keep in mind there's certain overhead to a connection-oriented system. Yeah. So ports. Ports are a layer 4 protocol that a computer uses for data transmission. They're logical communication endpoints for specific program on computers for delivery of data sent. For example, we have two computers communicating. One computer is receiving web services from another. If I just send to the IP address a request for web services generically, it's not going to know how to respond to that. So what I need to do is specifically give it a port. I don't do that. The protocols do that. Give it a specific port to say, not only is it this address, it's this specific program I'm talking to. So go back to mail, our postcard analogy. Let's say Christopher and I have multiple postcard conversations going on. So I might address this postcard conversation as port 80, which is our term paper. Another postcard conversation we have might be port 443, which refers to some other conversation we have. So basically ports allow you to not only say this specific device, but this specific application or process within this device.
That's what I'm looking for. The analogy I used to use was a house. I'm sitting home on my couch, my doorbell rings. Now the analogy at this point is IP addresses. Someone out there in the world has found my IP address. That's how they're going to find my house. They use a street, a city, a state, a zip code to narrow it down. And an IP address is just that. They've narrowed it down to my house. They come to my house, they knock on the door. All I know is someone's at the door. I have to walk over to the door, and I have to look through a peephole around the window to find out what they want. That's what those ports are, what they want. If it's a guy in a little brown outfit with shorts on, holding the box in his hand, I know he wants to deliver me a package. I'm going to open the door, I'm going to take the package, I'm going to sign for it. If it's a guy also possibly with shorts on, but in blue outfits, and maybe wearing a hat, he's probably got some mail for me that I'm going to want to open up and read. And I might actually have to go get some mail and bring it to him to take with him when he leaves. So the ports act as almost a uniform. What are you here for? What do you need when you get here? And there's another part of this analogy for fun. We talked about firewalls earlier, which are sort of secure routers. That's what the people on the door is, so you can look through and see.
Oh, that's very nice. That's nice.
That guy's wearing a little brown outfit with shorts. I probably want to open that and take that package from him. That guy's got a knife in his hand. We're going to keep the door shut. We're not going to open the door for that one.
Well,
So-
you might. What if you want to live dangerously? Or what if that's the knife that you ordered from the... So...
Yeah, the fact he's holding his hand might be a little
But might be a little worried.
I think that would come in a box, but I guess maybe that's how you deliver things.
Okay, so that basically outlines ports, and then in this next section, we have the generic ports. Well, not generic, these are very specific ports. So these port numbers are always associated to these protocols. 21 FTP. So when you get on a site and try an FTP, you're using port 21. Port 23, Telnet. I mentioned port 80 before HTTP. So any web browsing you do is using port 80. If you want to do secure browsing, 443. HTTPS. And then you can kind of look through this list and see the different ports that are associated with the different programs.
So the way to impress your friends, if you know, are that kind of geek, you have contests at your house. Who can remember those port numbers and what services are assigned? People will flock to your parties if you start them off with port competitions.
How could you become more popular than that?
You think of a couple ways.
Okay, so layer 5, session layer. Session layer manages session establishment, maintenance, and termination between network devices. Example, when you log on or log off, again, we go back to that phone call analogy. When you start a phone conversation, hello, how are you? You initiate the conversation. I've called about blah. Hey, Christopher, I've called about this presentation. So Christopher would answer, we'd go back and forth, and then when we were finally finished, we'd be like, okay, goodbye. And then if he had a decent session layer protocol, he would say goodbye also, and we would cleanly disconnect the session. This layer also controls the name and address databases for OS, such as NetBIOS. NetBIOS, Network Basic Input-Output System, is a protocol that works at this layer for naming, creating names and associating names to computers. And actually, Microsoft was one of the people, or one of the companies that implemented this for a way to associate names to computers.
Yep, a long time ago, this was one of the protocols Microsoft implemented. It's not so widely used anymore, but it's still out there. You'll still see it.
Layer 6, the presentation layer, translates data format from sender to receiver in various OSs that might be used. Concepts include character code conversion. Remember I mentioned maybe ANSI versus EBCDIC, the different keyboard types. Or not necessarily keyboard types, but data representation. How do you represent an A in this system versus how do you represent an A in this system? Presentation layer is the one that translates that. Redirectors work at this layer, such as map network drives that enable a computer to access file shares on a remote computer. Again, a translation system. And then finally, layer 7, application layer, serves as the window for users and application processes to access network services. End user protocols, FTP, SMTP, Telnet, and RAS work at this layer. Again, this isn't supposed to be confused with the application that you're working with. This isn't Mail. This isn't the Mail UI that I'm using. The Mail UI that I'm using that sends information down the stack, it hooks into the application layer. The program itself isn't the application layer. And then again, the OSI model revisited. If we take a look at the slide here, we see application, presentation, session, transport, network, data link, and physical. We see the different protocols associated with each layer, and then different devices that might be associated. One thing to keep in mind, or that I always thought was kind of interesting,
thank you,
is
Molly.
notice TCP and IP are at different levels. People think that TCP and IP are opposite of the same thing. They're actually not. It refers to a portion of the transport protocol and a portion of the network protocol. In the scheme of things, not overly important, but a fun geek fact.
Again, ways to impress your friends at parties.
Exactly.
We're chock full of ways to impress your geek friends at parties.
Obviously, Christopher and I don't go to a lot of parties, but if we did, we would have knowledge to share with you, and would be happy to do so. The TCP model. So we talked about the OSI model. The TCP model is actually a little bit different.
I'm not
Model,
sure.
and it allows interconnectivity between devices and allows intercommunication. The TCP model is only comprised of 4 layers. The application layer, which defines the TCP IP application protocols. The transport layer that provides communication.
I'm trying to figure out where it did go.
Data, and then the network interface details how data is physically sent through the network. Something interesting about the TCP model is that the TCP model doesn't really
For my
designate
thinking,
on the
it
OSI
could
level,
be
physical or data link
just
protocol.
to
They only
intergaps.
give information for the upper layers, and then figure, hey, data link and physical, we're not going to
I
worry
know.
about those layers. Other companies or other areas can worry about that. We're just going to worry about the upper level transport.
That's
Let's take a look at
okay.
the OSI model compared to the TCP model. Again, you see here the OSI model 7 layers, the TCP 4 model 4 layers. The application and TCP model is equivalent to the application, presentation, and session layer in the OSI model. Transport layers are equivalent.
That-
Network
that-
layer routing in OSI model is similar to the internet layer routing.
That's
in
not
the
from
TCP
recent
model. And then
mommy
network access
at
layer,
all.
TCP model isn't really concerned. They're like, oh, okay, well, you can use Ethernet, you can use FDDI, you can use whatever you want. We don't care. We're more concerned with
No.
the levels. And most of you
I
probably already
haven't.
know this, but if you don't, TCP/IP is the protocol used for internet standards and is the protocol used for internet communication. Wow, we're at the summary already. Who would have thought?
Yeah.
We got through all this information already.
Time flies when you're having fun.
I know.
It flies sometimes when you're not having fun, but hopefully everybody's having a good time.
We should do that more. Yeah, they better be.
So basically the summary here, understand the OSI model by
Yeah.
defining each of the layers from a theory perspective. 7 layers. Application, presentation, session, transport, network, data link, and physical.
Nice. Well done, well
I see
done.
Christopher over here
Yeah.
like ticking them off as I go down. Pre-saw 10 nuns doing push-ups was kind of going through in my head. You need to be able to separate the functions of the lower levels of the OSI model from the upper levels where message creation begins. Basically what they're talking about here is understand
Right, no.
physical areas of the OSI model compared the physical and routing levels compared to basically packet assembly, fragmentation, reassembly, session, connection-oriented, connectionless. Those are kind of different areas. Understand the differences between layer 2 and layer 3 switches.
I know.
Layer 2, MAC address, layer 3, networking or IP addresses, and differentiate between the OSI model, 7 layers, and the TCP model, 4 layers.
I need a burrito mnemonic somewhere.
A burrito?
Every time I hear 7 layers. Every time I hear 7 layers.
You're thinking burrito? And we just had
Okay.
lunch, too.
No, that could be why. That could be why.
You're thinking food.
I guess so.
Finally, additional resources and next steps. Christopher, what do we have?
So we saw this one in some of our other modules. It's the same information. The MCA Networking Fundamentals Microsoft Official Academic Course Book. Our instructor-led courses, there are 4 of them. 2 specifically that pertain to networking fundamentals. One of those is a 5-day 2-pack to save you some money and some time, networking and security combined. And then exams and certifications. The reason we're here is to hopefully get you started on preparing and able to pass the 98-366 Networking Fundamentals Microsoft Technology Associate Exam. Those exams are getting shorter, that's for sure. Those titles they just get longer.
Believe it or not, sadly, we're at the end of this module. So we've talked about the OSI model, we've talked about standards committees, we've talked about TCP, we've talked about burritos. Have I missed anything that we
I don't think
discussed?
so. Once we got burritos, we were good.
I
Module
think,
closed.
yeah, I think we're pretty much done with what we need to say here. Thanks for listening, and watch the other videos. Why not?
Yeah.
Welcome back to 98366 Networking Fundamentals. Christopher Chapman. Say hi, Christopher.
Hi, how's it going? How's everybody doing? Hopefully still with us.
Thomas Willingham. We're here to talk about understanding wired and wireless networks. So we have discussed previously the OSI model. Now we're going to talk about the layer 1, physical layer, and we're going to talk about wired and wireless networking. So if we look at, again, the skills and concepts for this, we're going to talk about recognizing wired networks and media types and comprehending wireless networks. So let's just dive right into it. First of all, we have twisted pair cable. Twisted pair cable is the most commonly used cable type in local area networks. Relatively easy to work with, flexible, efficient, fast. Contains 8 wires grouped into 4 twisted pairs. The 4 twisted pairs are basically like blue, green, orange, and brown. And the twisted wires reduce crosstalk or noise and interference between the wires.
Which we're going to talk about more in a little while.
We will. This shows a graphic of what a twisted pair cable might look like with all the wires spread apart.
I thought about actually getting a cable. I mean, we have some in here. We could technically just cut one apart and show it on camera. But one, I'm not sure we have the zoom capabilities. I'd have to walk up the camera with it and show it to everybody. And two, I don't know if the studio here would be that appreciative of us cutting our cables up to show students a demonstration. That's good. That's the response I would have expected. We're not going to talk about what I just saw from the back of the room.
We received feedback from the back of the room. We'll just say it wasn't positive. It was more of a negative type of feedback.
Apparently the graphic is going to have to do.
Exactly. So let's go back to the graphic. So we see the 4 twisted pairs here, blue, green, orange, and brown. Typically, this is just a cable. You're probably more used to seeing a jack on the end of this. But all these wires are kind of moved apart. They're separated. They're shoved into the jack. And then you use tools to basically crimp that down. We'll talk about those tools in a minute. Twisted pair categories. So there's different categories of twisted pair. And this basically rates the speed that can go over that category. So we have category 3, 10 megabits per second, category 5, cat 5, and typically you just say cat 5, cat 3.
You may have heard that term or will hear that term in the future.
Cat 5, 100 megabits per second, cat 6, 1,000 megabits per second plus.
1,000 plus.
A plus is important. And then tools for twisted pair cabling. If you've basically done any type of this, you're very familiar with these. On the far left, the plier-looking things are strippers. We can say that because we're referring to tools,
Yes.
strippers.
Yes, indeed.
And basically what this does is strip the outer wiring off and allows us to get to the metal component within the wire. So the jack you see kind of in the middle here above the tester, the jack, you basically take the bare wiring, shove it in there, and then crimp it.
So to clarify real quick, the strippers we were talking about on the left side, these are the tools of a seasoned professional because it's not an actual wire stripper with a gauge on it that you put the wire in and it just pulls off the cladding because it's the right diameter. These are actually wire cutters. You gotta spend some time just making sure you're cutting the sheath and not the wires inside. These are professional wire strippers, is what I call these.
Finesse. There's some finesse involved.
Maybe a little frustration. I was actually gonna say when this slide came up, you see that first tool on the right, and if you know what that tool is, you probably don't have fond, pleasant, joyful memories of using one ever.
I do.
Yeah.
I have some
Love
fun.
some wire crimping?
I love me some wire crimping. It was totally back in the day, but yeah, I've done my share. The next one over, the ones that have the little like thumb holder in it, that is basically wire strippers for the rest of us.
Yeah.
So you can put the wire in here and basically just close it, and it has already an offset of where it is. It'll just strip the cable off for you. The orange handled devices, those are jack crimpers. So basically you can put the jack in there, you can put the wire in there, punch it, and it just punches everything down. And then finally in the middle, Christopher, what do we have in the middle? Tell the audience what they want.
We have a cable tester. So once you've taken a bare wire, pulled it out of the box, pulled it out of a wall, taken it out of your living room, connected to the computer because you want to try this at home, and you've cut the ends of it off with the clippers on the left, and you've stripped them down to just the bare wires, and you've got these little jack ends, little connector ends in your hand. You've separated out those pairs in the right order, which we're going to show you what the right order is here in a couple minutes, and you've finagled those 8 individual wires into that cable end just right, and you've stuck it into that crimp tool, and you've crimped it down. And by this point, if you're in tears because this is bringing back memories of hours of your life that you'll never get back. You can then take both ends of that cable you've just made and plug it into that box in the middle, and you push that button that says test, and then when those lights don't light up, you cry some more because you've got to cut the ends back off and try it all again. Hopefully, again, once you've spent those hours, and that's really, I think, like earning your dues part of
I think that's totally paying
Once you've created about 1,000 of these cables, and you can spin up this process in about 5 minutes and plug that cable and push that test button, and it lights up on both sides, you'll be happy. You'll never have to do it again.
Well, and due to networking communication, it's very important that you have the appropriate red, blue, green put in the jack correctly, and it's the same on both ends.
Maybe. We're going to talk about that in a couple minutes.
True, but typically, it's the same on both ends.
Yeah, typically it is. We'll give you some bonus knowledge for those of you who want to go above and beyond in your potential current or future IT environments.
Stay tuned for said bonus knowledge. So we have types of patch cables. We have straight through cables, and these are cables that I was referring to, the most common type. The wiring on both ends of the jack are exactly the same. One wire is for transmit, one wire is for receive. So the different wires have different functionality. Well, if you've ever, without a hub, tried to hook a computer directly to another computer, Christopher, what happens?
Nothing. Typically, nothing.
Because
if you're using one of these straight through cables, nothing's going to happen. So this relates to the next slide, although we're going to kind of back and forth here for a minute with some of the slide material. If I plug one computer into another cable with a regular straight through patch, or one computer into another computer with one straight through cable, I'm not going to get any connectivity. Those computers don't have the right kinds of ports on them to accommodate that setup. So I need to create what's called a crossover cable. I need to take, and a little more bonus knowledge again for all this trivia and the parties you have with your geek friends, of an 8-wire unshielded twisted pair cable like we're talking about. Only 4 of those wires are actually used by most NICs. Those wires are in pairs, and to create a crossover cable, you build one end the normal way, and then you build the other end with the 2 pairs reversed. And that's called a crossover cable. You can plug that into 2 computers directly, no hub, no switch, no other interconnecting devices, and communicate between those 2 computers as if you're on a radio network. So that's a little bit of bonus information. You can make your own crossover cables, know when to use crossover cables. But the question that comes to me when I'm talking about this is, how can I plug a cable into a switch and it works?
Let's find out. So MDI, medium dependent interface, a type of Ethernet port connection using twisted pair cabling. This allows computers to communicate with other devices, and the wires have to cross somewhere, which is what Christopher was just talking about. Instead of using crossover cables for direct connect, there are also MDI X ports, medium dependent interface crossover. And these are ports that take care of the cross, so you can use a typical network cable, plug them into these MDI X ports, and plug a device directly into another device.
Now where this gets a little confusing is most switches these days are auto-sensing. They'll actually have MDI and MDX. The reason we specify both, or we show you both here, is there used to be devices, switches, hubs, routers, that had specific MDX ports on them that you would know you could plug a straight through cable in, it would be a crossover. You could plug a crossover and it would straighten out, wouldn't really work for what you're trying to do. Most switches these days have auto-sensing ports that will be listed in their features. They know what kind of cable you're plugging in, if they do or don't need to make that electronic crossover for you.
So we have ports. We also have patch panel and RJ45 wall jack. So now we're kind of getting into the behind the scenes networking. Your patch panel is typically in your wiring closet and takes wiring and basically in a one-to-one fashion specifies a specific position on the patch panel to a specific wall jack. So wall jack in Bob or Jane's office is associated to patch panel area 5 or patch panel port 5.
And you can see it on these, they actually give you a little bit of assistance. There may be times when people watching this video will have to actually build out closets or build patch panels that you're installing into an empty rack that aren't pre-cabled. You're actually going to be running this cable in your facility, so you're going to have to punch this down. Using another tool we're going to see in a couple of slides, you'll notice they help you out a little bit by putting colors on some of the points so you can know which wires go in which spots for colors to get that lineup correct. The one on the bottom, you can see, I don't know if you can see it, on the edge is where they kind of put that guide. They don't have room on the top, so it's down on the edge or even on the other side where you can't really see right now.
So for the wall jack, basically here, and for the patch panel, here, 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 and here.
And once again, Uber Geek Knowledge Phone and Pressure Friends, learn the order of wires in a typical RJ45 connector in order, and then the crossover order. And then the friends will probably deliver one of your knowledge.
You must be really popular at
No,
parties.
you know, I go outside all the time.
So we've talked about patch panels, we talked about RJ45 jacks, we talked about crimpers, the tools to make the cables. Here's some of the tools needed to create the patch panel and to create, to test some of those connections that we've made. RJ45 jacks, the cutting tool, the wire stripper, the punch down tool. We also have a continuity tester, so once you've created the cable or you've created the patch panel wall run, you need to ensure that the cable didn't get crimped somehow. Maybe your hand went crazy while you were using the stripper and you cut into the cable or something, midpoint. The continuity tester will just verify that the cable works well. Yep.
Pretty sure I've used that one too.
So typically what you would do is at the wall jack, you would plug in, so if we look,
Actually took a second to figure out that picture, how all the pieces fit together.
yeah, so here, this is what you click into the wall jack, just so this represents the wall jack. This is what you click into the patch panel or the hub that's connected to the patch panel. This basically sends a signal, it bounces back off this and comes back, and then it tells you basically how good or bad a wiring job that you've done. Yep. So some things that we have to deal with as we basically do this physical cabling, or actually any network has to deal with this, physical or wireless, attenuation. So attenuation is basically the signal degrading over distance. Yep. So as distance is traveled, the signal becomes less. If you're a fan of The Big Bang at all, you'll know that Sheldon for one Halloween dressed up as the Doppler effect. And the Doppler effect basically being that as a device gets closer to you, it gets louder. As it goes further away from you, it gets quieter. And that's kind of an example of attenuation. As it gains further distance and that sound has to travel more distance to get to you, it's lower because of attenuation. And that's simplifying, and I'm sure there's somebody out there with a science degree who'll want to argue with me. Knock yourself out. I'm sure you're right. That's just a really simple, basic explanation.
Feel free to yell at this video all you want.
Hey, yeah,
we
definitely.
will listen attentively.
Exactly. Pause it. Pause it in a
Yeah.
way that it makes like we're listening. In fact, maybe we'll set aside some area of the video that quality listening time.
Sit here very attentively.
Yeah, we'll both be like, and we might even nod knowingly. So, because again,
I'm gonna keep that in mind,
yeah,
actually.
we're here for them.
That's true.
Christopher, this is all about them learning and them getting what they need. So attenuation. Along with attenuation is interference. And interference is basically things that disrupt the signal or modifies the signal in some manner that travels along the wire, or this could also be a wireless issue. Interference could be wired or wireless. Interference could be caused by electrical sources, lights, electrical outlets, motors, appliances. Anything that uses an electrical signal of some kind or a wireless radio signal of some kind can be interfered with.
Well, in case of wireless, I'm thinking walls.
Yeah, exactly.
Hills, if you're not line of sight, trees, cars, a lot of things.
An example of interference, there was a teaching class, there was a student who explained the circumstance to me, told me it took them a while to figure it out. You're gonna like this. So every day between basically 7 and 9 and 3 and 6, their network would degrade considerably. It would degrade really, really bad. What they found was their wiring closet was right by the elevators. So during peak traffic time, when people were going up and down the elevators would cause interference with their network signal.
Those are big motors.
Yep. So you never know where interference is gonna come from. And troubleshooting, which we're not going to really deal with here, but troubleshooting is an art. I mean, people think there's science, and there is science to it, but you got to be really creative and really think outside the box, because nowhere is there going to be a checkbox that says check elevators by your patch panel.
Nope, that is not going to be our troubleshooting list anywhere.
EMI, electromagnetic interference. Disturbance can affect electrical circuits, devices, and cables due to electromagnetic conduction and possibly radiation.
I like that this says possibly radiation. I'm pretty sure if that's an issue, I'm not going to worry that much about troubleshooting it. I'm going to worry more about leaving.
Yeah. When you see radiation, I'm not thinking, oh, I wonder if I got good network
I wonder
signal.
why the signal's so degraded.
I'd be thinking, why am I glowing? It's time to get out. Any type of electrical devices can create EMI, TVs, air conditioning units, motors, unshielded electrical cabling.
The best example I have of this is not a networking example, but it is a data example. Again, dating myself 10, 15 years ago, we were using phones still. Those phones plugged into the wall, and they were wireless. They were cordless phones. You take it off the base, you walk around your house. This was the greatest thing ever. Oh, I remember the days. And there were two problems. One, microwaves. You start your microwave, and your little phone base sitting right next to the microwave.
Gotta get your burrito.
And all of a sudden, your phone call's all staticky and terrible. But more related to networking, directly, I actually had to deal with this in a couple of customers' houses. I own a consulting company, we did house calls and worked on networks in people's houses. And I was in the house, and she's telling me, our wireless network just keeps failing. Just keeps failing, we don't know why, it just keeps failing. We're on it, it's going great, and it just stops. And I'm in the house troubleshooting, testing, checking, websites, pinging. Why is this not working? And I hear someone pick up the phone in the house. And it was when 2.4 gigahertz wireless phones,
We're on the same channel.
had
We're on
just
the
come
same
out. Yeah, and they would turn that phone on and kill the wireless.
Yep.
So some good stories about, directly in this case, electromagnetic, magnetic, or in that case, the next slide, radio frequency interference.
Yeah, and these are, so we talked about interference generically. Now we're talking about specific types of interference.
Yep.
So radio frequency interference, AM, FM transmissions, cell phone towers, typically considered part of the EMI family. Filters can be installed in the network to help eliminate signal frequency being broadcast.
Anyone using DSL? Give me a single little filters you need to put on your.
Yeah.
Because there's actually, in the case of DSL, interestingly, there's interference from the same wire, because that wire is carrying two signals.
Crosstalk. When the signal that's transmitting on one copper wire or pair of wires creates an undesired effect on another wire or pair of wires. Undesired effect, that sounds so minimal. Oh look, an undesired effect. How much hair have you pulled out due to crosstalk?
I don't know. Honestly, it comes down to that troubleshooting again. And unfortunately, when it comes down to interference, you kind of shotgun approach it. There are these 20 things. Okay, let's just go through the list of the big things that could be causing this problem and get rid of them. And you get rid of them, and then the problem goes away. You never actually figure out which one it was because you were in a hurry and don't really have a process for one at a time and then test and then one at a time and then test. So probably a fair amount.
Well, and the really difficult issues to troubleshoot are the ghosty issues, the intermittent issues. Things like, the network's down from 7 to 9, 3 to 6. Those are a little bit more hard and fast. But say we talked about the MAC numbers that we're saying, the MAC conflict. But that was so ghosty because sometimes a computer would come up and we'd have a class that would use 2 computers that had the same MAC address, so it would kick one off. Other times we didn't. So sometimes this would work, sometimes it wouldn't. So those ghosty issues can be really hard to deal with. So crosstalk, we've talked about unshielded twisted pair. Next we have shielded twisted pair. Notice each cable, they're individually wrapped, kind of like candy bar.
Sort of, I was actually thinking individually wrapped in like not candy.
Yeah, see, candy bar. See, look at that. We're not only giving people knowledge, we're bringing a little bit of joy into their life. Candy, things that taste good. What more could you want?
That's true. You have Oreos and candy so far.
Yep.
It's the best class ever.
Ever. This, you'll need a little bit more specialized tool to strip and remove, because you not only have to strip the overall cable, you need to strip the shielded components, you need to get the wire. So this can be a little bit more difficult to deal with.
You also need a bigger budget.
Yes.
It's more expensive and a little more difficult to handle. So shielded twisted pair is not terribly common in the world as we know. At least not that I've ever seen.
No, I haven't yet. Plenum rated. Plenum rated basically deals with if the cable catches on fire, how much is it going to smoke? How much of a toxic cloud is it going to release as it catches on fire? This is stuff for wiring in walls that you can't really get to. That's sprinkler systems that when they flip on, they can't get to it. So they have a Teflon coating that makes them a little bit more impervious to fire. Used in situations, because standard twisted pair cables have a PVC jacket, which can emit, like I said, a gas as they get heated up and as they burst in flames and cause problems. An undesired effect, as it were. Yeah, we don't want that.
Burning your network cables.
That's right. And causing gas and polluting the environment.
That's true.
Undesired
That's what I
effect.
have to be worried about while my building's burning down around me. Hope this gas isn't toxic.
Fiber optic cable transmits light over basically a plastic or glass type wire. So now we have the transmission of light instead of electricity over a cable. The benefits here that we get, you don't really get any interference unless the cable gets kinked or managed somewhere. People are unable to snoop fiber optic type network. They're really good for high speed, high distance, and high capacity transmission. When they first came out, people would do these by hand, would do fiber optic by hand.
I've heard those stories.
So there's 2 cables. There's a send and receive because again, it only goes one way on the channel. So there'd be a send cable and a receive cable. You'd have to very carefully, and this is bundled with all kinds of like Christmas goodies around it. So you have the sheath, and then you have a shielding, and then you have a plastic component around that, and then a couple other layers, and then you have the actual core to it. So you would have to snip the cable and kind of get your way through this to the core, and then you would have to burnish the end of the core so you could hook that to a connector to get it to work. I had somebody in one of my classes bring one of those systems up one time, bring one of those systems in one time. It was really difficult. It definitely was challenging. But with fiber optic cable, again, high speed, high capacity, long distance. So
given all that, all I'm hearing is good things. My brain wonders, why don't I use this everywhere? Why don't I use this at home? It's so much faster. Why can't I connect all my computers with fiber optic versus these shielded and unshielded twisted pair cables that are subject to interference and crosstalk? Why not just fiber everywhere?
That's a really good question. The problem with fiber optic, if you can call it a problem, it's a trade-off. It's very expensive. And I'm not quite sure how to say this, but you need a much higher level of skill to deal with it than twisted pair. Twisted pair, I'm not saying that a one-armed monkey can do twisted pair. You need a skill set to be able to do twisted pair, but the tools needed and the skill set needed to deal with fiber optic is just kind of that next level.
Okay. I'm trying to find some cost while we're sitting here talking about trying to find some comparison. I'm thinking about it's saying about 1,000 times.
1,000.
The expense is about 1,000 times.
That's a big
different. Yeah, they're talking about per 100 feet of cable. 100 feet of Cat5. I mean, these days cost you $20.
Exactly.
30. You're not gonna find fiber. Plus, and the cost isn't necessarily the cable. The cost is the devices to plug the cable into. Fiber switches are exorbitantly expensive. It's good technology. It's great technology. It has its advantages. It has its speeds. It's expensive. You're gonna use it in data centers. You're gonna use it as your backbones. You're gonna use it as connecting data centers together over large areas.
Okay. So your fiber optic cables, here's your cabling standards, your mediums, and your maximum distances.
And I'll preface this slide because when I was in the boat that some of our viewers at this point maybe and sitting at home watching this video right now thinking, do I really have to memorize all of those? I think I have yet in all of the certification exams I've taken and all of the networks I've worked on to need to know all of this information. I'm not a fiber optic installer. I'm not in a position, or never been in a position where I need to know all of these fiber standards and all the information that goes along with them.
Okay, but let's take a look at what we know so far and take a look at these numbers because we can still get information from this.
Well,
Because
and if you're a designer, you'll need this. You'll need to know if you get to the point in your career, you're architecting data centers, you're creating geographically dispersed solutions, you're building backbones for networks, which I never got to the point where, from a networking standpoint, I was building out fiber solutions to connect data centers. So,
well, if we look at these cable standards, before we talked about 10 base T or 100 base T. Here we have 100 base FX. So although we don't understand these standards per se, we still have information. So 100, so we know we're dealing with 100 megabit per second.
Yep.
Base, so it's a baseband technology, not a broadband technology. And FX, okay, so that gives us the idea that, okay, well, it's not a twisted pair thing, so we need to figure out what that FX thing is. So even though we don't necessarily know these standards directly, we still have information that we can pull from what we have.
or use to build them.
Yes.
Basically, says what's the fiber standard? Well, I know it's 100 megabit, I know it's baseband, fiber FX.
Yeah, there you go. So far we've talked about our different types of wired networks. Let's talk about wireless networks. You notice that I don't even have to look at the slides now.
That's good. That's awesome.
Yeah, my presenter skill set's like, I think I've gained like another little dot here that I can apply to a skill set.
There you go.
Your presenter skill set has gone up one. Ding. Sweet. Now I don't have to look at the slides anymore and I can move that over. Although periodically, if you see me look down like this, or if you see me look right there, I'm looking at slides. So wireless networks. So basically we've talked about wired networks. The device is physically connected by wire of some kind, by a physical medium of some kind to the hub, switch, router. Wireless, remember we talked about wireless access points. Wireless allows a device, smartphone, tablet, laptop, whatever, to connect to a network with no physical media. So it enables connection without a wire, or it enables connection without wiring, provides a degree of portability, extends connectivity to pre-existing wireless networks. As Christopher and I talked about earlier, wireless networks don't typically stand alone. They're typically an additive portion of a wired network. So I have my wired network, and then I have wireless components to my wired network. Some wireless devices can be connected directly to each other, point to point. Wireless network adapters. So whether it's a wireless system or a wired system, we still need the ability to connect to the network itself. And that's where these wireless network adapters come in. Again, they allow connectivity between your device and the network, and they come in a variety of shapes and sizes. USB, PC card, internal PC, PC Express adapter card, numerous types of
Simple
adapters.
phones built in right here.
There we go. As Christopher's showing his phone right now.
There is a wireless adapter. There are actually two wireless adapters. One for the network for the cell provider, and one as an actual Wi-Fi adapter.
Okay, so really good example of a device that connects to the network that has multiple connections in it. The phone connection, the wireless connection. I can pull information down. It becomes a client. I can push information up, or somebody can request service from it. I can text. And again, all this happens seamlessly on the client. Yep. Wireless access point. So again, it enables wireless devices to connect to the network. They can also act as a router, firewall, and IP proxy. So basically, we have the graphic representation for wireless portion of the network. And here we have some lights showing the use of WLAN. It's a wireless G. And we're connected to the internet. So the fact that we see that this is wireless and it's connected to the internet, what do we know about this device?
Well, this is very similar to what we talked about earlier as the kind of new definition of router, or almost a consumer version of a router, where it's going to serve multiple functions. It's going to connect those Ethernet ports. I mean, there's cables plugged into this. It's connecting my wired devices and my wireless devices both together and out to the internet.
Okay, so this might be a switch. It might be a router. So again, a device that has multiple functionality to it. Oh, and because it connects wireless to wired, it's a bridge.
Yep.
Wireless modes. Different modes to connect to a wireless network infrastructure. Wireless clients connect to and are authenticated by a WAP, a wireless access point, or ad hoc, used when all the clients communicate directly with each other.
And I don't know if some people know this or some people don't know this. Similar to a computer at your house, you don't have to have a hub or a switch to get your computers to talk to each other. We mentioned creating a cable that's got the wires reversed on one end. You can plug that crossover cable into both of your devices, and they'll communicate with each other. With wireless devices, if I have a laptop and a tablet and a phone in my house, I can set those up to be ad hoc, and they'll connect to each other without the use of a central wireless device.
What benefit do I get having that central wireless device?
Centralized managed, centralized security, centralized connectivity outward. If you've got these three devices in ad hoc mode, you have no connectivity outside of those three devices. They can talk to each other, but that's it. A centralized access point or router will allow you to connect to the internet, connect to a wired network elsewhere on location in your LAN. It will also allow you to centralize security policy, the encryption that happens during the wireless communication, which is a big issue that we're going to talk about in a minute as well.
Okay. Wireless LAN, again, composed of at least one WAP, wireless access point, and a computer or handheld device that connect to the WAP. Devices are Ethernet based, but built on other networking architectures. Again, what we're kind of reinforcing here is the fact that wireless networks don't stand on their own.
Most of the time.
Ensure compatibility, the WAP and other wireless devices must all use the same IEEE 802.11 standard.
That one's mostly true. What you do get is you get devices that will be backwards compatible. You may have a wireless access point that supports 802.11a and b and g all at the same time. So I can connect any of those three types of devices to one central device. But in this sense, that the access point and the endpoint device both have to subscribe to A.
Correct.
802.11a or 802.11b. You just make devices that support more than one at a time.
And then wireless fidelity, Wi-Fi, this is what people are most familiar with, is a trademark to brand products that belong to a category of WLAN devices. Other wireless devices include a wireless repeater and a wireless bridge. A wireless repeater is basically used to extend signal. A wireless signal only goes so far, typically about 100 feet or so, depending on the environment, maybe a bit longer, maybe a bit shorter.
A lot shorter.
Yeah, you have it in your house, and you notice that sometimes you put it in areas of the house that it doesn't work that well. You put it in other areas of the house that works better. Typically, in the house, higher is better, I found.
Yep.
So wireless repeater extends coverage. Wireless bridge. Bridge can connect different 802.11 standards together. As Christopher mentioned earlier, wireless A, wireless B, G, N, allowing interconnection.
Yep.
So we talked about a switch, a hub, a bridge, a router. And again, don't be confused by the fact that a lot of the times consumer devices, you'll see that they're a mixture or hybrid of device. So if you go out specifically looking for a bridge device and don't see it, that's not necessarily a bad thing. That just means, hey, that possibly incorporated into that router that you're looking at or that switch that you're looking at. So as you buy a device, ensure that you look at what's included in the device, what functionality is included.
And by definition, they don't really use the term bridge anymore. Bridges were, by definition, ways to connect different technologies. So you'd have coax on one end and Cat5 on the other. With a wireless access point, this bridge, it has to be, because you're connecting that wireless client to a wired network. Your media is different on either side of the device. They just kind of lump that term into, or that functionality into numerous other devices.
Right. So again, we're back to standards. So our WLAN standards include 802.11, and 802.11, the IEEE 802.11 is wireless. And then within that, there's different categorizations of wireless. And then you see here, A is 54 megabits per second, B 11, G 54, 11, and 600, ding ding. And then they work at different frequencies.
And what we don't have on this table, because you kind of wonder why was A 54 and B dropped down to 11, and then G came back up to 54. A lot of this was a distance thing. They had 54 megabits per second, but it was very short range. They went with B, they had to slow it down, they got exponentially more range out of it. Then with G, they were able to take that same range and bring that 54 megabits per second back out that distance. And now it's just taking off, and we're getting faster and farther and bigger and better. And I don't have 2.4 gigahertz wireless, so they won't interfere with my wireless mouse and keyboard, which most people may not know is an issue. Let me look real quick. Let's see if this just says wireless. I'd have to actually try to see if it's a 2.4 gigahertz device, it might actually mess with my wireless network.
Again, interference is things that we may or may not think about, which would give you the opportunity to troubleshoot.
Opportunity indeed.
Wireless encryption options. So let's go back to the postcard analogy. I'm sending information to Christopher. I'm using postcards to do it. I have my 10-page report. I cut it up. I put it on the postcards. Well, if you're familiar with postcards, anybody who picks that postcard up can read it. So if I can gain access to the postcard, I can read it. Networking standards are the same, typically without encryption. As this data goes over the wire, anybody who can gain access to the data can read it. And remember, with the hub, that information is broadcast everywhere. So if I can pull that data out, I have the opportunity to read that. Now, it's a little bit more complicated than that, but that's the gist of it. So with wireless being as easy access as it is, that's kind of the double-edged sword. And let's kind of step back a minute and talk about security at a really high level. Security and networking kind of doesn't go together because the idea of networking is to give people information.
Get it all out there.
To give people access to information. The idea behind security is to keep people away from information. So they kind of don't go together. So security when it comes to networking is a little bit different. Security when it comes to networking is ensuring those that need access to the data have continued access. Those that aren't supposed to have access to the data don't have access. So with that in mind, there are wireless encryption options. If we look at the chart here, we see our wireless encryption protocols: WEP, Wired Equivalent Privacy; WPA and WPA2, Wi-Fi Protected Access. And notice the different encryption level key sizes on the right-hand side. So one thing that you do need to do is ensure that your wireless access points and your wireless devices use the same encryption option.
Yep.
Service Set Identifier. Service Set Identifier, typically known as a SSID, is what you associate to a wired network. This is typically the name of the wired wireless network. Kind of browsing around the web and looking at different stuff. One of my favorite SSIDs that I saw, FBI surveillance van. Tell me that's not going to make your neighbors nervous seeing something like that.
My last apartment, some of my neighbors had that as their SSID.
See, not only technical, but fun.
Absolutely.
So now when a client wants to connect to the network, they need to know that name, that friendly name, or unfriendly name, depending on how you associate it.
How your sense of humor works. Yeah.
Exactly. You could go back to the hexadecimal bad beef. So there's different things that you can do. But as a device connecting to this wireless network, they need to know the SSID. For security purposes, the SSID could be hidden, so not broadcast. Typically, it's just broadcast. As you've gone into like Starbucks or different areas that have free Wi-Fi, I don't know why I'm air quoting free Wi-Fi, but they have free Wi-Fi. You'll see on your device, you'll pull it up and it'll say, hey, can connect to, maybe it's Starbucks, can connect to Starbucks. That's their SSID, and they've allowed that to be broadcast so you can connect to it. Some people don't want their SSID broadcast, at which point you have to know it directly to gain connection to it.
Although nowadays you can get teased. A lot of wireless devices, the endpoints, phones, tablets, laptops, will show you all of the networks that have SSIDs you can connect to, and some of them will show you all of the networks you can't connect to. It'll just say unidentified network, unidentified network, unidentified network, just to tease you. These are networks you can't connect to, but they're here. Just so you know, someone's trying to hide something.
Not for you.
I want to see that.
Not for you.
I want to figure it out.
Yeah. So wireless settings. So basically what we see here are different things that we would set up as we set up a wireless access point. Notice enabled wireless, yes or no, the wireless network name, so the SSID, 802.11 mode that we talked about, AGN. Some devices, you don't have to figure this out. They'll arbitrate automatically, so as the device connects, it'll arbitrate. Enable auto channel scan. So we've talked about what gigahertz is it going to be at. It can basically do different channels, what wireless channel, what transmission rate, the channel width. So you have some different things that you can configure. The security mode, this is where WEP or WPA, you configure that information.
Use, by the way, just a little helpful pointer, always WPA, always. WEP, we won't actually bring it up, but if you do a search using any search engine for cracked WEP, it takes about 5-6 minutes. So use WPA all the time.
How did we get to the summary already? What happened here? How do we? We're having such a good time.
We keep forgetting that the end of these modules keeps coming up.
This makes me a little sad that we're through this material already.
Oh, yeah?
It does. It does.
I think we can come up with some more for you. For you and for the audience. I think they want more as well.
I'm ready, but let's wrap this one up before we talk about more.
Fair enough.
So summary, to recognize wired networks and media types, it includes identifying twisted pair cables, cabling tools, and testers. So basically really understanding the wired network, the media type, and the tools needed to configure the wired network. Yep. And then basically to comprehend, that's a really good word, to comprehend wireless networks. So understanding wireless devices, wireless settings,
Yes.
standards, and encryption protocols.
Yep. Once again, I get to do
No.
resources, our book, MTA Networking Fundamentals, Microsoft Official Academic Curriculum.
I think they're dry enough.
A number of instructor-led courses. If you like what you're seeing here, in fact, this is a good module for this because what we do is we talk about it. We show you some images, we create some
Not
images,
doubting.
we're going over in terms of the topic. In one of those instructor-led courses, at least if they're one of my instructor-led courses, you're going to get to come to class and you're going to play with this stuff. I'm going to have a box of cables and crimpers and strippers, and we're going to tear some cables apart and make some more.
Well, I like these videos, but what if I have a question? What if I want to ask the instructor a question?
Oh, I still might ignore you.
That's hurtful.
Depends how good an instructor you are, I guess. Maybe. I don't know whether ignoring students makes you a good or bad instructor. Honestly, it depends on the class. But yeah, you get to talk to people face to face. And one of the things I think a lot of students miss or overlook beforehand before they take some courses is it's not just the instructor. You're going to get a course with other people in the same position, learning the same things. Or in some cases, you're going to get a course with somebody who's been in IT for 20 years and is learning something new. And they may have things they can teach you right then, sit next to a desk that you've never learned on your own.
Or asking questions about things you've never thought about, or that help you stimulate you to think about other things.
Absolutely. So a lot of advantages to instructor-led courses. I used to do courses where we would break things like intentionally, like hammers, hard drives, snapping cables, and breaking connectors off, and they were fun classes. So it's a nice advantage to this module because we look at tools and media where you actually maybe go to a course and get to play with that.
Well, yeah, and be able to get some hands-on with those. So I'm really a fan of this Microsoft Virtual Academy, this online learning, accessibility to knowledge. I think that's great. But there may be some people who find the classroom environment just a little bit more helpful for them. So I wouldn't dissuade anybody who's like taking this video or watched a couple of these videos to not take a course. Take a course. I mean, you might get a lot out of it. Take a course on something. Maybe you've gone through one of the MBA modules and were like, hey, I'd like to gain more information about that. Or, okay, so I have a pretty good idea about this. I want to learn about these other things more in depth. And so take a class. I'm a huge proponent of going in and getting classroom learning.
Well, I'm too. I'm in the business, so yeah, take courses. Kind of what we do. My job depends on it. Take some courses. And last, the exam, the certification we're here to prepare for. So exam 98-366, networking fundamentals. I think that pretty much wraps us for this one.
I think that wraps up this module.
It does,
Again,
it does
we've had a really good time. Well, at least you and I have had a good time. Hopefully,
I don't know about them. I think we've had it at least once talking about cutting up their cables, but
well, I'm less concerned with behind the camera than I'm concerned with watching the video.
well, I'm telling the students that they have to watch out for cutting people too now because we're giving them bad ideas. If they're sitting at home watching this video like, oh, hey, there's this network cable right here. I'm just gonna reach down here and I'm just cut this off and see what that looks like. Of course, what's gonna happen is the video's gonna stop. And now once the video stops, we're not gonna be able to teach you how to fix it.
How to fix it.
So you can just sit there with a broken cable and just try and figure it out for yourself. So have fun with that.
Yeah, good luck, and hopefully we'll see you real soon. Hi, Thomas Willingham here with Christopher Chapman, and we are here for course 98366 MTA Networking Fundamentals, and we are here to talk about TCP/IP tools.
We are indeed. There are a couple of them that we're going to go over today, so we should spend a couple minutes on 1 or 2 dozen tools that we have for TCP/IP networking.
Might even demo a few, show people how things work, and
We'll see how I feel. I'm thinking about it. We'll cross that bridge when we get to it.
Okay, let me use the command finger to advance the slides. Look at, there we go. So skills concepts that we're going to talk about using basic TCP/IP commands and working with advanced TCP/IP commands. So basically, we've talked about TCP/IP and how it is a protocol used for internet communication. As you set up TCP/IP, it's helpful to have tools to verify connectivity, to troubleshoot connectivity, to verify routes, which we can talk about. And these are some of the tools that we're going to talk about: the command prompt, ipconfig, ping, and traceroute. So the command prompt. The command prompt is Microsoft's version of command line interface. You can use the command line as an administrator, also known as running in elevated mode. And then these tools are referred to as command line tools, as opposed to window-based tools or GUI-based tools, because you run these in the command line. There are other sites that may have Windows-based versions of these tools, but the tools we're going to talk about are command prompt-based. ipconfig. ipconfig allows you to view the current configuration of the IP stack on your network device using TCP/IP. This command line utility has switches, one of which is /all, and this switch can be used to view additional details about each adapter. You can view information such as DHCP information, DNS, your IP address, your subnet mask. You can also use the ipconfig utility to refresh your DHCP and DNS settings. Ping. Ping is a very low-level way or method of verifying connectivity. So you verify connectivity with a ICMP echo request message. And if we look at the demo here, or we look at the graphic here, thanks to Christopher for these amazing graphics.
That's what I do.
So basically you have the first device saying, hey, are you awake? The second one, yes, I am. And basically that's all there is to ping. Ping is actually stands for Packet Internet Groper. It actually means something. It can be used to test IPv4 and IPv6 connectivity. Traceroute. Traceroute allows the ability to determine a path taken to a destination by sending an ICMP echo request message to the destination and then incrementally increasing time to live field values. Time to live is basically hops in the packet. So used to trace a network path, and it's useful if the local device is testing okay, but you're not sure the route is correct. So basically the network device, the client says, hey, how do I get there? Sends a message. And then you see, as you hit each device, it forwards it to the next device, and you basically get a path from your source to your destination. So Christopher, why don't you show us how these command line utilities actually look and how they work?
I suppose I can do that. So we're going to jump into my already existing demo environment. I've got it up and ready to go. I'm sitting at what you'd see when you get to a typical server desktop. You're going to have Server Manager open. It opens by default. I have added command prompts to the taskbar via the Start menu. So I'm going to close Server Manager. I've also added it to the Start menu. So if I go to Start, it's, I guess I'd be on the right computer first. It's also right here.
Okay, so really quick, you had multiple start menus there?
I'm remoted in, so I've got my main desktop and then the computer I'm remoted into.
Okay.
So apologize for that.
So just to clarify, you
Yes.
are using remote desktop?
I am. Okay. So I have the command prompt. You won't find this here by default on a server. You've got to add it via the All Apps option, or this will actually change a little bit in the next version, so you'll have to navigate through the next screens to get to it. The reason I put this here in the task manager, I did want to demonstrate right-clicking and run as administrator. Where you'd want to do that. Now I'm logged into the server as an administrator, so it's going to do that all by itself. You can tell at the top when I click it says administrator command prompt.
So on a so you mentioned you're logged on as administrator. For day-to-day working purposes as an administrator, is it a good procedure or is it a good process to be logged in on your server as an administrator?
Typically, it depends on what you're doing. Typically, you're going to be managing servers from a desktop that you're going to be logged into not as an administrator. You're going to use run as, you're going to use different consoles logged in as different users. You're not going to be just sitting at a computer logged in as an administrator, typically. If you're remoting into a server, depending on that server and what its role is, you might have to. If you're troubleshooting a main controller, you're going to have to log in locally as an administrator, unless you've changed permissions on those main controllers to allow non-admins to log on the desktop, which may or may not be a great idea. So it depends. Okay. So here we are. We're going to start right away. I'm going to use this to ping some internal addresses first. I've got some pretty generic names on this network, so I can do that. And the IP addresses are all internal, so it makes no difference.
And then notice the server name is resolved to an IP address, and then you get a reply from that IP address.
Yep.
And then we talked about before in the IP, when we talked about TCP/IP, let's let people think about this, but what service or what protocol allows that name to be coordinated with that IP address? So let them think about that for a minute.
Does anybody remember?
Well, I hope they do. I hope they're hanging on every word, or at least every other word.
It's only been like 5 minutes since we talked about this, so.
Okay, so DNS.
DNS.
DNS is the domain name service,
Yep.
and that allows IP addresses to be converted to server names.
Yep.
Typically, we interface with server names. It's easier for us as people. We remember server names. And we do that over the internet, www.microsoft.com. We remember that. The DNS server is the system that uses or transfers that name to that address.
Yep. Gives us a name to remember, gives the computers the numbers it needs to actually function. So our next one, we're going to ping something external, see if we get the same result. Now in this case, you'll notice something weird happens. It says pinging, it resolves to an IP address, but nothing happens. I keep getting request timed out. The reason that's happening, in this case, the endpoint, Outlook.com, they've configured their network devices to not respond to ICMP requests. So I can send my ping packet that says, are you here? Their router's just completely ignoring anything going on.
But notice we still have DNS name resolution.
Yes, and we do get the IP address, so we at least know DNS is working. Now, this could also mean that the host is just down. This could mean a number of things, but in this case, I'm assuming Outlook.com is not down at 10 o'clock or 9 o'clock on any morning of the week, so hopefully. So it's the same idea. You can ping any address. You can ping by name. You can ping by IP if you want. You'll also get results. The other thing you can do, we talked about this briefly in a previous module, you can ping the same name with different protocols. So I don't want to look IP4, I want to see IP6. So, that's not the way it's supposed to come up.
Oh.
I'm trying to think of an external address that would actually work. I can't think of it off the top of my head, but you can with that switch, despite the fact it didn't work here, and that's not going to work with its IP4 address. Despite the fact that this isn't working on my demo because I don't have IP6 configured correctly on the test network, with that -6 switch, you're going to ping IP6 and you'll be able to see those results. The next one, I'm going to throw a little fun one in here, CLS, clear screen, for anybody who doesn't know that. We talked about ipconfig. I'm kind of going a little out of order, but should be okay. This is going to give me information about the host I'm sitting on, in this case the server I'm sitting on. Now you do see an IP6 address on the screen, so this one does have IP6, it is working, but what wasn't working in that last one was that it can't resolve. I think by name, IP6, it couldn't resolve the name to an IP6 address. So even though it has an address, it couldn't be found. IPconfig with the switch we talked about gives you much more detailed information. It lets you know what kind of adapter it is. In this case I'm running Hyper-V, so my main network adapter is actually a virtual adapter. It's not a physical hardware network card. IP6, IP4, this adds DHCP information. If it's being used, in this case, this is a server, so it's not, I've got a static IP. NetBIOS over TCP/IP enabled if you're using it. Just more information, much more
That
information.
physical address, which is the MAC address that we talked about previously.
We did, so that's right here. Now that's, well, we won't go too far into that topic. I was going to say this is virtualized, so that's a different conversation. And you will notice you can actually see, I did IPconfig all, there's a Hyper-V network adapter, and that's it. There's no, it appears as though there's no physical network adapter in this computer, in the server, and that's because I only have one network adapter, and I allow Hyper-V to take over and use it. So let's clear screen again, we'll do one more. We'll try traceroute, and in this case I do want to use a public address that I know works. And this is that graphic I had where I'm saying to something on the internet here, how do I get where you are? And then the devices between the client in this case, which is a server, and the server I'm going to, are going to respond each one at a time, letting me know where it's going. And some of this is kind of telling. You can actually trace your packets, Bellevue, Burien, Seattle. I've done pings in classes where I'll be sitting in class in Seattle, ping a server at my house in Seattle, and the packets go through Virginia, Florida, UK in rare instances. In this case, we're going to San Jose, so this server probably lives somewhere in the Bay Area. Try one more just for fun. That's what happens when you trace out something that's sitting right next to the server you're using.
Oh, also, can you ping? We talked about localhost.
Yes, we did.
127.0.0.1. Let's ping localhost.
Well, and I'll do this with the name first, so you'll notice I can use localhost. It doesn't resolve to 127.0.0.1 by default. Because this is server 2012, IP6 is the protocol it's going to try first, and the localhost IP6 address is ::1. I can still ping 127.0.0.1, absolutely. And that works like champ. Great. Hopefully, because this demo would be drastically impacted if pinging localhost was not working. So I think that's it for the first round of tools.
It is. Now we have our advanced tools. So we've talked about some basic connectivity tools. And again, the idea behind this is opening the command line. You've set up a system. Maybe TCP/IP isn't working quite correctly, or it has weird issues. So you can use these tools to troubleshoot your connectivity. So let's look at some of our advanced tools. Some of our advanced tools include netstat, NBTstat, pathping, NSLookup, netshell, route with the -print option, net, and telnet. So netstat, this displays active TCP connections, ports on which the computer is listening, Ethernet statistics, the routing table, statistics for IPv4 and IPv6. Used without parameters, netstat displays active TCP connections. So active TCP connections, this is connections to other systems, whatever those other systems may be. Maybe you're browsing the web, so www.microsoft.com. Maybe you have a telnet session going. Maybe you're doing a remote desktop session. These would all be remote. Oh, maybe you're using file and print services. Maybe you're using a printer. Those would all be active TCP connections. NBTstat. This displays NetBIOS over TCP/IP, NetBT, protocol statistics for local and remote computers. NetBIOS. NetBIOS is kind of an interesting thing. It was developed in the 80s to allow applications to communicate over a network using the session layer of the OSI model. Okay, that's kind of interesting. What does that mean? Basically, NetBIOS allowed computers to have names similar to DNS, but before Microsoft really implemented DNS. This is when Microsoft used NetBEUI as one of their default protocols. NetBIOS was the naming scheme that was used, and NetBIOS tended to only work on local computers. NBTstat displayed this NetBIOS information. Pathping, a command line routing tool that combines features of basically ping and traceroute, including some additional information. Sends packets to each router on the way to the final destination, and then computes results based on the packets returned from each hop. And each hop, a hop is basically crossing a router or a router device. Pathping can also show the degree of packet loss at any specified router, so this can give you a little bit of troubleshooting information. NSLookup. NSLookup can be used to diagnose domain name system issues, and it allows you to look up the name of a host to see if you're getting proper DNS name resolution. You should probably have a bit of familiarity with DNS before you use this tool. Netshell. Netshell isn't so much a command as it is a scripting utility. And what I mean by scripting utility is netshell and then an option or a command allows you to perform different options. Commands work on local or remote computers. It provides a scripting features that allow you to basically run a group or a batch of commands against a specified computer, again, either local or remote. And you have the ability to save the configuration script in a text file. In case you want to have like a little testing script that you're running on systems, you can save it, pull it down, and run it on the system. Route. Okay, so you have your local IP routing table. Your IP routing table defines what goes where. How do I get to, so if I'm thinking about going somewhere, I'm at Bellevue, Washington, and I want to get to Seattle, how can I get there? Well, an IP routing table can give you the paths to get there. I could take 520, I could take I-90, I could take 405 to the top of to the top of the lake, I could take 405 to the bottom of the lake. So these are all freeways that I could use to get to my destination. The IP routing table has similar functionality. The route print command can be used to display the routing table and is very similar to netstat-r. The route command can also be used to add and delete static routes, and we'll talk about the difference between static and dynamic routes later. It's very exciting, you should stay tuned. Net. Many commands use the net command that begin with the word net. It's not specifically part of the TCP/IP stack, but can be used to test network connectivity on your system. Telnet. Telnet isn't so much a troubleshooting command as it allows you to communicate with a remote computer using the Telnet protocol. You can initiate a Telnet session by saying Telnet and then the host name or IP address, at which point you get a Telnet prompt. This is a low-level prompt that you can perform basic commands at. Again, the network administrator can connect using Telnet IP address or Telnet host name. You can also test to see if different ports are working by saying Telnet server and then a specific port name. Back in the day, really good times where you would Telnet to the email port of a server, initiate a connection, and you could have an email directly from Santa. True story. Christopher, why don't you show how some of these utilities can work for us?
I can do that. I'm actually installing the Telnet client right now, so we'll have to wait on that last one for just a minute, but it'll be installed by the time we get back to here. So I made a list, I had to keep track of which tools we're looking at, so we'll start right at the top, netstat. This one's pretty straightforward. this is what it shows you. It shows you those TCP connections. In this case, Windows 8, like I mentioned, I'm remoted. So it tells me that this server is being remoted into by another computer. So Microsoft DS, directory services, so my Active Directory, in this case, domain controller, also staying in sync with this machine. The rest of these are, I couldn't tell you, just looking at them. They're all ports that, probably dynamic ports generated by some other service.
Well, and let's go over that, Christopher. You said that you weren't familiar with all of these ports and IP addresses. There used to be a class, the Service and Support class, that talked about access to tools and access to basically resources. The idea as a good network administrator isn't to know everything. Technologies constantly evolve, they constantly change, they're constantly different. Things are tweaked. What worked one day may or may not work the next day just because the systems evolved and a little bit different. So the idea isn't to know everything. And if you're like, holy crap, I'm never going to learn any of this, there's just way too much. I'm drinking from a fire hose. Well, one, yes, you are drinking from a fire hose. Two, there is a lot to learn. But three, you don't have to learn everything. That's not the point. A really good administrator knows where to go and knows how to access resources. They know what the good sites are. And you'll start to find this out because different systems, you'll have different protocols, different hardware, different software involved. So you'll find sites that you need to use that will help you search this stuff out. So if you're looking at this stuff and go, wow, I'm never going to remember all those addresses, I'm never going to remember all that stuff, don't worry about it. You don't need to. That's not the point. The point is, if you look at that and go, you know, I don't know what that is, but I remember it being about, I found that using the netstat command. I know this is an IP address, and from the ::1, I know this is an IPv6 address. So you can pick up basic information, and then using that basic information, you can go and research more.
Well, on this particular screen, that's even more true in that the local address, ::1, I know it's IP6. I also know that it is the loopback address. It's the IPv6 version 127.0.0.1. So these connections are self-contained connections. This server, some service on this server talking to either another service on this server or itself in some instances. So that is netstat, pretty simple. Our next one, as long as I can figure out how to type, NBTstat. Now this one, unfortunately, we're not going to get a whole lot of information because I don't run NetBIOS, I don't have NetBIOS clients, I don't have Win servers, but we can at least see how it works. This is one of the few tools that if you just run it by itself, just NBTstat, it's going to ask you for more information. It doesn't have a default state. So I need to tell it to do something with a switch. And it lists all the switches here. A very important note about this tool, this is one of not very many tools that is included in any Microsoft product that is case sensitive. You'll notice the switches, there's an A and a capital A. There's an S and a capital S. Those switches mean different things. In this case, we're going to do N, it's just a list of local NetBIOS names. The only names on here are the name of the server I'm on and the domain I'm on. So not a whole lot to NBTstat. These days, you probably won't use a lot of NBTstat or see a lot of information within it because it's not widely used. What's my next one? PathPing. So PathPing is going to look like a combination of two tools we've already seen. It's similar to Ping in that it's going to get us some information about resolution, but it's like traceroute in that it's going to give us this route, exactly like it did in traceroute. Now at the end of this is where it's actually interesting. We get through this, all the way down to the bottom, it doesn't take that long. Two more, ta-da. And now it says computing statistics for 300 seconds. It's actually going to track basically response times through this path from where I'm at to the endpoint that I'm trying to get to, and it's going to give me a report when it's done. It's an interesting tool. It's not one I've used a whole lot. When I'm troubleshooting network issues, it's usually just a matter of is something working or is it not, and why. So I'm going to stop this so I can wait for 300 seconds unless everybody wants to sit in silence for 5 minutes and wait, which we can do. Our next one, like that, I can jump back and forth, keep track of all the tools. NSLookup. This tool has saved, well, clients and dollars and networks and jobs in some cases a lot in my life. NSLookup is a great tool for getting lots of information. And I'm going to do a couple of demos. I could actually spend probably an hour on this tool. I'm going to try not to do that. So for now, NSLookup gives me a couple of pieces of information right away. Default server and address. It's going to grab the default DNS server IP from the server I'm on, or the computer I'm on, and it's going to use that as the address. Now what you might see where it says default server is you might see a name unknown or unable to resolve issue if you don't have your reverse DNS entry set up correctly. We haven't talked about that a whole lot. I'm not going to go into detail, but reverse DNS is a requirement on internal network for this to resolve to the name. It won't necessarily impact functionality as long as the IP address is correct. So we've got our server up, we've got an address. Let's get started. This one you just type in what you're looking for and it responds with an address.
And then notice, like Telnet, this brings us to a command prompt environment.
Yes, we have options, and that's what I'm going to demonstrate in just a moment. So we start with just very simple. I'm looking for a host. Give me host information, and it gives me that information. It gives me that information. It's a good little tool, but it allows me. This is a DNS troubleshooting tool. It's not just a name resolution, just pure names IPs. I can do other things. Let's say I want to find out the mail server for a domain. There you go. This is actually going to give me the mail exchanger addresses for the domain I put in. I set the type mail exchanger. I give it a domain. It gives me all the answers. Now it says not authoritative is a little bonus information. It says not authoritative answer because my server, this 10.0.0.10, does not have this information. It has to go out and get this information from somewhere else and bring it back.
And just real quick, so people understand, when you say type equals MX, you're telling DNS that, hey, I want to use a mail exchange. I want to get mail exchange information.
Yeah, it's a record type of DNS. We don't really go into too much detail. I can do the same thing with aliases. And I'm trying to think where I've actually got set up that would work. No, I don't have an alias for SharePoint on my internal network. I actually set up an A record. So to go back to the default, again, little bonus information, the default record type when you launch NSLookup is A records. These are default DNS name resolution records. So now, this is going to be a little confusing because A records are typically associated to hosts, to endpoints. C names are aliases that assign a name to another host, which is what I should use for this SharePoint resolution, but I'm actually cheating a little bit and using SharePoint as an A record that I've created to point to my web server. I use this, most of the time I use this to test when I'm doing public domain work. If I set up a new domain, I'm hosting a domain, someone else has a domain they're trying to test, they're moving from one host to another, they're hosting mail in one place and web in another, you can use NSLookup to make sure that all those records are being resolved correctly to the right endpoints. Oh, no, that's not going to work. Exit, and clear screen again. So NSLookup, great tool, like I said, we could spend an hour on it. It's tough for me not to. NetSH. Ta-da! There it is.
We're back to a prompt.
We are. Now the problem with NetSH or NetShell, it's just that it's a shell. We're basically in a little operating environment for doing multiple things against local and remote servers. This one is another, it's even worse than NetSlookup in terms of we could sit here for an hour and look through NetShell. We could sit here for a day on NetShell if we wanted to. So this is just a demonstration of what this is going to look like. As Thomas mentioned earlier, one of the important things to know, and I thought about something while you mentioned that, but I'll talk about it in just a second. Sitting in a NetShell prompt, it doesn't give you anything. If you don't know NetShell, you haven't used NetShell, you're new to NetShell, you have used it, but you want to do something new, how do you have any idea where to go? Question mark. There's your simple starting point. And the reason I go over this, the reason this rings in my head right now, is just last week, I'm going to exit NetShell, and just last week, I was watching a jumpstart, one of our jumpstarts, by two of our good PowerShell associates, Jeffrey Snover and Jason Helmick, and one of the things they said right at the beginning is don't memorize this, which is 90 Pro it hurts a little bit. You're used to memorizing port numbers and names and servers and buttons and checkboxes and interfaces and screens and wizards and how to do as much as you can so you don't necessarily have to look things up. You want to be efficient. PowerShell's gigantic. NetShell, not as gigantic, but it's the same idea. It's a shell that you may not use all the time. You don't have to memorize it. It's got the tools built into it to look up the things you need to look up on the fly. So there's your list of what you can do. You can do set, you can do trace. All these are different contexts, and that's why this is complicated. If I go into the HTTP context, let's do that. I have only a list of commands.
So the commands are context sensitive,
They are.
depending on what context you're actually in.
Absolutely. And I have new ones. So see, I've got advanced firewall, I've got firewall, I've got IPsec. Now we go to firewall. And I'm not even setting things yet. I'm just using this to go into different interfaces. And right here, I do like this. In future versions of Windows, Microsoft might remove this functionality. PowerShell is the new standard, but we're still showing you the tools that do exist. So I could go 4, 5, 6 layers deep, and then start setting options using the set command. I'm not going to go that much into it. Next one, route. This is one you just type it up. It's going to give you additional information. It needs something from you as a user or as an administrator to do something. And it gives you all your options. It manipulates network routing tables. I don't like this description because it doesn't manipulate by default. If I do route print or route key, it's not manipulating, it's just showing you what they are. We are going to talk more about routing in, I believe, the next module. We have talked a little bit about it in the past. This is a network route table. This is something in this case that we don't manage by hand, although we can. And all this is a way to tell this computer what networks it's connected to and how to get to other networks that it may be connected to. You can do route add, route remove. There's a whole list of route commands if you want to do route tables by hand. It's very similar to, we talked about earlier, building Cat5 tables. You have little wires and little crimpers with little ends on them. Fun the first time, never want to do it again. Route tables are not built for managing by hand.
Well, and initially we used to have, for DNS, before DNS really took off, we had host files. For NetBIOS, we had LM host files. So all these entries had to be made manually. And you're thinking, oh, well, that seems pretty overwhelming. Well, initially, there wasn't all the devices that are on the internet today. There were a lot fewer devices. These devices were more within a school, within a lab. So it was much easier to, within the lab environment, to control a host file that you put on clients that allowed clients and servers to access the 20-plus hosts that were in the environment. The environments weren't that huge. As the environments became bigger, then they needed solutions for more dynamic arbitration of this information. That's where things like WINS, DHCP, that's where those kind of tools and utilities kind of cropped up to overcome these static manual entry systems.
And we'll learn, in a routing context, we'll learn more about that in, I believe, in the next module, how we've applied those same principles to routing to be able to connect multiple networks and not have to manage necessarily which networks are connected to which in terms of updating route tables manually for all of the devices on them. Our last two, we've got net. This is another one that requires additional information. I just type net, it doesn't do anything for me. I need to look at something, manage something, create something. NetUse is a common one for anybody who's doing scripting or has done scripting, especially startup scripts, behavior policy. You can use NetUse to map network drives. NetUse, let me see, what do I have available? I don't know what I have. Server, shared, done.
Okay, now when you say map and network drive, let's just ensure that we're all on the same page here. What do you mean by map and network drive? I see you have M: there. What did you just do?
So what I just did, I'll go to my start screen and open my computer. I have created an additional, what appears to be an additional drive, M. And this is a drive that's connected, you can tell by the icon here, and the fact that it says network location. This is connected to a share on another server.
So now you have access to a remote resource as if it were local.
Yep.
So using a local drive, M, you now have access to a remote device. And again, this is seamless to the user.
Yep. And it's the same effect as right-clicking on a computer and mapping network drive. Same idea. This just isn't scriptable. It's an interface. I have to go through and click buttons and next and finish. Whereas this, I can script. I can create a script that says just in it, NetUse M, server, shared. I can put that script on a server, put it into your policy, and it's going to run on every computer in my enterprise every time it starts up or someone logs in.
So you can map a user directory, shared folders.
Yep. There are worse and better ways to do that. I mean, there are 100 different ways to do it these days. This is just an example of net, not necessarily an example of how you would map network drives for every user in an enterprise. At this point, this was the way at one point, but now there are much more and better.
Login scripts. There used to be login scripts
Yep.
where you would have to create a script that when a user logged on, it would run a batch file type of environment that would set the environment. You would map drives, you might set temp values, you might set system settings using this login script as used, and then you might have it set by group. So accounting got this environment, management got this environment, production got this environment.
Now we're in group policy, and that is a pit we can all get mired in today. But look for more classes. There will be plenty of courses that cover group policy as well in great detail. Our last one, Telnet, which I just installed. This is another one that it's just prompt. So it seems like we have three options. We have a tool that you type it in, you hit enter, it says, I need more information, here are your options. We have a tool that you type it in, hit enter, and it actually does something. And then you have the scary ones, which are you type it in, hit enter, and it just brings you to something with no information.
Well, I don't know, it doesn't seem that scary. It said welcome to Microsoft Telnet client.
It does say welcome.
It does everything but wave at you and give you a hug. What more do you need here?
That may be it. I mean, that's all I need. I can just start this up and just start my desktop feeling good about
Feeling good about your
the
day.
command line.
Yep.
Microsoft Telnet, so this is a way to connect to other servers via specific interfaces. I'm going to exit this out and come back into it the way I usually do. Sorry, quit, not exit. Telnet. Now what I'm doing is I'm connecting to a server that in this case is an email server that I know via a different protocol, SMTP 25. I'm now talking to my mail server via Telnet.
Could you create an email from Santa?
I could do that. I won't go through that right now. We don't have time to go into that much detail. But I could right here in 2, 3, 4, 5 commands email myself from Santa or email someone else from Santa as long as their server accepted it was from Santa and didn't reject it based on that information. So yeah, Telnet is a nice tool. It's the same idea. It's a lot of information. It's a lot of things you can do with it. Interfacing with other types of servers, troubleshooting different problems. Same idea. And exit. And that's it for the advanced command line tools, I do believe.
It is, actually. Sadly, we're at the summary already.
Are we?
We are. I mean, we've kind of blown through some stuff here. We've talked about the basic TCP/IP utilities, ping, IPconfig. We've talked about some more advanced utilities, pathping, trace routes, lookup. And again, these are just utilities that allow you to verify or troubleshoot TCP/IP connectivity. Christopher, I'll hand this to you for the additional resources and next step slide.
That's right, we've got the cool slide. So this is next steps for this course. Once you've watched these modules, you think to yourself, what am I going to do next? I feel like I've got a good start. I feel like I've got some good information. How do I apply it? What do I do next with it? One of the options is book exam 98-366 MTA Networking Fundamentals, the Microsoft official academic curriculum course that you can use to further study the topics we're covering in this course. There are instructor-led courses, again, 4 of them in different variations. Some of them are packs that come at a discount. There is at the very bottom, Networking Fundamentals MTA exam 98-366. If you want to take what you learned here into a classroom where you'll get instruction from an instructor similar to what we're doing, plus peers who may be doing this in an enterprise environment or any environment, plus potentially hands-on. I like teaching network fundamentals courses. We can break things, we can make some network tables, we can cut some things, make some routers not work. And then at the end of any of this, or even at the end of this course, if you want to give it a go, there's the exam and certification, 98-366 Networking Fundamentals for your Microsoft Technology Associate exam or certification.
Now, you've talked generically about the exams, the certification. Why would I want to take an exam? Why would I want to get certified? What benefit do I receive as a networking professional or somebody who wants to get into the networking profession?
Well, then you go to parties with other networking professionals and show off how awesome you are. Compare transcripts. You can actually print them out, take them out, show them your friends.
Compelling.
They'll love it.
Compelling.
The biggest reason is it's proof of skills. Potential employers, even potentially existing current employers, can see that you're demonstrating adoption of new skills, application of skills, or the ability to apply those skills in potentially a future job.
Well, and one thing that I typically tell people is people are familiar with the CPA for accounting. It's like a CPA for accounting. You have this title, you studied, you pass a series of tests, you have a certification. The certifications that Microsoft has are similar, but for networking. So you now have a networking certification that basically just says, hey, I have a certain level of skill.
Or in servers, or in clients, or in Exchange, or in any one of 100 other things. We have a pretty extensive cert program. So I think that's it for this module.
It's the end slide already.
Awesome.
It's a little
It's
sad.
already. It's been almost an hour. I'm watching the.
I don't know. Like I said, we get to this end slide. I'm a little torn. I'm happy we got through the information, but this is our time. We're done at this point with this module.
Just means they got to start the next one.
Okay.
Of course, means we have to start the next one too.
That's true. That's true. So we're looking forward to seeing you at the next module, or possibly at a certification class, or taking a test.
Yeah.
Come see us. Welcome back to 98.366 MTA Networking Fundamentals. I am Thomas Willingham, and I'm here with Christopher Chapman.
Hi again.
We're here to talk about network services or roles and services that you may see on the network. Let us dive right in. So our objective, setting up common network services. We'll talk about what those are, defining more network services. So we'll talk about common network services, and then amazingly enough, we will talk about more. Then we'll also talk about defining name resolution techniques. So let's dive right into the exciting stuff we have on hand. The first one is Dynamic Host Configuration Protocol. In the last module, Christopher and I were talking about the fact that initially there were host files or LM host files that allowed for names and IP addresses to be associated to different systems. That is not this topic. That would be DNS. This is DHCP.
Oh, there you go.
So
That is a good one though.
DNS is important, but we're not there yet. We're at DHCP.
It's on the slide.
No, it's DHCP. Oh, it did. Okay, you're right. It did say DNS, but that's not quite where we're at yet. We're at DHCP, Dynamic Host Configuration Protocol. So let's go back to, we were talking about manual entries, static entries. So initially, computers or devices had to have static entries for their IP configuration, their IP address, their DNS information, their gateway. All of this information had to be added statically and configured manually on the system. DHCP allows for automagic configuration, not just automatic, but there's magic in there. So it's a client-server protocol that enables configured client computers to obtain IP addresses automatically. Not just any device can get a DHCP address. It needs to be
I remember.
DHCP. The information that it can receive is an IP address, a subnet mask, and if we remember from the TCP/IP section, the IP address uniquely identifies a system on the network. The subnet mask defines what the network address is versus what the host address is. We also have the gateway address. The gateway address allows or enables, if the address I'm trying to reach is not on the network I'm on, what do I do with that packet? Well, that gets sent to the gateway address. The DNS server address, which again resolves the IP address to name. DHCP server provides the following benefits: reliable IP address configuration and reduced network configuration or administration. Previously, Christopher has discussed being in an environment where he had to manually assign IP addresses.
The 200 some odd clients.
How'd that work out?
Well, I was a consultant, so great for somebody.
Because you were paid hourly, and there were some hours involved.
Every time they put a new computer on the network, we spent 2 minutes, grab a sheet of paper, we had all the IPs on, drive to the office, find the computer, put an IP on the computer, go back to the office, send them a bill. Pretty decent consulting gig actually in terms of effort per dollar, but not great for the customer, and not great for us if there was actually a conflict. The list we had was one list on paper. It wasn't electronic. It was updated by multiple people. It had been in use for multiple years. So the risk of having devices with the same IP, the risk of having IPs that were in use that weren't documented as in use, or vice versa, we start thinking we're out of IPs when we actually have 30 or 40 free ones because we're not documenting devices no longer in use. It's a nightmare.
So DHCP really addressed some of these issues and allowed for this to be much easier to manage.
Yeah, and we were able to finally, after about a year of weekly consulting spends by this company, able to convince them to spend the hundred some odd dollars they spent on a small piece of software that actually ran on a client to manage DHCP network.
Great. So the DHCP server. So before a DHCP server can start leasing IP addresses to client computers, that's what the system is called. Is when a client computer receives an IP address from a server, it leases an address. The following steps must be performed. Well, so first of all, you need to install the DHCP role service. You need to configure an IP scope, so a range of addresses that the server will host. Once you configure the scope, you need to activate it. So you basically need to click that button that says, hey, let's go ahead and allow these addresses to be leased out. You need to authorize the server. Basically in your environment, say, hey, this is a valid DHCP server. For test purposes, I'm sure that people have brought up a DHCP server in their office to test. I want to test something. And they bring up a DHCP server, and Christopher, what do you end up with?
Oh, this is actually pertinent to everybody watching this video because as you're watching this, if you're sitting at your desk thinking, I'm going to do what they're doing while they're doing it. Let's just go along and go ahead and get this installed and configured. What you end up doing is creating what's called a rogue DHCP server.
Rogue!
A rogue.
Rogue.
Exactly. You're going to create a server that starts handing IP addresses out to your network that may not be IPs in the network as it's configured. You may cause network disruption issues. You may cause internet disconnectivity or even other remote networks to be disconnected from those clients or servers that say have reservations. I mean, it's a huge risk. I'm going to do some demos today with DHCP. Luckily, the activation and authorization components of DHCP now protect us from lighting up the DHCP server that's instantly sending out IP addresses. So you won't have the issues you had 10 years ago, but it's still a risk. So make sure if you're testing DHCP, do it on an isolated machine. We don't want to mess up any networks.
Rogue!
Yeah,
Bad.
and the fun part, the flip side of this for the people watching this video, once you get that next level help desk troubleshooting support network administration job, and you're thinking this is going to be fun, and somebody calls you one day and says my computer doesn't get on the internet anymore, and you determine it's because it's got a DHCP address that's not on your network. Now you can figure out how, on a network of anywhere from 200 to 5,000 computers, which one has DHCP installed on it.
Okay. How many emails have you received that said, please let me know who set up the rogue DHCP server that's handing out addresses? I'd have to say I've received 2 or 3 of those.
Yeah, I think I've seen a couple of those. I've been much more the person running through trying to find it. Like my computer, 3 or 4 people, and it happens over time. We get one person calling. This happened in my consulting role at this company as we put the DHCP server in, and we kind of had that transition phase. One person will say, my computer doesn't get on the internet anymore. Okay, easy enough. We'll go troubleshoot. Notice the IP is different. While you're there working on it, a second person will call. My computer doesn't get on the internet anymore. Half an hour later, someone else will call. My computer doesn't get on the internet anymore. So you spend this time trying to track down the server as more and more computers are getting IPs from it and falling off the network. So I had a fair number of those calls.
Well, and that goes back to the lease. So your lease is of a certain amount of time.
Yep.
And then when your lease is up, you go back through the DHCP discovery process.
Well, it's a configurable amount of time. So the default is 8 days, which is a good amount of time if you put up a rogue DHCP server. There are a number of factors that figure in. If you brought up a DHCP server today, and all of your clients got a lease today, they're all going to renew at the same time. Now, a little technical fact about DHCP in Windows, they actually renew halfway through the lease. So if you've got an 8-day lease, on day 4, they're going to renew that IP lease. And that happens regardless. If you set it to a day, halfway through a day, they're going to renew that lease. So you hopefully avoid issues where, say, they run out. Even on a legitimate network with DHCP configured correctly, you don't have clients not getting DHCP addresses because something's gone wrong. They've renewed quickly enough and rapidly enough. They at least have a period of time to operate without a DHCP server once gone down.
And then it talks about configuring advanced IP options such as setting up a DNS server, default gateways, things of that nature. Demo.
Oh,
Christopher,
it's my turn.
it's your turn.
So we're going to run through those steps. We're going to start with installing the service. I've again got my demo environment up. We're going to go ahead and add roles and features.
Okay, actually, really quick, can we go back to the Server Manager?
We can.
This is the 2012 Server Manager dashboard.
Yep.
So those of you not familiar with Windows Server 2012, this is the new dashboard that you'll see. Great taste, less filling. It's pretty awesome. I personally have done some work on this Server Manager, the Remote Desktop Management Services component. I helped
Over
create.
here, is it somewhere? Which one am I looking at? Where's your piece?
You have to install Remote Desktop Services first. But
I think you have it done by default.
once we want to ensure that people know what they're doing when they install it, so they can look at it and go, wow, this is really good, as opposed to just stumbling on it.
Well, as opposed to just installing everything by default so that your server's slow right out of the box.
Exactly.
Every service no demand running right out of the gate. So we are going to jump into this from the standpoint of this is a relatively new server that I put up, but I don't believe, I need to verify this. I haven't installed a lot on here. I've started installing some prerequisites for what the server will eventually be, but for now, there's not a lot on it. It's a different wizard. If you're used to server 2003, 2008, 2008 R2, this is dramatically different. So I encourage you to spend some time to use the server manager, set up a test box, click the buttons, push the buttons, options, and checkboxes, and see what happens. Select the server, and in here we've got our first setup, which is roles. There's a DHCP server role. I get a box right away that says there are features that are also required for this role to function. In this case, remote server administration tools for DHCP, which I'm just going to add. Next, this does not take long at all. I'm not going to install any separate features and install. Now, one of the nice things about Server 2012, on a kind of a side note, this is going to run, and as you know down here at the bottom, you can close this wizard without interrupting running tasks. I can close this, and it's still doing what it's doing. I can go do something else. I can actually rerun the roles and features wizard in 2008, 2008 R2. I don't have to wait. I have to sit there and wait for that window to get done. So it shouldn't take too long. It will actually notify me as soon as it's finished. I have up here notifications, feature installation, and this one is running. It gives me real-time status.
And then one thing to note on these is some role services that you install are going to require a reboot.
Yes, DHCP does not. I don't believe.
I don't believe
I would say it does not.
I don't think it does.
It's weird. I've done this 1,000 times. My brain is still like,
Maybe,
sure?
maybe not.
I don't think DHCP requires a restart. So we'll wait for this to get installed, and then we'll move on to the next step, which is actually I think that's what's the demo on this one?
Install and view the
Install and
DHCP
view. So we do
service.
have to wait. 'Cause I know that in a subsequent demo we're actually going to configure scope and look at the activate and authorize options. We're not going to authorize this one because I don't want to mess up my test network, but that's the saving grace. I can do this confidently without worrying about setting up a rogue DHCP server.
Rogue!
But don't try this in your enterprise without a separate network. Look at me. Oh, it won't take long. It's going to be fast. And we wait.
Wonder if we have Jeopardy music that we can install.
That'd be
we can
terrific.
overlay here.
Well, in the meantime, what I can do is a refresh of one of our previous conversations. I'm going to pull this up. Let me configure real quick so you can actually read it on these screens. And 24. Okay. And we're going to look at IP config. Oh, no, you know what? Let me come back to this. I'm going to go to a different computer and do this on a different computer that has a DHCP assigned address, I believe. Yes, DHCP enabled. Now, a couple of interesting things to note about this screen. It is enabled. It has an IP4 address unless it says preferred. What does that preferred mean? Do we know?
People like it better.
People like 10.0.0.39 better than all the rest of the 10.0.0.
Well, yeah, it says right there preferred.
In this case, for my particular setup, I have this computer set up so that I can get to it from outside through various different protocols. I have a reservation
For dinner?
in DHCP. So when we get into DHCP, we'll look at what that means, and I'll show you what I'm talking about here. For now, this is the address assigned by DHCP. I can see that DHCP is enabled. And at some point, no, it's not on this interface. That's what you get.
Okay, real quick before you go, notice auto configuration enabled by default, yes.
Yes.
APIPA.
APIPA indeed. We learned about that in a previous module.
And we're going to talk about it a little bit more here in just a bit.
We are. We're actually going to talk about how to turn that off and why it may not be a good idea for your network as it relates to DHCP, in fact. What you can see as well, lease obtained and lease expires. So July 20th it was obtained, August 18th it expires. Again, it's going to renew at certain points throughout that lease. But this is a good way to see, it's a good way to put pieces together if you're troubleshooting a rogue DHCP server, or even troubleshooting an issue with an existing DHCP server that's come down and is no longer servicing addresses. You can use the obtained and expires to figure out what's happened. Use a computer that is no longer getting DHCP information that's probably been taken off the network that you'll see a PIP address on. It will have stopped getting your network. It will have assigned itself a PIP address. You can then go to another computer that still might have network connectivity or internet connectivity, do an IP config all, and you'll notice the lease hasn't expired yet. So it's still using an IP that it got from DHCP that hasn't had to try and renew it. Let's go back to here. Close that because it's not what we need. Feature installation has succeeded. I can now manage DHCP on the server. So here we go. DHCP is installed. It's on this server. I have both IP4 and IP6 scope options. Server options we talked about. You can set gateways, you can set DNS, you can set up multiple different options. We're not going to go to this yet. We're going to configure this in a little while when we set up a scope. But you've now seen how to install it and what the management console looks like by default.
Okay, so now let's talk about the process for leasing for that lease. So we've talked about a lease, a client getting information from a DHCP server. So let's talk about the process. And that process is DORA. Isn't that little fish from Nemo?
It
Dora?
is a fish in a movie.
Okay, but that's not what we're talking about. That's not the Dora we're talking about here.
I wish, now that I think about it, I wish I'd built a slide with some sort of tie into that. That actually would have been funny.
The Nemo, yeah. So DHCP sessions use a four-step process known as DORA: discovery, offer, request, and acknowledgement. So if we look at the fancy graphic that we have here, so we see a client. Now this represents a client coming online.
Yep.
So it's booting up. It's been turned off, and at this point, it may or may not have an existing address.
Exactly.
So the first thing that happens is it basically says, hey, Ollie Oxenfree, are there any DHCP servers out there that can hand me an address? So that's the DHCP Discover packet that gets sent out.
And it's a broadcast, so that goes out to every computer on the network within what's called the broadcast boundary.
Typically not routable.
Not routable at all.
So a server on the same subnet would say, hey, I'm a DHCP server. Here's an IP address for you. Now, it's possible that this client may receive multiple addresses back from multiple DHCP servers.
Absolutely.
So that's the DHCP offer. The client then selects an address and says, thanks, I would like to use that DHCP address. And then finally, DHCP PAC, hey, pleasure doing business with you. I acknowledge that you are using that address.
And another note, the request again is a broadcast to let the rest of the network know I've chosen a server and an IP. That's what we're going with. The acknowledge, the server's actually going to resend the same information again as well. It's going to say, great, we're glad you've taken what we want. We're going to make sure you have the right information.
And I would just like to call out that the people, the men behind the curtain, have informed me that the fish was called Dory from Finding Nemo. Dora is the Spanish girl explorer.
Well, now you can see, this is actually a good gauge of, you can see how much time we get to do things outside of what we're doing. We don't get out much, so we at least have that excuse, I think.
Demo. I think it's demo time.
Is it demo time?
Add a DHCP
All right, we're gonna
scope.
scope. So I'm already on the interface. I've still got the same console up I had it before. We're going to, so a couple things to notice. Notice the little red arrows, these little red down arrows. I wish I'd zoom in on here so I could zoom in and take a look. These are currently not serving requests. There aren't any scopes, but even if there were, we're going to go ahead and create a new scope. We'll show you what that changes, if it changes anything. Main office. You can give this any name you want. It's not function impacting. Give a start IP address and an end IP address. Now, this is where a lot of, I hate to say personal preferences, but it will depend on how you set up your network, how you want to set up your network. Some people will start their IP addresses just in the range of IPs they want to assign. And what I mean is if you've got 200 clients on this network, you're not going to start at 1 and you've got 10 servers for those 200 clients. You may not start at 1, you might start at 11, and then assign 1 through 10 to your servers. I create the whole range, 1 through 254, and I create an exclusion. And what this says is the server can't assign these addresses. So it won't send these out to clients. I know what my entire range is, I know which ones servers are, and then we'll talk about another one in just a minute. It's another little in between those two.
And to address something that you just brought up, typically clients will receive a DHCP address. Servers more frequently get a static IP address.
Yep, I'm going to sign it by hand on that box and not let it get something from DHCP. There is another option we're going to look at that may change that a little bit. So lease duration, again, you can set this. The default is 8 days. It is configurable in a broad range. It's going to be largely up to your network design and your network requirements. Options, I can set those additional options we talked about. Yes, I want to configure them now. This is where I'll set up a router. And this is I'll do 2x4, that's how I do it. So that's the address that all of my clients are going to get as gateway out to the internet or other networks. Domain name and DNS servers. This one's nice. It gives me a parent domain. It says to configure scope and the IP addresses for those servers. I already have IP addresses. Where do they get these from?
Magic.
Yes, Magic. Microsoft builds lots of magic in their software, so things just happen automatically. We don't really know why. These came from my network adapter on this server. I've assigned DNS addresses, so it's pulling from there. I could take these out. I can use this to resolve the IP addresses of what might be my DHCP servers. If I don't know those IPs, this is kind of a handy tool. It gives you a bunch of different options. I'm going to leave this as is for now. Win servers, we're going to skip right past that one because we don't use wins. I don't anyways. Yes, I want to activate this scope now. Okay, done. So I now activated the scope. It is ready for clients to use. Notice I still have this red arrow on my IP4 on the server though. I have not authorized this server to start issuing IP addresses on my network, and it gives you this information right on the main screen. Must be authorized in Active Directory before it can assign IP addresses. This again is to protect your network from rogue DHCP servers. Authorization is a security precaution that ensures that only authorized servers run on your network. So I'm not going to do that because that will mess up my home network, but that's creating a scope. I now have a pool. I have leases. Now, in this case, I've actually made a mistake because I assigned in my scope options a router of 254 and did not exclude it from my scope. So I could potentially, in this configuration, create a conflict and lose some sort of network connectivity at some point, potentially for my entire network. Address leases, this is where, as your computers take on leases, they'll show up. I don't have any issued yet. This is what I talked about the happy medium reservation. This is where, within the scope, you'll see it says IP address 192.168.1. It's using the subnet mask attached to this DHCP scope. I can tell my DHCP server to give a certain device with a certain MAC address, a certain physical address. Remember, those are unique globally, in theory, and they don't change. They're assigned to the hardware of every network interface device. So if it's a printer that's plugged into the network, it has a MAC address. I can get that MAC address. I can assign that MAC address, or put that MAC address in right here. And what will happen is anytime that printer comes online, it does the same thing a computer does. Are there any DHCP servers out here that are ready to give me an IP address? My DHCP server is going to go, I have that MAC address, this is the address you have to have. And it's going to issue that same IP every time.
And the nice thing about this is you can use your DHCP server to centrally administrate all of your IP addresses. So whether it's a static IP address, a dynamic IP address, static IP addresses for specific devices, like you said, printers, servers, maybe routers or anything, you can manage all of this within the DHCP service.
I use this for printers. It's on the networks I was managing years ago when they were smaller networks. I would use this to manage network printers because it was an easy way to maintain a list of network printers. Supporting both types, DHCP and BOOP. We're not going to go into these details in this course. This has to do with the routing of DHCP request and response traffic across routers. By default, DHCP traffic is non-routable, so I can't get a DHCP address from a computer to another subnet that's connected to my network. I'll add a reservation. Why not? Close that. There we go. Scope options, again, we saw router and DNS, and then policies we're not going to cover. Server options are the same as scope options in terms of what they cover. So you see 003 router, 006 DNS. I can set that here as well. Router, DNS. The difference is server options are going to apply to every scope. If I don't set those options at the scope level, they're going to apply. If I set them at the scope level, they're going to be overridden. So,
which brings up a good point. You can set up more than one scope.
Absolutely. I can set up as many scopes as I want to. And they don't have to be anywhere in the same realm in terms of this. They can be different subnets, they can be different subnet masks, they can be completely separate. In this case, we're going to exclude the first 100. Let's make this one day. Let's say this is a secure network. We need more rapid DHCP response times. I'm not going to worry about these options for time's sake, but I now have 2 scopes on my server. And in this case, this one, no red arrow, because it's been activated. This one, I have to activate. So that's scopes. I think it's pretty much all I have. We have IP6 as well. You'll notice there aren't. I'm not going to go to IP6. It's a separate conversation and a much more broad conversation about network technologies and the use of DHCP in the first place. So this one's just for 4, and that's it. We created some scopes.
Very nice. APIPA. So we talked in a previous module, I believe it was TCP/IP, about APIPA is the protocol that allows for automatic private IP addressing. So as a device comes up, if it's unable to receive an IP address, it can automatically get an assignment. This works for small office, home office, so basically SOHO networks, without deploying the DHCP service. APIPA can get in the way of clients obtaining IP addresses from overloaded DHCP servers.
That actually, there's kind of a side note to that in that if you've got clients on your network getting APIPA addresses, but you've got DHCP in place, it's not that APIPA is in the way, even though that's how we worded it. It's that your DHCP servers are overloaded. So that's actually a good indicator of a different kind of problem. It's not that your DHCP server's down, it's that your DHCP server has too many requests to handle. It may be time to add a scope, add a server. There may be multiple ways you can troubleshoot. But just in case, to prevent the assignment of APIPA addresses on your clients, if the DHCP servers are unavailable or overloaded, you can disable it in the registry. We put this slide in here. I can do a little demo real quick. That was my original intent. But it was more just for warning's sake. We don't put the normal, I usually put a big red warning on any slide that says registry. Given that this is a network fundamentals class, you may also be new to the registry. Be very, very careful in the registry. You can do irreparable damage in the registry, and I have done so on a couple of occasions. Always in a test environment, never in production.
Well, in the registry, if you damage the registry, you can keep your computer from booting up. You can damage services, and you can basically disable networking and no longer have networking working. There's all kinds of damage that you can do within the registry.
But it's a fun slide. It gives you an idea. You can see what the registry looks like. You can kind of get your first, again, if you're in a test environment, you can play with what the registry looks like, how it works. Go in and change that setting so that you can turn off APIPA, and you can test it.
Well, and so we've talked about classroom environment. The nice thing about the classroom environment is you might actually have the opportunity to play with this.
Absolutely.
So you could go in, and I don't remember what class it was. Maybe it was a Windows client class where you would go in and manage a registry entry, bring the client back up, and all of a sudden networking doesn't work. Go back in, change it back. Now networking does work. So it really showed you the impact of what would happen if you basically didn't work with the registry correctly.
Yep. You can do some good damage with the registry.
Yes. Yeah, you can shoot yourself in the foot at about the head.
That's true. Yeah.
Not optimal. Okay, remote desktop services.
I feel like maybe this topic you have some good insights, some good information on this one.
Remote desktop services, near and dear to my heart. I have to say, I kind of enjoy me a cup of remote desktop services.
It's been a few modules since your intro. Maybe you want to talk about why that is. Why is it so near and dear to your heart?
The reason remote desktop services is near and dear to my heart is because that's the role service I've been working with for the last 5 years.
Nice.
So remote desktop services, formerly known as terminal services. So in 2008 R2, terminal services was renamed to remote desktop services to basically show or illustrate all the additional functionality that remote desktop services had. Terminal services no longer encompassed all the goodness that was now part of remote desktop services. And I don't think they wanted to just rename it terminal services extra goodness. Didn't quite work, so they renamed it remote desktop services.
They should have.
Terminal services extra goodness. So basically, I've talked about the name a bit, but I haven't really talked about what it does. Remote desktop services, its functionality is from one computer, you can basically remote into another computer, and you've seen Christopher do some of this, and take control of it as if it were local. So now a remote system appears to be local to you. Remote desktop services has, I wouldn't say different components, but there's multiple aspects of it. One is a session-based system, and that's remoting into a server. So the server having the ability to manage remote sessions, each user has their own session. The issue with this is all clients are working in a remote server environment, so it's a server environment. So you may come across compatibility issues. All applications may not work effectively in the client or the server environment. So there's also virtual desktops. Virtual desktops is new since R2. 2008 R2, and basically what virtual desktop enables is the ability to remote into a client that's a client operating system. So now a user has access to all the full capabilities of a remote client. If you look at the slide here, you'll see the remote desktop services architecture. This is a poster specific to 2008 R2. It's an awesome poster. I want to show you something here. Okay, so let's go to the desktop really quick. And on the desktop, I want to come to a program that I've installed. This is Server Posterpedia. I have just been informed that let's see, I need to duplicate my screen. I didn't have the screen duplicated. Okay, there we go, score. I have the success signs from the back. The back of the room's going crazy. So now you can see Server Posterpedia. This is the default view here. What is Server Posterpedia? That's a good question. Server Posterpedia are posters of all the different systems that posters have been created for. It is a Windows 8 utility, so if you go into the Windows 8 store, you can download Server Posterpedia. And why I'm bringing this up is let's go into Remote Desktop Services here. Well, here's Remote Desktop Services, but there's also Hyper-V, 2012, 2008 R2 with SV1, features and technologies for Windows Server, Active Directory. So there's a lot of different technologies that are represented here. Let's go into Remote Desktop Architecture here. Let's blow this up a little bit. Oh, not what I wanted to do. Let's blow this up here. And basically what we have here is this middle chunk here overviews the architecture for remote desktop services. The rest of the components here, let me zoom out a little bit, hopefully not getting too dizzy here. These other tiles show you the different components of remote desktop services. Remote desktop services is made up of, let's see here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, of about 6 or 7 different roles and features that come together and are installed that allow for this functionality. So I just wanted to show you this poster, show you this utility that really demonstrates architecture and is a great resource for learning about these different tools. So let's go ahead and go back to the slide deck here. Okay, so that's the deck. And let me go back to extend. So hopefully now we are.
No.
No, I'm getting the no. It is not. We are experiencing a slight bit of technical difficulty.
There we go. I think we're good.
Oh, we are. Except now, let's see here. I don't have my. Okay, this is awesome. We have.
Go ahead to extend. I think you're in duplicate.
Show presenter view.
It takes a second.
Okay.
There you go.
Okay,
Ta-da.
we have success.
We're all
Ta-da. Huzzah! Okay, so showed you the remote desktop services architecture. I showed you the poster. Server Posterpedia. If you haven't downloaded it from the Windows 8 store, you can. You can also download, if you're not on Windows 8, you can download those posters individually as PDFs from the download center.
So for some poster information, who authored that RDS poster?
Excellent question, Christopher. Let me see, who authored that poster? Oh, that's right. I helped author that poster.
Ah.
Martin McLean, poster guy, Brian Litch, additional RDS technical writer at that point, and myself, we all wrote that poster. So download the poster. We don't get paid for it, and again, a big hug of knowledge for you.
That's right. They're free.
They're free, and they look really cool hanging on your wall.
They do. I'm actually a huge fan of the component posters.
The component poster is huge geek cred.
Absolutely.
Huge geek cred. Okay, so now let's go to remote desktop connection. I have multiple remote desktop connection here. You're probably familiar, if you're familiar with remote desktop connection, with the upper right here, the remote desktop connection tool. From the command line, you can run MSTSC, Microsoft Terminal Services Connection. So this is the old style. If you look at on the left, that's the new modern client with Windows 8. So you can download that. It's remote desktop from Microsoft. It shows here that there's a remote desktop and then RD Web Services. So RD Web Services is the ability to go to a website, administrator populates that URL, and when the user goes to the URL and logs on, they just get access to all of that service. So all of those applications, any of the populated desktops, the user will gain access to it. Did you actually want to show a demo of this?
I did. So the reason I put demo on that slide, I had a demo of that slide kind of last minute, so poor Tom's unaware of my changes. I want to show what those two interfaces look like. I use the MSTSC interface quite a lot. It looks like this. See my desktop. This is the old one. If you do start run or you do command line or you do something MSTSC, Microsoft Terminal Services Client.
Client, yeah.
Was the original initialism. This is what that looked like. You could put in an IP, put in a port, put in a username, change a lot of different information. I would give a little bonus here to Smart EP. Local resources, more drives. You can make local hard drives available externally.
In your remote session.
Potentially a giant security hole that your IT administrators may not know about.
Correct, but we could use group policy to crank that down.
Absolutely. So that's the old one, and then I want to do the demo of the new one. Actually, I'm going to grab it real quick.
So,
Remote desktop.
Yes, so Christopher's showing you going up to the store, having to download it.
Oh,
You are denied.
demo forwarded too many PCs in the live account. That's right. We'll skip this demo for now. But you've seen it. Go to the store, type in remote desktop. You get the same interface that he just showed you. This is what it looks like. This is the new and prettier one.
It's very nice.
It's also more functional. You can actually keep track of connections over time, whereas with the last one, all you see in that box is the last one you open when you open up Terminal Services Client.
Okay, so notice from the screen here, you see desktops and graphics. As you exit the connection, it basically snapshots it and shows you what the last snapshot looks like. So it gives you a little bit additional information for that desktop.
Shows you where we left off.
Yes.
Terrific. That's all I had.
Okay, routing and remote access service, or RRAS. This supports remote user or site-to-site connectivity using virtual private networks, VPNs, or dial-up network connections. Dial-up. Remember when you actually had to pick up the phone, you got a dial tone? That would be what that's referencing.
What was that?
Yeah, dial a phone. Remember when you used to have to pick it up and dial the phone?
Weird.
Okay, RRAS consists of the following components. Remote access, so allowing the ability to access a remote system, and routing, so basically the ability to, from a local network, to connect to a remote network.
Turns a Windows server into a router.
Correct, correct. And this was formerly known as the Remote Access Server, or RAS.
Yep, RAS is a well-known acronym that's still used pretty readily. People still call it RAS, even though it's Routing Remote Access Service.
Routing and remote access service. Again, another excellent graphic. Thank you, Christopher. Let's see what we have here. We have the client, we have a remote device, the internet ISP, so routers. We have routers on each side, the internet ISP, and then the server basically connecting.
Yep, so it allows us to connect a client to a server or a network over the internet. This is the remote access portion of this particular technology, allowing us to let clients into a network from outside over the internet without having to build our own infrastructure. Thank you, Internet, for providing that connectivity.
Thank you. Demo time.
Demo time indeed. So let me get this running again, and we will jump right back into the same environment. Like 75 character password. One of these days I need to change that. So we're right back to the same server we looked at before where I had DHCP up and running. We'll go ahead and close this. I'm again going to add roles and features. We're still on Server Manager. Next, it's role-based, same server. And right here, so we see remote access. And we see all this. This one's much more than DHCP just wanted us to install a console. This one wants us to install all sorts of additional features. Web server, internal database, group policy management. We're going to add those features.
And the nice thing that any supportive services that need to be installed get called out. So you're not of the idea of, oh, I didn't know what was installed. You can actually look on that and see, oh, IIS is installed. So you have an idea of what additional information will get installed.
Yep. Features. We have, again, a list of features we can still install. We're not going to worry about this right now. Next, it does show us, let me go back to that. It does show us what was selected when that box popped up that said additional role features required. It shows us in here what it added. Group policy management obviously was one of those. Windows internal database was one of those. We can add our own if we want. Remote access, role services. So right here, this is where it's a little confusing because it's called routing remote access service. In Windows Server Manager, you're only going to see remote access. It's when you get to this level, the role services, that you'll see routing as an option. So I want RAS, remote access, and I want routing so that we can see both. I'm not going to worry about IIS. It's installing its bare minimum, which is all I need, and install. It says again, restart destination server if required. You can tell Server Manager to do your restarts automatically. I don't want to do that. Now here, I already have this little yellow exclamation mark we call a bang. Post-deployment configuration. This is actually from the prior one, configuration required for DHCP. You'll see this from time to time after you've installed a feature or a role, if the server does want you to do something to that role or feature to get it working. We'll probably see one right here after we install routing remote access as well.
Well, we didn't, in the previous demo, you didn't authorize the scope.
I didn't.
So it's letting you know that, hey, there's still actions that need to be performed for this to work effectively.
Yep. And for now, that's all we're going to do is install it. So now that we've done that, we'll move on. We'll come back to another demo in a little while.
Okay. So we talked about routing and remote access. Now we'll talk about Internet Protocol Security, IPsec. So IPsec is a protocol within the TCP IP suite that encrypts and authenticates IP packets. This allows private, secure communication to occur over an IP network. Typically traffic that goes over an IP network. So in previous modules, we talked about the postcard analogy. Filling out a postcard that had a data payload in it. Dear Christopher, I'm at the beach, I'm having a great time, Thomas. I put an address in there, and all of that, when I put that in the mail, anybody who sees that postcard can pick it up and read it.
Called plain text.
And Typical internet IP frames are clear text and can basically be read by what you would call a network sniffer.
Yep.
So a network sniffer or analyzer could pull these packets out and basically recreate a session.
Potentially. That's a big network security risk. Actually, that a lot of organizations have to fight against.
Yes, man in the middle, hence IPsec. Yeah, so IPsec allows for securing application traffic, resides on the network layer, used in conjunction with VPNs, integral part of IPv6, and there's actually two different modes for it, tunnel mode and transport mode. Tunnel mode is used for creating virtual private networks. So creating a virtual private network between a client and a destination. So you basically create your tunnel, which we're going to talk about later. You're going to create this tunnel that enables communication. There's also transport method, and this is for encrypting the data itself on private networks. If you look at the graphic here, the IPsec protocol types, you see protocol, there's authentication header, encapsulating security payload, or both. Authentication header, basically, if you need to be protected from modification and authentication, but you're not worried if the packet is readable, so now you're just ensuring that the packet isn't somehow modified. So a router that gets a hold of this, that basically takes it from one network and puts it on another, isn't injecting information in this. Or person, exactly. So when the receiver receives this, they take a look at it and say, oh, okay, is this the packet that was actually sent? Is this the same? That's authentication header. Encapsulating security payload, well, now the data needs to be protected by encryption, so it's unreadable, but the IP address can be left unprotected. And then both AH and ESP allows for both to be used simultaneously. DNS. We've talked a bit about DNS, domain name system, worldwide service that resolves a host name to an IP address. The DNS architecture is a hierarchical, love that word, hierarchical distributed database and associated set of protocols. This associated set of protocols allows for a method of querying and updating the database. So as a client, www.microsoft.com, what's my IP address? A mechanism for replicating the information in the database among servers. So I'm a DNS server, I have this information. Christopher, you're a DNS server, I can give this information to you to do a couple things. One, build fault tolerance. Two, offload all requests coming to me, now some requests are coming to you.
Yep, essentially.
And then it also defines a schema. A schema basically says, hey, what objects and properties are associated with the database? It's application layer, the TCP/IP reference model, and use port 53 to accept name resolution requests.
Yeah, we talked about ports. So, and this one's important in that if you're hosting on services, hosting on domains, you may have DNS servers running. You'll have to allow 53 inbound for external requests to get to those DNS servers, if that's how you got it set up.
Okay. So DNS enables host name to IP address. WINS allows for NetBIOS name to IP address. We talked a little bit about NetBIOS already. It was implemented using, or Microsoft used the NetGUI protocol initially as a default to allow computers to intercommunicate.
Yep.
NetBIOS was the naming scheme. I think they were limited to, what was it, 15 characters?
Yep, still to this day.
15 characters name. So WINS systems are DNS-like. In that DNS does host name to IP resolution. WINS does NetBIOS name to IP address resolution.
So it's similar to DNS and it's doing named IP.
Correct. Where DNS, the precursor to DNS was hosts files. So basically you just set up a file and create a host name and an IP address. So your client could look into this host name file and arbitrate it itself. DNS automated that. For WINS, it was lmhost files. How do we get to the summary already? We're at the summary. We've talked about being able to install and configure DHCP. We've learned about Dora, the Explorer, not the fish.
Not the fish.
Not the fish. We've talked about installing and configuring remote desktop services and that really cool poster that you should go get now, Server Poster PDF, and downloading the individual posters. We've talked about routing and remote access, how to use IPsec in your environment, the various protocols that can be used. And we talked about DNS and WINS. And in most environments today, you're not going to use WINS.
Nope,
you're going to use DNS.
In fact, DNS, I'll give a quick summary. DNS has a new feature as of either 2008 or 2008 R2 that allows for the sort of mimicking of WINS functionality to allow for backwards compatibility with systems dependent on WINS so you can remove WINS from your networks. So it's called global names. There's a global name zone. It allows for what's called single instance naming. If you just want to put a name and an IP instead of a name and hierarchy, we mentioned DNS is hierarchical. You have to have name.domain.something. Like I've got server.ctg.local, Christopher.test.network, whatever the case may be. WINS doesn't use that. WINS just uses server or Christopher or Windows 8, whatever the name of that host is. DNS has a mechanism called global names for accommodating WINS requests now.
Oh, and really quick, for more party knowledge, we've been talking about network services. A lot of these network services are IP-based. To learn more about IP-based services, RFCs, requests for comments. Requests for comments are the standards papers that create these utilities. Some are funny. I mean, I've seen some that were kind of written like towards the night before Christmas. So some are kind of humorous, some are odd, and some of them are very, very technical. But they basically define the standard of WINS, DNS, and all the anything TCP/IP related has been defined by an RFC.
Yep. I use RFCs. I use specifically IPv6 RFC to fall asleep if I'm ever unable to. You just start reading about IPv6 in 5 minutes at most.
I like it.
Yeah, those RFCs can be. You said it can be fun. They can also get a little dry, a little bit.
Christopher, additional resources and next steps. It's that time.
All right, one more time. We've got our book, MTA Networking Fundamentals, Microsoft Official Academic Course. We've got our instructor-led courses, 4 different options. One of them is just the course that we're sort of teaching here, but in an instructor-led, peer-present classroom environment where you may get more hands-on experience. And then we've got our exams and certifications, which is usually the intent of these programs. 98-366 Networking Fundamentals, Microsoft Technology Associate Certification. Almost forgot what we're teaching here today.
And then also a link for the remote desktop poster that I showed. If you want to go to the download center, www.microsoft.com/download, you can look up these component posters: Windows Server, Hyper-V, SharePoint.
Let's do a search for poster. Works really well, actually.
Yes, yeah, and it's a really great way to visually represent the information a little bit differently.
Yep.
So you can kind of see architecture information and how things fit together a little bit better.
Yep. It's a good tool. I guess we'll be back for more in a little while.
We're at that back slide.
Yeah.
Again, I'm torn. I'm happy that we've covered some great information. I'm a little sad it's over.
I feel like maybe you get a little emotionally invested.
I do. I want these people to have good information, and we're done.
That's why I make the video. It's what's the word I'm looking for? I can't think of the word. Posterity. We're recording this for posterity.
Yeah.
You can even come watch yourself anytime you want.
I might. Talking about putting ourselves to sleep.
Oh, I certainly hope not.
So, MTA, networking fundamentals, networking services. I think that about wraps it up.
For now, yeah.
Yep. Welcome back. I'm Thomas Willingham. We're here with Christopher Chapman.
Hi again.
Networking fundamentals.
I like that. Getting the hand in just the right place.
We're here to talk about understanding wide area networks.
Awesome.
So we've talked about TCP/IP, we've talked about OSI, we've talked about standards allowing devices to intercommunicate. Now we're going to talk about wide area networks, or basically expanding the reach and capability of our network. Our objectives include understanding routing. So routing is going from one network to another, and defining common WAN technologies and connections. Warning, this module has a lot of text in it, a lot of concepts, not as much fun graphics. Christopher's managed to throw in some fun graphics.
I got a couple.
But we're just going to talk about some fun foundational technologies, kind of overview them a little bit. So the first thing that we need to talk about is routing. Routing is a process of managing the flow of data from one network segment to another between hosts, devices, and routers. Data is sent along a path according to the networks, the IP addresses, and the IP addresses of the hosts. So think about it is where you have a map in front of you, you're at your starting point, you're trying to get to your destination, and there might be multiple methods or roads to get to your destination. How do you decide how you're going to get to your destination? You may pick traffic patterns. Okay, so I know on this road that traffic's going to be pretty heavy. I know that this road isn't as good. So I have one road with heavy traffic. I have another road that maybe it's not a decent road, so I don't like to use it. So there's two routes I am less likely to use than, say, a third or a fourth. Routing over the internet has similar ideas behind it. How many hops or how many routers have to be crossed to get to my destination? How fast is that line? How much degradation is there? These are issues that can be taken into account when it comes to routing. So the router is the device that maintains this information. And if we look at the graphic here, you'll see we have the fancy graphic that Christopher's done for us. We have multiple methods to get from our client to our server. So the client sends out a packet, it hits the first router. The router then evaluates from what it knows, its table of information, its router table, what is the best path to send it to. So it decides, okay, I'm going to send it this direction. This router then makes its decision. I'm sending it that way. The final router says, oh, okay, well, I'll send it to the destination.
What would help us determine, what would help a router determine which route to take? Because that diagram has a number of options on it. There are different routes that packet can take to get from A to B. So how do those routers know?
Well, and that goes back to the map analogy of trying to figure out a destination. There could be line degradation. A router port may be off. So possibly notice that the client went from the first router, and from the first router it went up instead of across. Across this line, maybe this line was down. Or maybe there's signal degradation, so it's causing problems conveying information across that. So that there hops, maybe the router's off, signal degradation. Those are all issues that could cause something to be rerouted.
Okay. That's something I can set manually if I want to?
You can. There is, and that's actually the next slide, static and dynamic routing.
Okay.
So with static routing, you basically configure a consistent path that's always taken. I'm always going to go from point A to point B to point C to get to point D. Dynamic routing dynamically configures the path that's going to be taken. So a static route, you have to go in and manually configure the route that's going to be taken between all the devices. The dynamic route, like I said, is configured, again, automatically. using protocols that the routers use to communicate with each other and communicate these routes. So if we look at the graphic, we'll see that this is a static configuration. So for each of these setups, these routers have manually been told. The first router was told, hey, if the client is going to that server, this is the route I want you to take. Versus dynamic, here we have a dynamic setup. Notice that it might take different routes depending on, let's show that one more time. It might take different routes depending on signal degradation, overload. Maybe a lot of bandwidth is being taken on that, so you're not getting good response from that. So different routes can be taken.
Yep.
So dynamic routing. Dynamic routing has two conceptual parts to it. A routing protocol used to convey information about the network, and then an algorithm to determine what's the best path. And that algorithm is the road bad? Is the road overloaded? Is there bandwidth? That goes back to the traffic analogy.
Is there a road?
Yeah, is there a road? Maybe the road's closed. Common dynamic routing protocols, distance vector routing protocols. Distance vector is made up of 2 points, or 2 components. One, the number of hops to a network destination. This is the distance. And the direction a packet can reach a network, or the direction a packet takes to reach a network destination, which is the vector. So this is the distance vector protocol, routing protocol. Updates are sent at regularly scheduled intervals, and can take time for route to change or route changes to be updated. Link state routing protocols, updates are only sent when a route has changed. So this allows for routes where as a router goes down or as a network component goes down, when one of those events happens, then it sends out information. Versus the distance vector routing protocol and RIP, routing information protocol, is an example of distance vector.
Which we're gonna cover in a few minutes.
Which we're gonna cover. One of the issues with RIP is it's referred to as a chatty protocol. And it's called chatty because it sends out a lot of information frequently. So with RIP, it updates on a schedule. So it basically says, hey, I have a table, here's all the routes and networks I know about, and I'm just going to send it to everybody I know. The problem with that is as states change, that may be outside of an update interval, so it may take a while for changes to get propagated on the network. So route updates may take a while. Versus link state, and an example of link state is open shortest path first, OSPF. Link state, hey, when I have an update, this route has changed, I'm going to send an update. If the network's static and there's no changes, I'm not going to send any updates.
No need to be chatty.
Exactly. Or I'm only going to talk when there's a need to say something.
Yeah.
Interior gateway protocols. Interior gateway protocols are routing protocols that enable elements that comprise an autonomous system, AS, to exchange routing information. What does that mean? Well, for very large networks, it can ease routing to divide the network into smaller entities known as autonomous systems, or AS. IGPs, or interior gateway protocols, are routing protocols that exchange information within the autonomous system. RIP and OSPF are examples of IGPs. So notice here we have an AS, an autonomous system, and RIP or OSPF could be used within the system to keep the routers up to date about the paths. So here we have 2 separate autonomous systems. RIP and OSPF could be used in either one.
But they're not talking to each other.
No, they're not talking to each other, at least not with interior gateway protocols. They're not. RIP, Routing Information Protocol. It's a distance vector protocol, so basically deals with distance and I've totally blanked out on
Direction,
the word. There we
so
go.
to speak.
Distance and direction. Good. Thank you. That enables the exchange of IP routing information. The direction or interface is that packets should be forwarded to is calculated, as well as the distance. Each router maintains its own database of the number of hops to a network destination and the direction, so the distance vector. The nice thing about RIP is it's easy to implement. Typically, most routers, you can implement this by default, as a pretty large install base. One of the issues that we talked about is the fact that updates are sent periodically, so it's chatty. Open Shortest Path First, OSPF, is a link state protocol, and it monitors the network for routers that basically have changed their link state. A link is degraded, a port has been shut off, a route's no longer available. Once that information hits, then I'm going to send an update. The routers maintain a database of router advertisements called link state advertisement, LSAs. An LSA consists of router, attached networks, their configured costs, and a cost could be number of hops, a direction, or maybe even a path. Maybe within your network, a specific path is a line that costs more to use than other lines do, so I'll use that line less frequently. And then finally, updates are sent when a route is actually updated. So we've talked about interior gateway protocols that allow communication within an autonomous system. Now we're going to talk about exterior gateway protocols that allow communications between autonomous systems. So exterior gateway protocols, border gateway protocol is an example of an EGP that enables autonomous systems to exchange routing information. BGP is used to enable routing on the internet. So basically we see these two separate autonomous systems that may use RIP or OSPF, it doesn't matter which, but they, before exterior gateway protocols, were unable to communicate with each other. Now with the exterior gateway protocol, bam, look at that. We have communication between the two of them. So now a device from one AS can get to a device on the other AS.
Absolutely. And it's all automatic. In theory, the whole practice behind these protocols, as we've talked about, as opposed to static, is you don't have to worry about it. You configure the routers initially, and you walk away.
And one issue that can happen, that can cause problems, is a router gets bad information. And so now all of a sudden a segment becomes unreachable. I have this network segment, I have devices on the segment, I can no longer reach that segment because the information about accessing that segment is bad.
Yep.
And that's an issue that people who manage routers have to deal with.
Possible.
So it's demo time. So now we're gonna, the royal we, meaning Christopher,
Royal we.
is going to configure an RRAS server and verify RIP.
I am. So we'd installed routing remote access in the last module. I believe the last module. And we kind of left off with that installing. It was actually in process. And that's now done. We still have our DHCP config, that's it. We can now open up routing remote access through our tools menu in Server Manager and take a look at this console. And we'll look at how RIP is implemented once it comes up. There we go. So one of the first things you have to do with routing remote access is configure it. I'm not going to go greatly into depth on this. It's not set up in an environment that we could actually demonstrate routing, and that would take more time than we have here. But we will run through configuration real quick. I'm going to configure this as a router. It gives me options right away. In fact, we're going to see a demo later on of a custom configuration. For now, we want to do secure connection between two private networks. Command dial connections, no. And that's it. Really all we're doing is we're telling the console what options we want to be available to us. This isn't configuring routing remote access with the options we need to actually implement this. What it's doing is giving me the tools. It's customizing the console. Starts, finishes, hopefully it doesn't disconnect me, which is always a possibility. that's up and running. So we now have routing and remote access installed and running. I have network interfaces at my discretion, so to speak. Ethernet, internal, and loopback. I have static routes. I can create static routes.
So this is where you would manually configure a route from point A to point B.
Yep, I've essentially turned this server into a router. I really right now wouldn't work very well because it's only a single network interface that's connected externally. I'd have to add additional network interfaces and then using static routing, connect those interfaces to the networks, let the server know to what it's connected, and that's how it would work. There are a number of different options. General, IP4 router, IP6 router. And the remote access server, this is what's pre-configured by that option wizard when it says, do you want to do VPN? Do you want to do point-to-point? These are the checkboxes that are checked and unchecked. I could turn this off and just do LAN routing only. We're not going to do demand dial. And then, that's all I need to worry about here. Yes. So it does the restarts. This is one of the tools that I like because Microsoft built restarts into it. I don't have to make a configuration change and then go in and restart the service, come back to it. And again, I can't configure static routes because I don't have that option. With only one network interface, we can't actually route anything. But yeah, this is where I would set that up. That's the easy part.
Okay. And then we would install and configure RRAS to basically implement wide area networking.
Well, I could use this for both. I don't know if we can get that slide at the last slide with the big diagram on it. I could use this for both the autonomous systems. I could create a router out of a Windows server within an autonomous system, or I could create that border router, so to speak, to connect to another autonomous system. Routing and remote access supports these protocols and can use them in either way, so we can use it for either role.
Great. Okay, so we've demoed routing and remote access. Next, let's talk about wide area networking. Wide area networks connect multiple local area networks together. Local area networks could include, say, a home, an office, a school, a building, a manufacturing plant, and then wide area networks connect these systems together. They allow networks to function without concern to location. WAN technologies can include packet switching. Devices transport packets via shared links. Leased line, dedicated point-to-point connection. Circuit switching, dedicated circuit path is created between endpoints, for example, dial-up. And cell relay, similar to packet switching, but uses a fixed packet length. So packet switching. Wide area networks utilize some type of packet switching technology. Services include X.25 and frame relay. Before packet switching, direct dial-up connections were used. X.25. Communications protocol was one of the first implementations of packet switching. You had data terminal equipment, DTEs, or a network device, connected to data communications equipment, DCEs, a modem, enabling communications to the X.25 network. So you see in the graphic, the DTE, the computer, connected to the DCE modem that connects to the X.25 network. Dummy terminals can also connect to the X.25 network using packet assembler, deassembler pads, which connect to the DCE. Virtual circuits. So telecommunication companies have thousands of shared circuits connections from which to select a path. These are known as a circuit set. The chances of an entire message taking the same circuit are slim. And when I say message, I don't mean one single frame. I mean, I'm sending a document. This document going down through the OSI model has been broken up into data and messages into individual postcards, and it's unlikely that those postcards will all take the same route. Remember, part of fragmentation of those packets also includes numbering. So as I get those, I can reassemble number. Depending on what protocol, I can look and say, hey, I'm missing 5. So I can respond and say, hey, I missed packet 5, please resend. And then this data transmission system is basically the core of core technology for the internet in most local area networks. So next we have hops. Hops are the number of routers that are crossed to get from source to destination. These stops, known as hops, as data is put on the X.25 network, they go through PSEs, packet switch exchange. There we go. I was missing the E. So packet switch exchange, basically like routers in the X.25 network. They go through the packet switching exchange network and get to their destination. Again, packet switch network, and a hop being how many times it has to cross a PSE to get from source to destination. X.25 advantages. If data fails, X.25 can recover and send it again. It allows shared access among multiple users on the LAN. So just think of as we were showing graphics earlier, a network, there's multiple paths to get from the source to the destination. X.25 has the ability to route between different paths. X.25 has full error and flow control, protection from intermediate link failure. Pricing is per shared packet set, not per link, so per data. And the X.25 synchronous digital transmission, so there's less overhead per file. Frame relay is an advancement on X.25 packet switching. Standardized wide area network protocol using a form of packet switching designed for faster connections. So now we're basically picking up the speed. Also uses a virtual circuit, one that's a bit more advanced. Frame relay created the virtual network that resides in the cloud. Permanent virtual circuits. It's a virtual circuit established for repeated use. Frame relay enables multiple sessions to be run simultaneously on the same link. Connections to the cloud are known as permanent logical links or permanent virtual circuits. The PVC links the site together in the cloud, accomplished by using packet switching exchange. Again, we're back to the packet switching exchange. Leased lines. This is fancy terminology for the fact that you bought a connection from a provider. So a client or a customer receives or purchases a connection from a provider. This connection contract is referred to as a leased line. Frame relay service must be purchased from an internet service or telecommunication provider. With frame relay, you must commit to a certain amount of information over time. This CIR, committed information rate, services the organization's account. But because the transmission is full duplex, there can be 2 CIRs for each PVC.
Lots of active pulse initialism all of a sudden.
Yes.
This is the fun part of networking fundamentals. You can learn all of the exciting topics all at one time.
And again, it's not important to like memorize all this stuff. It's important to understand foundational technologies. So as you're talking to other network administrators, they bring something up. You're like, oh, okay, I remember something like that. I may need to implement something like that on mine. So I know what direction to research.
And a lot of these technologies, one of the issues we're dealing with in building this course and teaching this course and other courses related to network fundamentals, not all the technologies we're going to teach you are current or modern or being implemented today. A lot of them may still be in use. That doesn't mean that they're currently being implemented. There are a lot of enterprises saying, hey, we need one of these right now, so let's get it implemented. But it's something you may come across. And unfortunately for this module, a lot of the technologies we're talking about are they're wide area technologies. They're not something we can really do demos. So it tends to be a little bit more bullets and PowerPoints and just kind of happens.
A little more talking.
A little bit more.
Hopefully we're entertaining enough.
Just talking.
Yes.
We do lots of talking. We can do that all day.
Yes.
Yeah.
Hopefully we're entertaining enough that people still are able to gain information. Hope so. T-carrier overview. Additional wide area network technologies. Telecommunications carrier system for cabling and interface system designed to carry data at high speeds. The basic transfer rate of T-carrier systems is 64 kilobit per second, known as DS0, and they have different T-carrier designations. DS1 is the digital signaling scheme for the T1 carrier.
T1 might be something that people have heard of.
People have probably heard of T1s, T3s. This is terminology we're still using that people should be familiar with. Okay. In North America, let's make that caveat that T systems are North American based. If you look at the graphic that we have here, you see the different levels of T carriers. The channels used, North America, Japan, Europe. Just notice that they're broken out a little bit different. And this is nothing you have to memorize, but it's a good idea to understand kind of how these work. Level 1, T1 is 24 user channels. The interesting thing is 24 times 64 does not equal 1544. There's a little bit of an overhead, and the overhead is basically for the channel overhead managing these 24 user channels. Notice that for the T1 system, Japan and Europe are pretty much equivalent. But then when we get to T3s and T4s, the number of user channels bundled is a little bit different. The US, North America, uses for a T3 672 user channels for almost 45 megabit per second. Japan, on the other hand, only uses 480
my house.
for 32 megabits per second, and then Europe 512.
One T3 homes. Are those expensive?
I don't know. I haven't had to price that kind of stuff in so long.
They're probably actually getting more expensive because competing technologies are so much cheaper that people stop using them, and the technology becomes rare enough that, as opposed to getting cheaper because of demand waning and trying to sell it, they just becomes more and more obscure.
It's kind of interesting because it's interesting to note that sometimes older technologies become more expensive.
Yep.
Because as less people use them, they become scarcer, and because they're scarcer, it's a little more expensive. So another older technology, or technology that's been around for a while, is ISDN, Integrated Services Digital Line. The interesting thing about this is it allowed faster communication speed than an analog telephone line, and it bundled it's a communication standards that bundled bundled in a digital manner data, fax, voice, and video. So it bundled multiple systems. ISDN can be broken down into two major categories: basic rate ISDN and primary rate ISDN. The speeds are a little bit different, so what they can handle, the throughput that they handle, is a bit different. ATM, asynchronous transfer mode, cell-based switching technology as opposed to packet switching. ATM is a high-speed networking technology used to transmit data in cells of a fixed length, containing 53 bytes of information. It's a native connection-oriented protocol comprised of a number of related technologies for software, hardware, and connection-oriented matter. SONET. Okay, so now we're starting to get into, say, fiber optic. Synchronous optical networking, standardized protocol allowing for the transmission of signals over optical fiber in North America. So for Europe, synchronous digital hierarchy, SDH, is their standard. The nice thing about SONET is this represents a transport vehicle supporting data rates in the gigabit range. It standardized optical interfaces, networking management, and testing methods. Before SONET, companies were releasing their own hardware, their own specs that weren't compatible with other manufacturers. So if you started to buy fiber optics from one company, you were kind of locked into those, because if you bought fiber from another company, it may or may not be compatible. SONET was what basically standardized the system for fiber optic. SONET signal hierarchy, so this shows you the rates here, the level, the line rate, the channels. FDDI, Fiber Distributed Data Interface, standard for transmitting data on a fiber optic cable at a rate of around 100 megabits per second. Supports transmission distances beyond 50 miles. And when this first came out, this was amazing. People were like jumping up and down and really, really excited. Okay, I was jumping up and down and really, really excited.
Some people.
Well, I was all, woo, fiber optic, it's awesome.
This was right after we had port number quizzes.
Yes, yeah. Then initially with fiber optic, you took your fiber optic cable, which is actually two cables bundled together. One is a send, one is a receive. You had to do the connection manually. You had to create that connection and pwn and buff and do all that stuff manually. Wasn't a real exciting thing to do. It was
Not the funnest experience?
No, not fun at all. It was interesting. It was a great learning experience, but it was one of those, after you did it 2 or 3 times, you felt okay, never having to do it again.
There are a couple things like that in network fundamentals.
FDDI is a basically protocol used for backbones networks. And when I say backbones, there's cabling to devices, to individual devices, that typically runs data or runs information between that client and that server. But then you have areas of your network that carry data for large amounts of devices. And so these are referred to as more backbones. So servers, you may have your server on a backbone for high-speed communication between your servers. You may have a backbone between your servers and client switches, and then your clients go out using Ethernet. And then remember we discussed this was a previous module, fiber versus Ethernet. Although fiber's a lot faster, why don't I just use fiber everywhere?
Fiber's expensive and hard to work with.
True. So there's trade-offs with whatever technology you use. You hear of a new technology and you're like, oh, well, maybe I should make my whole network that. But there's the trade-offs.
Then you get online, you find someone to help you quote it out, and they come and take a look, and they give you the quote. And you say, maybe we shouldn't.
Yes.
Make our whole network that.
DSL. So you had mentioned that there are some newer technologies that are coming online that are making the older technologies a little less likely and a little less used. DSL is one of those, digital subscriber line. Span-lane technology is providing data transmission over local telephone networks. Allows for voice and data to be run over the same line. DSL uses higher frequency bands to transmit data. A couple types of DSL. XDSL is a standard for just the various digital subscriber lines. Asymmetric digital subscriber lines. This is typical. This is what most people have. The upload and download speeds are different. They're asymmetrical. SDSL, symmetric digital subscriber line, upload and download speeds are the same or symmetrical. This is atypical of safe for home.
Yeah, most home DSL is going to be ADSL. Most of the subscribers out there that you'd see ads for on TV that, internet for $29.95 a month. Then you don't read the fine print that says for the first month, and then it goes up to $89.95.
Correct.
But it's usually asymmetric digital subscriber line, ADSL.
Yeah, and your download speed may be, say, 15 megabit per second, and then maybe your upload speed is like 4 megabit per second. So there's a disparity between the download speed and the upload speed.
Yep.
And then depending on what you're doing, that may not matter. I mean, if you are a consumer, so you consume information off the internet, so you're looking at web pages, watching videos, looking at documents, you're less concerned with upload speeds.
And most people are consumers. That's why they have those. The asynchronous allows them to actually provide the service cheaper, so that the majority of people who are consumers can get that service for a little bit less cost.
But then if you're a content provider, a business that's uploading content, YouTube, they're showing videos, then you need a more synchronous.
Yep. It's not so much that they need to be in sync, it's just you need more outgoing bandwidth. So you're going to pay more to get that upload speed up to where your download speed is just for that functionality independently.
Correct. So DSL, there's also broadband cable. So DSL is over phone lines. Broadband cable, those are your cable providers. So now you have the ability to have internet and cable television using the cable television network. So previously, we've talked about digital lines versus now I'm blanking out on the word again. Analog, thank you. Digital clock, it's one discrete thing to the next discrete thing. Analog, I thought of another great example for analog, a golf swing. A golf swing, as you swing back, so see, there's something for everybody here.
There can be.
So I'm throwing something out for golfers. So now, you may be a golfer. Golfer swing is analog. As you bring that back and then swing the club, I have stuff in front of me, so that was by no means to be a demonstration of a decent swing. As you come back and hit, that club can be any of a range of motion, versus a digital clock is a discrete time until the next discrete time. So those are good examples of analog versus digital. In an analog system, you can use any of that area, so you can basically use different frequencies to create different channels, to create different signals, broadband cable. So you can have television running at one frequency, you can have your cable running at another frequency, and then you have different boxes that split these frequencies out. We're going old school now. So earlier I talked about
I know exactly.
a telephone.
It's when you say that, I already know what the next slide is. I don't even see it, I don't have it in front of me. So he says we're on old school, I know exactly what he's talking about.
POTS and PSTN. Plain old telephone system and public switch telephone network. This is your regular phone lines, been around since the 1940s. Now digital at the switching office and some central offices, but there are still analog lines that run into people's homes.
There are a couple of those still out there in the world somewhere, I'm sure.
Yeah, there are people who still have analog phone
With
lines.
phones, like telephones that,
Yeah.
that don't go in your pocket when you leave the house.
Right, right. Yeah, okay, so we're at the summary.
We're always at summer.
Okay, so we're at the summary. I'm not really sad this time. Normally I'm sad we hit the summary. I'm like, oh, we hit the summary. This time I'm not sad. I mean, don't get me wrong. WAN technologies are important. It's important to understand these WAN technologies. Honestly, you don't really use it.
Well, the module's not that exciting. There's some good stuff. There's some good info. There's a lot of us talking.
There were some great graphics.
I couldn't make the great fun graphics I made. No servers saying hi to each other. It's just a lot of info. And yeah, it's older info. So it's important. You want to know it. Have it handy for the cert, for potential employers or for potential opportunities where those technologies are in use. They are good to know and have in use. But not our most exciting.
No, no.
But now you can go to the next one because that one's more exciting.
It is. Well, okay, so actually I take it back. There were a couple exciting components. Static versus dynamic routing and talking about routing. Routing's kind of exciting.
Yes, routing is. Yeah.
It's nothing that you deal with on a day-to-day basis, but just conceptually it's interesting. I find it interesting.
Someone might deal with it. Routing is one of those things. Of all the things in this module, routing is one of the topics that somebody may actually end up doing that. There are administrators who manage routing. That's what they do.
Right, right. We talked about RAS, routing remote access service. That's kind of interesting. Saw a little demo of it. Things and stuff.
Yeah, things and stuff.
Things and
Oh,
stuff.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, good times were had there. Our additional resources and next step slides.
Yep. Once again, the book, 98366 MTA Networking Fundamentals, the Microsoft Official Academic Course. Our 4 instructor-led courses, the bottom one, 40366A, is specifically network fundamentals. The other ones are packets of other courses along with this one, or good accommodating courses go along with this one. And then the exam certification, what you're here to learn for, 98366 Networking Fundamentals, to get your Microsoft Technology Associate certification.
And the end slide.
That's it.
Yeah, so, well, okay, not quite it. What I would say is, if this is the first module that you've watched, watch another one. Don't judge the modules by this one. This one's a little dry. You're laughing. It's not.
No, it's true.
It's true. This one is a lot of talking. It's a lot of standards. As we mentioned, the technologies may be a little bit older. It is important to know them. They are foundational technologies. Watch another one. Yeah, that's all I got to say.
Notebooks. Okay. I got all caught up to the class. Okay. So enjoy, everyone, as we go on to the next chapter of live streaming. The raids. Now let's go with the following, unless you have any suggestions of food to raid. Hmm. Okay, found it. Found the target. Had that load through everything. Then we will be raiding him.
What's up, Kelly? Excited for the party tonight?
Hey, Marcus. That's why I was calling. I
You
can't.
better not be bailing again. What is it this time? Still cat sitting?
No, I can't.
Let me guess. Your goldfish
Here we
is
go.
again, and you can't leave it alone.
No, I can't. Wait to come to your party. I'll come early to help set up. Then maybe you can beat my high score for once. And
Kelly, is that really you?
yep, and I'm already here at your front door.
Seriously?
Yep. Red Bull gives you wings.
Chromebooks are a new way to laptop. They've gotten everything